Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If Guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Dying Issei Married Sona. Now before starting, please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was a calm summer day and would have been considered a perfect day for most except for the fact it was the first day of the school year. As it was still early enough to be before school had started, if you looked around Kyo Academy you could see students still coming in the gate, lounging around under trees or in their classrooms, and a couple of students around an outside table watching a chess game going on. There you are, Issei. We were starting to wonder what had happened to you. Sona Shitori, current vice president of the student council, who was one of the people playing chess and had won all of the chess games, looked up concerned as she felt a wave of power wash over her from the student who had just walked through the gates, one that felt powerful and somehow familiar to her devil senses, now named as Issei, though if people asked she would have said she was worried about the way the shaven head boy had called out as he sounded worried. The one that had called out was a first year with a shaven head that hadn't been done recently, as you could see hair coming back with another boy standing beside him wearing glasses looking at their friend. Guys, I'm fine. I missed the bus, so I had to run here from my house since my bike was stolen last week if you remember, Issei said as he glanced around the school grounds with a calm look on his face. Sona though noticed that his friends still looked worried about him having run to the school, a fact she didn't disagree with. Even though the two were known as massive perverts, they sure were showing a lot of concern for their friend. Also, she couldn't help but notice after a moment that she could feel both a cold and warm power coming off of Issei from her devil senses. You should have called us since your house is so far away. You could have ridden on the back of our bikes, especially after what happened the other day. A small run won't kill me, and even then, I walked most of the way and I thought we agreed to leave that behind when we got accepted here, Issei said, glaring at his friends as they looked down and nodded. So what's going on out here, he asked as he had noticed the chess game going on and loved the game himself. The vice president is challenging anyone who wants a game to play her. She's so good she's sure to even give you a challenge. So far no one has been able to beat her, the glasses-wearing boy told Issei as Sona finished resetting the chessboard, having won the last match while not paying too much attention. She wondered how true those words were, or if Issei had only been boasting to his friends about how good he was, but she was willing to play a game against him if he wanted, and also decided to put the weird feeling of his powers for another day. Looking up as he sat down, she had a feeling in the back of her mind he looked familiar or like someone she knew. Mind a match if that lazy behind says you're good, then you have to be really good, Issei said, taking a quick glance at the rest of the student council except the president behind her. Sure, you're the only first year I haven't played against yet. What side do you prefer? Ladies first, so I'll take whatever side you don't take, he said as she spun the board where he had the white pieces. So, giving me white so you can test the waters and react to any strategy I can come up with. Smart move, Issei said with a smile as he started the game. At least he has good manners, Sona thought as she settled in for what she thought would be just another match, but after 5 minutes of playing she had to give him credit as he was beating her without seemingly having a strategy going, plus wondering what her peerage was thinking at the moment. She only paid a small amount of attention when his shaven-haired friend started talking to him about some anime that was getting a new season. 5 minutes later, and with Issei having promoted all his pawns to rooks, he had her in checkmate and nowhere left to move, so when to stand. Giving up already, one of the few students still sticking around watching the game asked. No, he's got me in checkmate, Sona answered the student. I can't make a move anymore. Not wanting to look back at her peerage, expecting to see a gobsmacked just like everyone else who had seen how talented she was at the game. Having noticed the surprised expressions from everyone around but deciding to leave it be, for now, he commented to Sona before heading inside. Great game, haven't had one that tough in a while. Hit me up again anytime if you want another match. Sona just sat there stunned as she thought of all the implications, not all of them bad, of losing the game brought to her and her new fiancé, even if he didn't know it yet, for she had an agreement with her parents that whoever defeated her in chess would be her fiancé after she had been put in an arranged marriage and got out of it, after defeating him and saying she wouldn't marry someone not smarter than her. Hearing a snickering sound coming from behind her, she turned to see her peerage queen and best friend, Tsubaki, with a goofy grin on her face, and tried to stop her from saying anything, though was too late. I call dibs on telling Serafal about her new brother-in-law. Time skip. Sona, what do I owe the pleasure? Rias Gremory asked her friend, rival, and fellow devil as she walked into the Occult Research Club main room after school. Rias Gremory was the most sought-after girl in the school and was also the daughter of one of the current Mao, or leaders of the devil faction. Sona Sitri to the people in the supernatural, or knows about them at least. Sona Shitori to everyone else, walked in with her queen by her side. She'd been thinking about the first year all day during class and had started making plans in the back of her mind. We promised to keep each other informed if we found any new prospects for our peerages, she said with a pointed stare at her friend, which was ignored with a shrug. It wasn't known to many people, but after the incident with Kaniko's older sister happened, it was Serafal who had rescued her, not Surzech. And she only went to Rias instead of Sona due to Zioticus Gremory, Rias, and Surzech's father, and the current head of the Gremory clan, bribing the council to put her there instead. Even though both Sira and Surzech were pissed, they couldn't do too much without causing another scandal. So they left it be, but the damage had been done to Sona and Ria's friendship and hadn't fully recovered. Plus Serafal gave Sona 2 mutated rook pieces as an apology gift. On to the point I came here for. I've found a potential candidate for my peerage. Oh, good, so have I too actually, Ria said, taking a sip from the tea that her peerage queen, Akino, had made. Issei Hayatu, first year, is who I'm currently looking into, Sona inquired after declining a tea for herself. He's useless, you can have him. I'm actually looking into his 2 perverted friends as I can feel strong ice magic and fire magic coming from the 2 of them, but I can't tell which is what as they're always together. They think the powers are coming from his friends. Tsubaki asked her king using telepathy to talk, something that Serafal had taught Sona's peerage how to use. And as far as she knew, Rias didn't know how to and didn't plan on telling her anytime soon that they could do it, as she knew her friend would pester her to no end to teach her how to do it. We both know ice and fire magic don't mix well together, and even rarer for someone to have both at once. That mix of power would be enough to kill him, Sona replied, stuttering at the end as she realized she had probably figured out what was going on to Issei just now with his illness, and also probably why his friends were so protective. Very well, I'll write those 2 off as yours. When do you plan on telling them? Sona asked as she happened to glance outside and noticed the trio they were talking about nearby, with Issei looking like he was asleep, and it looked to her like his friends were already peeping on the kendo club nearby. When they die, Rias answered as she also looked down at the trio, either missing or ignoring completely the look of complete disdain Sona threw her way at the comment. What about him? Caught your eye to add him to your peerage? Getting up to leave, she answered. I'll be telling Issei next month after judging his character some. As for why he caught my interest, she paused with a smirk, causing Rias to look over at her. He beat me at chess. Leaving with an internal laugh at her friend choking on her drink and gobsmacked face knowing what that meant for Sona. As they left the orc, Tsubaki commented, both Momo and Rhea are in his class and they'll keep an eye out and work on learning his plans for the future, getting a nod from her king as they heard a loud commotion happening nearby. Looking at each other, they headed off to see what was going on and realized that the kendo girls had caught the 2 peeping and had started to chase the duo. Before Sona or Tsubaki could step out or do anything, a couple of the kendo girls had realized there was one more that was originally missed by the peeping hole. Rushing back to Issei's side, his 2 friends tried to stop the girls from doing anything to him since they knew that he had been sleeping, and told the girls as much right as Issei woke up from all the noise going on at the time. Moto, what in the world's going on? He asked as he groggily got up and noticed the girls all around them, most of which were now blushing or squealing out after seeing him up closer. Were you 2 peeping again? I warned you that this would happen. He added as his friends turned around to apologize to the girls right as a powerful attack hit him, causing him to go into a massive coughing fit and scaring everyone around, including Sona and Tsubaki. Don't worry, I'm okay, that one hit me way too quickly to do anything this time, he said as he moved his hand, which everyone saw had on it before Matsuda handed him a rag. Why? Are you okay? Asked Murayama Kaori, one of the first-year kendo girls nearby, who after getting a closer look realized that she knew him from middle school and just hadn't recognized him till now, as she tried to take everything in and was the first one to comment what was on all the girls' minds. I've got a sickness not ever before seen, and no doctors have been able to find a cure for it either. If things keep going as they have been recently, it's been figured I'll die before I can graduate, he commented, causing a look of disbelief and horror to go through all the girls' faces, and also making Sona realize her thoughts on what was going on earlier were pretty much accepted as what was happening now. His 2 powers are causing his body to kill itself while they try to get dominance over each other, she thought, about ready to step in and say something for the first time since this started. You weren't peeking on us with your friends due to the kendo girl who had spoken up earlier started to say before Issei stepped in, seeing how hard it looked like it might be for her to continue. Don't get me wrong, girls, you are all beautiful, but I don't want to get some girls' hopes up with a relationship when I factor in my health and illness and be the cause behind some girl's heart being broken. Plus, I got hit by a massive attack the other day which sent me to the hospital, and I was taking a nap to try and get more of my strength back, causing the girls to nod their head in acknowledgement of his statement even while looking worried for him. While they were wary of what was going on, especially after catching his friends peeping, they couldn't help but be worried for this boy. At this point, Sona and Tsubaki made their presence known to the group, and while Tsubaki stayed back, Sona did step forward and with her comment made all the girls in the kendo club agree with her, while the duo cried, cause thanks to the bra code, all the girls were now off limits. To think you're still able to stand strong and smile in the face of such a cruel fate. You have to be one of the strongest people I've ever met. If anyone gives you trouble, let me know immediately and I'll be sure to sort them out. A month after the fated game of chess, Issei was called to the student council office to discuss something, though he didn't need an invite to come in and out. Over the past month, he had gotten close to everyone in both the student council and the kendo club, and when he wasn't hanging out with the perverted duo, he spent most of it with Momo and Rhea, who were in his class, as well as Kaori Miramea and Yui Kades, the first-year kendo girls who also happened to be in his homeroom. But he spent most of the time with both Sona and Tsubaki, getting to know them to the point where they considered each other best of friends. And after having learned that most of the council wanted to become teachers of some sort, he mentioned to them if he wasn't predicted to die, he wouldn't mind becoming a teacher himself one day. During the last month, it hadn't taken long for the whole student body of Kyo Academy to figure out that Issei had the full support of both the student council and the kendo club, which surprised most people that the kendo girls didn't mind him since he hung out with the perverted duo a lot. If anyone tried to learn what caused the two groups to fully support him, they would only say to ask Issei, as it was a personal matter between them, and he wouldn't give an answer if asked himself. Walking inside, he called out to Sona. "You called for me, Shitori?" he asked, looking around to see all the council in attendance, while also not missing the slight glare that Sona sent his way even if it didn't have much force behind it, which it never did. "I told you long ago to call me by my first name, you've earned that much by now," she said back, knowing that's just how he was after all the time they had spent together, so didn't put too much force behind the words. "Sorry, force of habit. What's up?" Deciding to get right into one of the points of this meeting right off the bat, she started. "What if I told you that devils are real?" she said, watching his face to see an interested look come into it as well as thoughtful, which had her confused till his next words made her eyes widen in shock, which was soon on all the council's faces. "You know about them too? How do you know about them?" came from Issei's and Sona's mouths, respectively. Having her motion for him to go first, he commented, "When I was little, a lady from the church I went to found I had powers and taught me how to do this," pausing his words to both make in his left hand a flower made of ice, and making her blush by handing it to her and a bright red metallic gauntlet on his right. Continuing his story, he commented, "Aunt Grisela, as I knew and called her, taught me everything she could about devils, fallen and normal angels, while also helping me to control my powers as much as she could, as she figured someone from the supernatural world might try and recruit me one day or do any other amount of things and wanted me to have a chance if it came to it. But she had to move away to Italy a few years ago to help with the next batch of exorcists, and I haven't been in touch with her in a while." After his comments about how he knew about the supernatural, she couldn't help but think in the back of her head that she had heard that name before, as well as seen a picture of that gauntlet somewhere. After thinking for a moment, also thinking about the gauntlet and that she had seen it before, she made a mental note to herself to look into it more, as it felt to her like a draconic sacred gear now that she had seen it up close. She nodded her head in acknowledgement of his words, and while commenting and watching his reaction, he cut her off mid-sentence to her chagrin again. "You should know, especially as close as you have become to everyone here, that you're all devils. Yes, I know, I can sense it from everyone here as well as everyone in the Occult Research Club," he said, stopping her next words as he had already felt the signatures coming off them but hadn't worried about it, as nice as everyone had been to him. Surprised by this turn of events, as she had heard there was only a select few who could sense what others were, and she had a question to ask with the latest information she had. "I don't know anyone outside of a few exorcists, angels, and devils that can sense what others are." "What can you sense from me?" she asked, making another mental note. His fire powers made sense considering his draconic in origin, from what she could feel, sacred gear. Now she just had the issue of his ice magic to figure out. Did he have devil's heritage? That was the only way she could figure it out at the moment. Letting his senses out, he took a moment to make sure before he answered her question. "From you I sense mostly water magic, a hint of ice but small. I also sense a commanding presence." Getting a nod from her, moving on to her next point, she idly settled back into her seat, glancing over at her peerage to see how everyone was taking this turn of events that they were learning of their friend. Most of them had a shocked or concerned look on their faces as they thought about what he had said, but she could see the gears grinding in her queen's mind, thinking about what they had learned now and putting it into perspective with the past, probably getting the same ideas she was. As she moved on to her next question, her mind went to the next issue. "What do you know about your family? I'm still confused on how you knew about us being devils." Thinking in her mind, with his ice magic, he could have devil heritage, which would more than likely make him a bastard child, as very few families currently were able to use ice magic. "And with the amount of power that I can feel off him, it must have been at least a high-level devil at that, and I only know 2 families that have ice magic. I honestly can't answer that, as I'm adopted. I heard from my adopted parents that they found me after heading home from a movie one night and saw a strange-looking guy." Pausing here as he realized something and smacked his head. "I'm an idiot. I don't know how I never figured this out before, but they likely saw a devil leave me in a box in an alleyway and they took me in after that." Once again nodding her head, she had one final question to ask before she got to the last point of this meeting. "One final question, Issei. Can you use water magic?" Hoping that the answer would be no. If the answer came back as positive, it meant that there was a high chance of them being half-siblings, as one of her parents likely had him in secret. If it had been her sister Seraphal, she would have learned about it the same time she did, or close to it. Thinking about it for a moment, he replied, "If I really concentrate I can, but it always brings on an attack, so I would say no to water magic. Ice magic comes easily and freely to me, and I have no issues when I want or need to control it for something," he said, noticing that her face seemed less tense after admitting that, and wondered what was going on inside her head now. Nodding her head once again, thinking that one of her fears was unfounded now with those words, but it brought up another issue. With that answer he helped me by letting me know we aren't half-siblings. Not wanting to dive too deep into where that thought led as her thoughts on her feelings for him came up to the forefront of her mind. But that does mean he's likely related to the Lucifuge family, and I can only think of one person that has that heritage. And I sure don't want to dive down that possible rabbit hole right now, she thought, knowing that the person is married to one of the Maus and considered the strongest queen currently. Shaking her head out of that train of thought, she moved on to why she called him here. To get to the final point of the meeting, I called you here to let you know and ask about reviving you as a devil under me. Giving it some thought, as he didn't think he would mind being under her, he could only come up with one reason to say no, and it was enough for him to turn it down for now at least, giving a small smile. I'm sorry, Sona, but I have to turn down the offer. Noticing a stunned look on Sona's face, he had to ask, Sona, is everything okay? Noticing the smile and thoughtful look on his face, she could only think of one thing. He looks just like Grafia when he smiles like that, as well as that thoughtful look. And without realizing it, had a shocked face until he asked if everything was okay. Nodding her head, trying to get over the shock for a minute more, she asked why. He answered with a no. Much as I would love to, I think it would be a great experience if nothing else. I'm afraid with my illness that it would follow me past the reincarnation, and I'd rather not have to deal with it over hundreds, if not thousands of years, as it can get really bad at times. Nodding her head at his words, finding no fault in them, she had one thing left to mention. I can understand that and will agree it's a possibility. I also want to mention that this request won't go away anytime soon, so please keep it in the back of your mind for me. Getting a nod of acknowledgement. Time skip. A year later, after she made the offer, they were back in the student council office playing another game of chess during free time for both of them when another attack hit him hard, making him cough up a decent amount of. Issei, I know this might sound like I'm trying to force you to change your mind, but your attacks have been coming a lot more often and seem sometimes a lot worse too. Are you sure you don't mean to reincarnate you? I do believe it might help some with your illness having a better body. Sona commented as she wiped it from his mouth. Thank you, Sona, and while I do agree with you there might be a chance, I don't feel like risking it. I'd rather not live the long life that a devil has worrying about my illness and causing others to do the same, he said, once again realizing how close the two of them had come over the past year getting to know each other. Most people would probably think they were joined at the hip with how much time they spent together, or calling them a couple. And while neither would mind dating, he didn't want to saddle her with a boyfriend that was dying, along with her duties as student council president. Sadly, acknowledging his fact, she realized she hadn't brought up one question she'd been meaning to ask him. I do understand that, but please, if something happens where you die by anything else that isn't your illness, please allow me to reincarnate you. Please give me that much assurance. While I don't want anything to happen, it's better to be prepared now than lose the chance I might have. She pleaded with him, trying not to cry as she let him lean against her, sighing in contentment as she felt his icy, hot powers wash over her and help ease her aches and pains. After giving it a second's thought, he agreed to that much. If I die by something other than my illness, you have full permission to reincarnate me. While he had heard having a better suited body should help with his powers struggle over dominance over him, her water magic should also help with toning down his fire magic some and help bolster his ice magic some, which would hopefully stop his body from tearing itself apart. Thank you, Issei, for that. You've become more important to me over the last year, and I can't stand the thought of losing you to something other than your illness. The illness I can understand, anything else I can't stand to believe. Her words once again made him realize just how much he had come to adore her over the last year, and if the comments from the other student council were to be believed, she felt the same way towards him. Which she did reciprocate the feelings, but she didn't know how to word them without seeming like she was pressuring him into dating her, which wasn't her style. Rias did enough of that for them both. Speaking of the red-headed devil, something had happened to where she had a grudge against him and had started, along with her club except for the Rook Kaneko, to spread all kinds of rumors that all but the student council and the kendo club and a couple teachers accepted as true. Sona even went to the point of decking another student in the mouth after he had caused Issei to cough up for forcing Sona to spend time with him, which none of the student council knew to be true, and caused Tsubaki to step in when the punch caused a few teeth to come out in defense and state that Sona's sister, being the overprotective person she has had her learn martial arts before attending public school, which was true, as she could defend herself in all sorts of ways before she was 1 in human years, which is 10 in devil years. I'm just sorry I have to keep breaking people's hearts, he commented, not catching both the hurt and confused look Sona had on her face at that comment. Just yesterday I turned down a fallen angel dressed as a girl around my age from another school who asked me to be her boyfriend, and I made her cry after I told her I didn't date anyone due to personal reasons, loving the feeling of leaning against her. Is it wrong? I'm glad you turned her down just like you turn everyone down, she said, surprised that there was 1, a fallen angel in her town, and 2, that she asked him to be her boyfriend, not as mad as she might have been since he was leaning on her, and his magic was helping calm her muscles. You know me, I don't differentiate due to the fact someone isn't human. If you take away the wings and supernatural powers, what does that leave you as? You're just a human, he commented, making her nod her head in acknowledgement of that statement as she felt a new presence make its way into the room by use of a magic circle, and one that she knew all too well. Moving to allow him to lay his head down in her lap, she told him to take a nap and she'd wake him for his next class. Blushing, he complied as he curled up around her, putting his arms around her waist, holding her down unless she wanted to use her strength to get out, which she never would. Thanks, sounds like a plan, he said as she started carting her hand through his hair as he yawned and snuggled his head into her stomach and fell asleep. Waiting until she heard his breathing slow down to show he had fallen asleep, she looked towards where she had felt the new presence show up through a magic circle. It was one that was both welcome and surprising how often she had seen her this week. Hello Pico, it's nice to see you again, even though it's the 4th time this week and it's only Tuesday. Last time. Hey there Pico, nice to see you again, even though I've seen you 4 times this week and it's only Tuesday. This time. Pico Pekoyama was a petite 20-year-old woman who had red eyes and short white hair, and also happened to be carrying what looked like a shinai on her back but which Sona knew was just a katana in disguise. She was a knight under Sona's older sister Serafal and a self-proclaimed guardian for Sona ever since she was born. As soon as she had laid eyes on Sona, she had sworn to protecting her with her life if it ever came to it, and Serafal openly encouraged it, much to Sona's chagrin sometimes, but didn't mind it too much in the long run. Of course, growing up around her sister and peerage was an interesting experience in itself, as protective of her as they were. She knew they meant well, but it didn't change the fact that it could be smothering. Noticing how close Sona was to the boy, who after paying closer attention noticed he was the one that had been putting out the power she'd been sensing near Sona for the past year, and why she had been keeping a closer eye on her lately, she started internally wondering if she should do anything about it. She finally decided against it for the moment after seeing Sona smirking as if she realized what she was thinking. Ever since last year, whenever I would check on you, I would always notice both ice and fire magic near you but never could determine who it was, and I've been worried they might try something. But now, she said with a light smirk on her face, looking at how close they were again, I see you and the boy I was looking for cuddling on the couch together as I check on you. Deciding to ignore it for the moment, she took a second to get her thoughts together where it wouldn't cause any issues hopefully down the line. Issei and I have become close friends over the last year, and I would say both him and Tsubaki Tai is my best friend of all time. Even though he denied my request to reincarnate him last year, we've become inseparable most of the time we're together. Also, you can ask any of my peerage members and they will agree with me that we've become very protective of him, she said, still carting her hand through his hair, feeling relaxed as his magic did its work on her aching muscles. After rolling the words around her head, she only nodded in response, but paused as she realized something else. Okay, I'm with you so far, but I just realized that he reminds me of Grafia now that I'm closer and can feel his magic better, she replied, stunned at the last point. Could he be? She wondered. While she only looked to be in her 20s, Pico was actually in her 40s and had been reincarnated into Serafal's peerage not long before Sona was born, so had been around for a while, but had changed her appearance to be able to fit in better around the academy whenever she came to check in on Sona and could feel a subtle presence she recognized in him. But she put it aside for the moment with Sona's next words. Sona sighed as Pico pretty much put the nail on the head of her thoughts. He's partial devil, at least from what I can tell, but I've wondered that myself, as sometimes he reminds me of Grafia when he smiles or concentrates on something. I remember her smile when I used to hang out with Riaz all the time. Plus, he does try to keep people at arm's length, but one could say that's partially due to his illness. Sighing once more as she made a decision she'd been pushing off for a while, she asked Pico to do a favor for her. Can you go and ask Grafia to come by for an important matter for me, she asked, getting a nod. If she asks why, let her know I've found a student a year behind me with ice magic that is tearing his body apart fighting against his draconic sacred gear. While thinking in her mind, Pico had the same thoughts as I do with only seeing him once, and with the fact I can't find anything else out without help, this could also be a good chance to possibly get some closure for everyone on his birth parents. Nodding her head in acceptance, Pico just had a couple more questions which were lingering in her mind. I can do that for you, but what would you like me to say if Grafia asks why her? I can also guarantee to you that she will try and discern why he is so important to you, she said, letting her words hang in the air as she prepared to make the jump to the Gremory mansion to find Grafia. Unlike Serafal and I, he has little to no water magic, all ice. I asked him once about it and he said that if he did try to use water magic it would always cause an attack, so stays away from it. Getting a nod from Pico as that made sense. While Sis has ice magic, hers came from training her water magic to where she could use ice magic, and Grafia is all ice magic. Making Pico nod again as it made more sense now than when she asked the question why Grafia would be the better person to ask. Stepping back to a corner to hide her magic circle, she asked one more question, looking up at Sona. And why he's so important to you? But when Sona answered the question it caused her to fall back in shock and land on her ass when she reached her destination. He beat me at chess. Sona happened to notice it though and smirked at her protector, falling back in response to her answer. She hadn't told anyone in the supernatural world that wasn't a part of QO in some way or other of her connection to Issei, partially due to how they would react, but she still found it funny to see. Returning back to Pico, we see her dusting herself off as her king, as well as the other two occupants of the room. Serzeps Lucifer and his wife Grafia looked up at the teleportation. Serzeps and Serafal had been joking around and just having fun, while Grafia looked annoyed at the two of them not doing any actual work when they noticed her pop up in the room and were all surprised to see her on her ass. Pico, is everything alright? I've never seen you fall on your ass unless you were in combat, she started before her Siskin tendencies kicked in with another question due to where she had been. You weren't in combat, were you? She asked, worried. Smirking at her reaction, Sirzex had to throw a jab at her. Siskin, getting a smirk from Pico, a glare from Serafal, and a roll of the eyes from his wife. That's hilarious coming from the Siskin king. At least Sona doesn't mind it if it's just us as much as when there are strangers around. Sira smirked, getting him back, and he couldn't refute it as Rias had gotten to where she couldn't stand it at all no matter who was around. Coughing to get everyone's attention back to her and why she had come back, Pico said, Sona is fine, but she did ask me to run an errand and ask for your help, she said, turning to Grafia with the last bit making the three raise an eyebrow at that. Is everything okay? Grafia asked, going through her head why the Citri heiress had requested her help out of everyone, getting the same reaction in varying degrees from Sira and Sirzex. Grafia's title of strongest queen was not one to be taken lightly, and for someone, especially someone in a position like Sona was in, to request her normally meant there was a major issue not yet known. Realizing her possible error at wording, Pico quickly stepped in, stating, No, everything is fine at the school. Everyone here knows I would never leave if it wasn't, getting a nod of confirmation from them as well as seemingly calming them down. Sona requested me to come get you due to the fact she has found a student at the school, a boy named Issei who is a year behind her that has both ice and fire magic, which from what I can feel of the fire is most likely a draconic in nature sacred gear that is tearing his body apart as they fight each other for control. Noticing the shocked looks on their faces, she continued. From what I've heard when I check in on Sona, the attacks are strong enough for it to come out when they hit, and the doctors give him less than a year of life left before it kills him. While shocked, all three could agree that it was a terrible situation for someone to be in, but were also wondering how he could have two opposing magic elements, which was unheard of. Serafal, though, couldn't help but notice that Sona hadn't asked for her help, considering that she had ice magic too and could have done something possibly about it. If he has ice magic, why would Sona not ask for me? She knows I have ice magic too. Making Sirzex and Grafia nod their heads at the valid question. I had wondered the same question when Sona asked me to make the trip and asked it of her. From what she said, the boy has little to no water magic, all ice. She asked him once and he said that if he tried to use water magic it would cause an attack, so he did his best to stay away from it, getting a nod from everyone at that point. With that fact in place, she felt that with Grafia's natural affinity to ice magic, she would be the better person to ask for help in this situation, since he does already have some training in using his magic before he met Sona. Getting another nod from the three, as they all agreed now that it would make more sense for Grafia to help the boy out. But only Sirzex thought he heard something in her voice, that there was more behind it that wasn't being said for a reason, but decided to put it aside for the moment till after they met the boy. Nodding her head in acceptance to what Pico had told them, Grafia just had one more question. Okay, I can see and agree with why she would ask me now for help. The only question I have now is, why is the boy so important to her? She asked before quickly catching what looked like a grimace coming from the night and wondering what else was being held back, even if not intentionally. Trying to stop a grimace from showing up on her face, but not being fully able to, she looked over at her king before commenting, knowing how she would react, and knew she should give some history. Last year she brought up the request to him to reincarnate him into her peerage, but he turned her down, not wanting to risk having to deal with his illness, which we now know is his magic working against him, getting a nod from everyone at that, causing issues for him the rest of his life as long as Devil's live. But he did agree that she could reincarnate him if he died by any other means except his illness, and they've kept a very close friendship since then. From what I hear, the whole student council is very protective of him, and even the kendo club is the same. And Sona even once knocked some teeth out of a kid's mouth after the boy hit him, having to pause at this point as Sira let out one of her well-known phrases, "That's my Sona for you," before Sira realized another thing, that was that it seemed Pico was keeping information back. It also seems like the boy has won against her in chess, having to pause after each word as she could feel her king's power rising at the words spoken before it all came out in a burst of massive power, and she screamed, what, bringing in the rest of her and Sirzex's peerage from the hall outside. Serafal, what happened? Her queen, Mukuru Ikusaba, asked, along with one of her bishops, Ibuki Myoto, as they rushed into the room looking around but seeing nothing different from when they were last in the office besides Pico being back, and everyone else that had been in here looking shocked. Rushing over to Ibuki and throwing her arms around her, something the woman had grown used to by now, she cried out, I just learned that Sona got engaged to a boy from her school. Making everyone that had just come into the room shocked, as well as thinking they understood the looks on those that were in the room from the beginning besides Pico, who must have just brought the news over. Say what now? One of Serafal's pawns, Behemoth, asked, looking not as surprised as everyone else but still a little shocked knowing how good Sona was at chess. A student beat Sona at chess who also happens to have both ice magic and a fire-type sacred gear. Pico commented for Sira, who was still crying. Coming out of her shock the quickest, Mukuru had only one thing to comment, which made Pico face palm. Looks like we'll be making a trip soon to the academy, with a look on her face that, depending on how it went, wouldn't end well for the boy. Stepping and trying to calm things down some, Pico had only one thought, am I the only sane one in this room? Saying out loud she could only sigh, please remember she's trying to keep the boy alive, not have him killed by her sister's peerage. Nodding his head at Pico's words, Sirzex just had one thing left to comment, which earned him a flick on his forehead by Grafia. While that may be true, it's not easy for someone to win against anyone in the Citri family in a game of chess. I think I'll go with you since it seems like Grafia will help the boy. Isn't that right, honey? Wrapping an arm around her before getting the flick to his head by her. I told you I didn't like being called that while on duty, she commented, getting a sorry in return from him. Sighing at her husband's usual antics, Grafia made a magical circle appear underneath everyone while commenting, "Shall we go and meet Sona's new fiancé?" Getting a nod from everyone present, she teleported them all to the Occult Research Club, which was empty at this time of day due to classes still going on and was the safest place to teleport to at the school. Looking over to Pico, who knew where the two were last, she asked her to lead the way. Nodding her head, she led them off towards the student council office. When I left them, they were both in the student council office as they have a free period currently, getting a nod of acknowledgement from everyone. Once the group reached the office, they were greeted with the sight of Sona's peerage standing outside the door, looking in at whatever was going on, squealing and looking pleased while Tsubaki was taking pictures and snickering. Confused with the sight and curious as to what was going on, Surzech stepped forward and startled the girls. "What's going on here?" After calming her heart down as she hadn't realized anyone was behind them, Momo Hanakai, one of Sona's bishops, commented, "Sorry to block your way, sir, but it's just too cute," as the girls moved out of the way for the adults to see inside. "What is Surzech?" asked as the adults looked into the office. Sona had fallen asleep sometime after Pico had left, with Issei laying down on top of her with his face buried in her chest and arms wrapped around her holding her in place, while she was spread out on the couch with her head on one of the armrests. One arm in his hair like she had been carding it before she fell asleep, and the other over the armrest barely holding onto a pen, which made it look like she had tried to get some work done. But the adults could understand why she fell asleep after feeling the warm and cold magic flowing off of him. It had to feel like a massive icy hot pack for her, and it would help ease her muscles considering how tense being the student council president could be. Seeing how her king was about to possibly do something stupid, Pico went to her side and held her back while sending a look to Ibuki to put a hand over Serafal's mouth to cover anything she might do, which could be anything from squealing out loud to running and jumping onto Sona as the peerage had seen before. But it was Surzech's and Grafia's reactions that had everyone confused. Frozen where they stood, they were looking at Issei with shocked faces as they realized he looked just like Grafia in his facial shape, but also looked like Surzech with his hair, but was more colored like Surzech's mother's hair. The biggest shock, though, was how familiar his magic felt to them and seemed to be calling out to them in response to how close they were. They couldn't see his eyes, but with the magic calling out to them as well as the amount of power it had Grafia falling back in shock before getting caught by her husband and scaring everyone else. Stuttering a couple times before finally getting the word out she wanted, Grafia finally said one thing while still holding on to her husband while also starting to shed tears. Takumi, as well as the same thing starting to happen to Surzech. "Grafia, are you okay?" Tsubaki asked her as she looked over, becoming worried at what she saw when she looked at her and Surzech, while Pico had a look on her face like she came to a realization just now. "I had that thought earlier when I first saw him. He might be the abducted kid of Grafia's, but I wasn't sure. I'm glad I was right," while Serafal and her peerage looked stunned at what that meant. "That boy, we named him Takumi." Surprising Sona's peerage as Surzech and Grafia had another son besides Milika's and they had never heard of it. Serafal had come to the realization pretty quickly of what Grafia was talking about due to what had happened in the past. "Takumi, isn't that the name that you gave?" she started before getting cut off by Surzech as he answered the unspoken question. "He's our oldest son. Last time. He's our oldest son," Surzech said, cutting off Serafal and dropping one massive bombshell on everyone. This time, right before Serafal's comment, Grafia had stumbled into the room, making her way towards Sona and Issei, which caused Sona to wake up and her eyes to flash due to her glasses being crooked. Before she woke up completely and relaxed when she saw who it was before jumping as Surzech said that Issei was their oldest son, waking Issei up right as Grafia pulled him into a hug. Issei, still groggy and not having caught Surzech's words, was jolted awake from Sona jumping only to find himself being pulled into a hug by a sobbing Grafia. "Sona, what's going on? Do you know these people?" he tried asking her, while also trying to get out of the hug, but he was surprised to see her with a stunned expression on her face till her mind caught up to what she'd heard and could speak. "Right after you fell asleep, one of my sister's knights came by to check on me and I sent her to request Grafia here," pointing to the woman currently hugging him, "as I thought she could help with your ice magic and hopefully buy you more time," she stated, fixing her glasses, while thinking in her head, "I had a feeling for a while there was a resemblance between the two, but this goes farther than even I thought it would. I should have done this earlier, but it's too late to worry about now." Tsubaki, just having come back from her own shock, noticed it looked like Sona was still trying to wrap her mind around everything, so stepped in to finish what she had begun to explain. "But as it turns out, these two are your birth parents," Issei, managing to get a shocked and stunned expression from him as Surzech walked up to the three. Blinking his eyes for a moment before her words registered, he woke completely up as the shock got to him. Wait. If these two are my parents, why are they so happy to see me?" "Shocking everyone. I mean, my adopted parents found me after a devil left me in an alleyway," he said, causing Grafia to start sobbing, Surzech's eyes to widen and Serafal and her peerage to grimace, remembering the night that all went down. The Maoists had been having a meeting and somehow, no one knows to this day still how they did it, but from what they could gather either a stray devil had snatched him from his bedroom while they were in another part of the house. No, I swear we never abandoned you. A stray devil grabbed you out of your crib when no one was looking and somehow hid you away from us, most likely using magic. Sirzech got out while all the adults nodded their heads, calming Issei down some, while shocking Sona and her peerage moreover what happened to Issei in the past. He's right, they never stopped looking for you after that night. Heck, we've never stopped looking for you. Serafal stepped in to enlighten, causing Issei to look over at her, making her realize he didn't know who she was to her sadness. Oh, my name's Serafal, by the way, Sotan's older sister. Nice to meet you. Thankful that her sister's fiancé was someone they had ties to already, even if no one had known it till today. Getting a mischievous look on his face that the student council had seen before a lot of times, he was about to pull something that even Sona ignored. Smiling, he decided to pull a little prank on her. So you're Sotan's older sister that she keeps telling me boo before he could say something. Sona's hand covered his mouth, probably because she realized what Issei was about to do. Sighing, she tried to tell him to shut up before her sister could do something that would likely be embarrassing for her, but unfortunately, it was too late. Yelling with glee, Serafal jumped at Sona, crushing her in a hug while Issei just tried to get out of the way, laughing, while Sona tried to get out of it too, but her sister didn't let her. I knew you loved me, Sona, if you're talking about me, she said, but Sona grew more worried for Issei than her family issues when another attack hit him, shocking the council girls into action, rushing forward to help just as Sona finally got Serafal off of her to do the same. The older devils were too shocked to do anything even though they were already informed about the attacks. Hearing and seeing them were two different things entirely. I'm fine, everyone, that was just a small attack really, he said as he moved his hand, and everyone saw on it. Issei, every attack is one to worry about, Sona admonished him, as she grabbed a rag to wipe off the from his mouth, as the rest of the council agreed with her. Sighing, Issei didn't attempt to argue it as Tsubaki brought him a glass of water, which he thanked her for as he glanced up and noticed the shocked look on the adults' faces that hadn't seen one of his attacks yet, causing him to sigh. I hope seeing one of my attacks doesn't change anything. Not sure how much they knew and not wanting to lose his birth parents now that he found them. Knocked out of their surprise by his words, his parents were quick to stop his worries. No. Even though we were told about the attacks, it's different to see one in person than just hearing about it, Takumi, Sirzech said, also just realizing something missed in the excitement, and pausing Issei's next words with what he said. Forgive me for just now catching on, but I don't think you ever heard my name. I'm Sirzech, your father like was mentioned, and as Sona said, Grafia, the one who was hugging you earlier, is your mother. Nodding his head, Issei just had one more question for them, Takumi. The name you were born with, Takumi Lucifuge Gremory. You were born a month early, which caused Sirzech to almost blow up the house in worry. You were born December 1st at 5 a.m., Grafia said, throwing a rare smirk at her husband, causing him to grimace at the memory and getting a laugh from Serafal. I remember that night, Serafal said, we had to have a meeting, and as he didn't want to leave your side, we all met up at your house. Since our parents were out on a date, I had to bring Sona with me, and she loved feeling the baby kick. You were also a lot calmer than he was during the whole ordeal, she said, throwing a jab herself at Sirzech. Though the other two Maos were just as bad. You were calm through it all. Now that you mention it, Sona seemed drawn to him, even at a year old, every time she was around during my pregnancy. Grafia thought back with a contented sigh, leaning forward for another hug, and causing Sona to blush with her words. Tsubaki stepped in at that moment to state, maybe that's why they've always been close. They felt a connection back then, and it was still there when they met up again recently, without either of them noticing it. Getting a thoughtful nod from the adults at that point, not finding anything to dispute it. I still remember what he did to a wrestler who tried to flirt with Sona, then grabbed her when she rejected him, making both Issei and Sona blush at the memory. Seeing a chance to make fun of her king, Momo said, are you talking about the time he cracked a wall by slamming a plastic knife into it, threatened to skin the guy, and then force-feed it to him while being lowered into a vat of acid? That was an interesting and fun day, she said, laughing, making the older devils look at Issei, who had a sheepish-looking smile at the time. Sona is very precious to me. Of course I'd go to any lengths to keep her safe, he said, getting Sona to blush and making everyone else laugh at that. He's lucky Sona pulled me off of him, or who knows what might have happened to him. Shaking her head at him, Sona just had one thing to say, you already had one attack that day, Issei. I didn't want you risking having another just to protect me. I don't care. Protecting you is worth an attack to me, he said back, making her blush. Why would you have to go and say something like that to me, idiot? She said, lightly hitting him while blushing. Sorry, forgot how much of a tsundere you are, he said, laughing as her blush deepened and she tried to push him off the couch, but did start to smile at the end, causing everyone to laugh at both of them. But Sona's eyes started to widen at Sirzech's next words. Crap, I forgot to let Issei know about that. Laughing, Sirzech's next comment had Issei looking at him confused. Aha, barely 16 years old, has many beautiful girls hanging off of him, and an ice queen as his fiancée, he sure takes after me. Before he looked over and saw Issei's confusion. Fiancé, he asked, honest confusion written over his face as the adults realized that he didn't know about it yet. Wanting to make sure he was right on Issei not knowing, he had to ask. You've beaten Sona in a chess match, right? Getting a nod from him. Last I checked I was at 56 wins, 50 losses, and about 75 ties, with Sona, making all the adults become shocked at how good he had to be to win that many times. As he continued, but what does it have to do with her being my fiancée, he said before hearing Sona sigh. I've been trying to find a good way to tell you, but the cat's out of the bag now, I guess. I made an agreement with my parents years ago that I wouldn't marry anyone who wasn't as smart as me, and they had to beat me at chess to marry me, and they agreed, she said, seeing his eyes light up in recognition. So, the game last year right before school started. Getting a nod of her head, I was the first person to beat you at chess. Getting another nod from her. Sighing, he looked at her and said, I'm sorry you had to be engaged to a dying boy. Missing the shocked look all the adults had after he said that, getting pushed off the couch to his surprise. Idiot. I swear you're clueless. Marriage agreement or not, you think I would care for you as much as I do if I didn't love you? I've been trying to drop hints all year how much you mean to me, and you've been dense as ever about it, she said, glad to see the surprised look on his face at that. Having a laugh at the two, Sirzech had one thing to throw into the mix before Grafia hit him on the back of the head. He definitely gets the clueless side from his mother. I spent years trying to tell her I was interested in her, and then more time before I could take her on a date. But the hit from Grafia wasn't too forceful, as she couldn't disagree with him all that much on the point. Having to agree with Sona after thinking about it for a moment, he could only nod his head at her. So, I guess I should invite you out on a date now, he said sheepishly as the rest of the council laughed at the both of them. Sounds good, but it has to be something not school-related, she replied, getting a nod back from him as he thought about it and made a suggestion she liked. How about a movie and dinner then? The new Pokémon movie just recently came out, he offered, knowing how much she loved Pokémon, as she would often get drawings done from him depicting Pokémon. She would always pay him even though he said he would do it for free, but she never felt right having it done for free. She agreed happily, and they decided to meet up at 6 at the theater, and after her giving him on the cheek, they both remembered that they weren't the only two in the room and blushed as the rest of the council had one thing to say, which had all the adults laughing at the kids. Finally, shit, I didn't think this through too well, Issei thought as he tried finding something to wear to the date, but having nothing he thought was suited for it. Dad, he yelled out to his fathers as he ran down the stairs to the living room where both his birth and adoptive parents were hanging around. Hearing Issei call out for them, both Sirzech and Issei's adopted father, Issei, looked at each other wondering which one he had been asking for. Looking up as he ran into the room, what Issei had to say surprised Issei as he hadn't been expecting it. Could both of you help me find something to wear tonight on my date with Sona? Nothing I have seems like it will work for a date. Blinking, then having to blink again before his mind caught up to what was asked, Issei looked into the kitchen where his wife and Grafia were having a chat of their own. Hey sweetie, getting her to look out the door at him. Did you know Issei is finally going on a date with Sona? Which, when she replied, caused the adults to laugh while Issei facepalmed. Finally, I've been waiting on it to happen for the last year. Laughing at them, Sirzech had to find Issei's reaction and commented about how the student council had the exact same reaction to the two finally going on a date. Oh please, Mr. Gremory, everyone but those two could see it. He's been sweet on her since they first met, and I could tell that she cared for him ever since she started coming over to help him study. Don't worry about that, Mrs. Hayaudu. Issei gets that side of him from Grafia. It took me years of trying to show her I was in love with her, Sirzech said, almost calling Issei by his original name, while Grafia just rolled her eyes at her husband, not able to disagree with him. As soon as Issei had gotten home, he had introduced his birth parents to his adopted ones, and they had hit it off instantly, and were having fun talking about the boy. When his name had been brought up on if he would change his name back to Takumi, now that they knew his original name, it had been decided for him to keep using Issei as it could cause problems changing after using it for so long, but as he did want to keep some of his original name, he decided to change his full name to Issei Takumi Hayaudu Gremory, dropping the lucifuge name as everyone thought it would be too long, and Grafia didn't mind too much either as he wouldn't need it unless he wanted to revive the clan in the future. Flashback. Walking home while holding hands with Grafia, Issei would have never figured his day would turn out like it did meeting his birth parents, to learning he was engaged to Sona, someone he had been crushing on for months, and hoping she felt the same and was thrilled she did. As they neared his house, one thought kept nagging at the back of his mind and needed answers before they reached his house. So, this just crossed my mind, but how do we want to handle this, he asked, causing both Grafia and Sirzech to look at him in confusion. What do you mean, Issei? I would think and hope this would be a simple process of meeting your adoptive parents, Grafia said, getting a nod from Sirzech as they weren't entirely sure what he was asking about. Taking a moment to get his thoughts fully in order, Issei commented, well, as far as I know, my adoptive parents don't know about the supernatural or my powers. I can't promise that, but I figured we should get our stories straight at least on that side here before you meet them. Getting a nod from the two as it now made sense what he had been asking. I know the rules about not telling about the supernatural. Sona, as well as the lady from the church who taught me about my powers, gave me the rundown about keeping it a secret, which I can understand. Receiving another nod from the two. I think we should keep it a secret for now, and if they bring it up, we'll deal with it then. Surzech, after a moment of thought, getting a nod of agreement from both Issei and Grafia. And on that note, I think I'll use Gremory instead of Lucifer on my end. Catching the look on his wife's face, he kept going before she could say anything. They might become suspicious if I went with Lucifer. Better to be safe than sorry for now. Getting a nod from her after she thought about it for a moment. Glad that question had been dealt with, Issei noticed they were almost to his house. We're almost there. Anything else we should figure out now before you meet them? Both of them shook their heads no, but Surzech did comment, I would love to hear more at some point about how you learned about your powers and the lady from the church. Getting a nod of acceptance from him. Flashback and Please, call me Amiko. I've never really liked being called just by my last name, and I think both of you deserve that much. Getting a nod from her husband. I'm with my wife on this one. I don't like being called Mr. Hayato outside of work unless it's a situation that calls for it. Getting a nod from the two. Please call me Surzech then. We can't thank both of you enough for adopting Issei and helping him grow into who he is today, Surzech said, with Grafia nodding her head asking that they call her Grafia as well. Nodding his head at the two, Issei turned his head back to Issei, who was close to hyperventilating as even though he had an hour before the date was supposed to start. What you wear should depend on what y'all are doing tonight, Issei. We plan on going to see the new Pokémon movie that just came out recently, as I know how much of a fan of Pokémon Sona is. After that I plan on taking her out for food, then making sure she gets home safely, he said, still hyperventilating and trying to keep an attack from happening, which Grafia noticed, so stepped over and helped by draining some of his ice magic and forcing both the ice and fire magic down from the surface. Seeing a chance to embarrass his son a little bit, Surzech's next comment had Issei face palming. How far do you want to go with her though, Issei? First, second, third, or all the way? Laughing as Issei blushed massively. Papa, Issei yelled as he tried to quit blushing at the thought. Surzech, for his part, just blinked a couple times as what Issei had called him took hold in his mind. So, he would be Papa, while Issei was Dad. He could live with that just fine, glad to have his son back. What, you're engaged to Sona, so it's not out of the question that something might be done or wish to be done soon, he said, causing both Issei and Amiko to widen their eyes at the shocking news. Since when have they been engaged? They both exclaimed at once, looking at both Surzech and Issei confused. Sona is from a very prestigious family, and from the time they had learned they were going to have a girl had marriage proposals coming in. We were in the same situation, but where we decided not to do the arranged marriage method, instead letting our son make his own decision. Her parents aren't the same way, as only her older sister is overly protective of her. Though when Sona learned of the arranged marriage she had been put in, she made the decision she wouldn't marry anyone smarter than her, and with her parents' approval, made the call where she would only marry someone that was able to beat her at chess, which the person she was arranged to marry was not able to do. Apparently, Issei here was the first one to beat her at chess last year. Surzech clarified for them, but they only turned towards Issei with one question. You've been engaged for a year and haven't told us, making him sigh, but not mad at the question. He couldn't blame them for being mad at something that enormous not being told to them if he had known about it before, but there wasn't anything he could do about it in this situation. I only learned today about being engaged to Sona. The two of us were hanging out in the council room during our free period when an attack hit. After Sona told me to take a nap, one of her older sister's bodyguards came by to check on her, and Sona asked her to go get Mama, pausing to point at Grafia, as she thought that Mama would be able to help with my illness, but none of us expected Mama to be Mama. Then Papa mentioned the engagement, not realizing that I didn't know, as Sona hadn't figured out a way to tell me yet. Getting a nod from Issei and Amiko, while Grafia smiled, noticing the same thing that Surzech had, that he called Amiko Mom and her Mama, which she had no issues with. Realizing the time, Issei ran back to his room, followed by both sets of parents. Crap, I'm almost out of time. I'd rather not be late to my first date with her. Making his fathers laugh while Issei stepped into his closet and Grafia moved over to try and do something with his hair. Ignore your fathers for now, let's get you ready to go. Grabbing a brush, Grafia had to comment on his hair. While I do think the spiky hair look fits you, let's see if we can't tame it some. While watching his wife, Surzech noticed the similarities to his mother's hair color. You definitely got the hair from the Bale side of the family. She may have a lighter color of hair, but you got the full brunt of it, as my father's side is red predominant hair. So, I get my hair from my paternal mother's side of the family, Issei asked as another thought crossed his mind, but Surzech answered him before he could ask. Where do I know the Gremory name from? Yes, her side of the family is all brunettes. My red hair comes from the Gremory side of the family. Me, my father, my sister, as well as your little brother, all have red hair. Finally remembering where he knew the name from, Issei had to ask with dread. Your sister wouldn't happen to be named Rias, would she? Getting a nod from Surzech. Great, this should be fun. Confusing both Surzech and Grafia, but Amiko stepped in before they could comment. Getting mad, Amiko finished finding something for him to wear as she asked for clarification. Rias, she's the one that has gone around spreading all sorts of rumors about you, isn't she, who pretended to be your friend until learning you were adopted, making both Surzech and Grafia get pissed off at what they heard. The ones that were about me being an orphan and a massive pervert, then yeah, that's her. Almost everyone at the school except a couple teachers, the student council, the kendo club and Ria's friend Kaneko believe the rumors. I've been attacked a few times because of it, making both Issei and Grafia remember back to when Pico was talking to them at first about Sona hitting a boy, before he started getting pissed off at his sister making some killing intent flow out unintentionally. But thankfully Grafia, who had just finished fixing Issei's hair, caught on fast enough to stop him with a hand on his shoulder before it got too bad, even though she was in the same boat. She was raised much better than that. We will be having words with her tomorrow, believe me, Issei said, pissed off at his sister, but did mentally thank Grafia for stepping in before his killing intent leaked too much out. But they all were surprised at Issei's next words. Knowing that could cause more issues than it was worth, Issei pleaded, please don't. If you do that, there's a high chance of it causing more issues than I have to deal with right now if she learns I went around her and came to you about it. Getting a reluctant nod from his father, who had one more thing to say as Issei got up to get dressed in what his mom had brought him. If she tries anything else, I'll do everything I have to get her ousted as the next heir of the Gremory family. Still mad at Rias, but after thinking about it for a minute, decided to go with Issei's plea to not do anything for the moment. Sighing, glad that his father had agreed for the moment to leave it be, he looked at what his mom had brought out for him to wear and liked it immediately. It was a pair of khaki pants and a dark green button-down shirt. Looking at the time, he panicked and rushed towards the door. Shit, I'm out of time. Love you mom, mama, dad, papa, I'll see y'all later. Causing his birth parents to look shocked at his last words. Looking at Issei and seeing his shocked face, Grafia asked the question they both had to be wondering at the moment, all the while trying not to cry but finally letting it out. How can he say he loves us already when we've missed so much of his life? With Issei only nodding his head at the question. Nodding her head at the two, Amiko's next words had them feeling more at ease. Issei has always been that way, especially after his health started failing. He shows love to anyone he meets and does his best to make everyone feel special when around him. He's taken a knife in the shoulder for his friend Motohoma from a mugger and a bullet in the shoulder for his other friend Matsuda after an attempted burglary. You know how he mentioned Kaneko earlier, one of Ria's friends? She's the only one in her club that doesn't believe any of the rumors. Amiko mentioned before going into what happened between the two. We've pretty much all but in paper adopted her, making both Issei and Grafia happy with what they had been told, as well as happy Kaneko had found someone that she was that close to, considering her past. We've known Sona since she was a baby. Her and Ria's are the same age, and I'm glad to see that she has found someone that can make her blush and lose her stern side every now and then. And from what we saw in the student council room earlier, I think Issei does that just fine. How about we swap stories about the two while we spy on their date? Issei replied as he got ready to go make sure the date wasn't spoiled by anything. Sighing at the two, both Grafia and Amiko looked at each other with a knowing look and decided to follow the two and make sure they behaved themselves. With Sona, damn it, everything I have looks too nice for just a movie date, Sona said, looking through her wardrobe at her parents' house. Serafal had teleported them straight there after leaving the council office so she could get ready for the date. Sona couldn't find a thing she felt was suited for her first date with Issei. Knowing how much of a bad idea it was but not having much choice, she headed out to get her sister. Knowing her sister, she'd probably try and put her in a magical girl outfit, but was running out of time. Big sis, she said as she ran to her sister's room, can you help me find something to wear tonight? Nothing I have seems like it works for just a simple movie date, she said, which caused her sister to look up from her own closet with glee and happiness, which made Sona sigh knowingly. And before you even think about it, no magical girl outfits. If you do try to, I won't hug you for a month, no matter who's around, she said, knowing her sister, who frowned at her but headed off back to Sona's room to find something for her to wear. Thinking about it for a moment, Serafal called for her Bishop Akane to come and help out with Sona's hair, as before she was reincarnated, she was a beautician, as she said something she knew would cause Sona to blush. Let's find you an outfit to woo your husband. As Akane joined them, and causing Sona to blush. Big sis, we aren't even married yet, Sona said, blushing as she watched her sister start looking through her closet. He's as protective of you as I am, which I approve of, so you might as well be married. But if he tries anything, he won't escape my wrath. Making Sona blush once again as she remembered an incident that happened a few years ago. Sona had been having a calm day out with her sister when a random stray devil decided to try and attack them. Sona didn't even fully register what was going on before Serafal flash frozen the stray and then was left in the garden as a warning. Serafal had left a sign stating this is what happens to anyone who tries to attack my Satan, with a PS added by her peerage that said this is what happens if our king gets to them first. Signed Leviathan's peerage. Deciding to get back to the current issue, Serafal asked as she started pulling out clothes. So how far do you want to go with him tonight? Big sis was all Sona could say as Akane started working on her hair. What I need to know what you hope to do so I can dress you appropriately. In smoldering or cute and cuddly. I want to look like myself, not some prostitute, Sona replied, which made Serafal put back some clothes. Seeing that, she turned to Akane. Akane, remind me to burn whatever clothes she just put back later, getting a laugh from the bishop. Sis, remember our deal I made when I first went to you about no magical girl clothes, making her sister grimace and put more clothes away before bringing some over right as Akane finished getting done with Sona's hair. Glancing over it, she saw a nice teal-colored dress that was knee-length and a blue shirt with green vines on it, which she felt would be great for tonight. "Thanks, big sis," she said before getting up and going to get dressed in her private bathroom, liking it even more after she got it on. After Sona got back from the bathroom getting dressed, Seraphol remembered something she needed to give to her as a gift. "Oh, before I forget to get these to you," she said, pulling out a case of contact lenses. "I had Ajuka make you these as either a replacement or if you don't want to use your glasses sometimes," she added, getting a hug from her sister after she opened the case. Thanking her sister and asking her to thank Ajuka for her, she stepped away from Akane and Seraphol to not risk them getting caught by her eyes' properties. Her eyes were the reason that even though they had gotten the same magic training, Sona's water magic wasn't as far along as Seraphol's. She had gained the eye powers from her mother's side of the family, and focused more on using them as a trump card, something that no one knew about except for Ajuka. Her parents and sister and her sister's peerage knew about the trump card, and they did their best to keep it that way. She had two different eye powers, the Issei for her left, which she could control about 75% of the time, and her Gorgon eye for her right, and had the same amount of control over it. Very few knew it or remembered, but Sona's mother was kicked out of her family clan, the Oculius clan, about a month before they were wiped out, and they were known for their eye powers, though almost everyone was known to have only one eye power in both eyes, not two like Sona had. Ajuka, at Seraphol's request, had done a checkup on Sona to make sure that her two eye powers weren't going to cause any issues that could be caught early on, and he cleared her of anything he might find. He did comment, though, that maybe since the Citri clan had had another Oculius family member marry and well before Sona's mother, that might have helped with her gaining two eye powers, as her 4 times great-grandmother had the Gorgon eye, and her maternal grandmother had the Issei. Being cautious while getting both contacts in, she finally did and turned around hoping that the contacts worked like her glasses, and was pleased to see they did. Hugging her sister, she heard someone coughing to get their attention and turned to see Pico leaning against the wall like she'd been there the whole time, which she could have been for all they knew. "Hate to break up this cute scene, but your date started 20 minutes ago," she said, causing Sona's eyes to widen as she prepared a magic circle to get near the theater. "Thanks, sis, Akane. I gotta get going before Issei thinks I stood him up," making the 3 left in the room laugh as the rest of Seraphol's peerage came into the room. "We're going to follow them, aren't we?" Ibuki commented, knowing her king, as Seraphol nodded, causing Pico to sigh. "Of course we are. We have to make sure it goes perfect," she said as she did her best to hide their demonic powers. Sona's eye powers were not something to trifle with. She wasn't sure if even she was able to not be affected, and she didn't know how Sona might react to having people watch over their date. At the theater, Sona had teleported to a thankfully empty alleyway a couple blocks from the theater, and ran the rest of the way, and only stopped long enough to fix her wind-blown hair a little bit before stepping into the theater, happy to see Issei still here, holding one of his famous ice roses. What she wasn't expecting was for a small group of girls from Kyo Academy hanging around him. With her devil hearing, she could hear what was going on with the group. "So I noticed your date still isn't here. Are you sure you don't want to just hang out with us and not worry about her?" one of the first-year girls asked him, making Sona start to get mad. But she was happy to hear his response to them, which on that note made her realize she needed to talk to Issei about something soon. She was fine if it ever came to where he wanted a harem. She had been thinking about it for years and had come to the decision of she wouldn't mind being in a harem as long as she was the head wife and she got along with them. She wasn't too sure what Issei's thoughts might be on one due to his health issues, but it would be best to get it out of the way sooner than later. Putting that aside for the moment, she flared a tiny amount of power out, just enough for Issei to turn and notice her right as he was speaking. "Thanks, ladies, but I'm sure she just got hung up talking to her sister, knowing how protective she is of her," Issei said as he felt Sona's magic power flare for a moment and tried to make it look like he was just looking around as he turned towards her. "Speak of the devil and she shall appear. There she is now," pointing behind the girls towards Sona, and they all turned, surprised at who it was that showed up, and also making Sona snicker at Issei's word choice. The first-year girl who was talking earlier was certainly surprised to see the student council president show up until she remembered how protective the council was with Issei, but didn't figure about the two of them together. She did try and put out another protest, though. "You're just gonna forgive her like that even after making you wait this long?" she asked before noticing a new fact about Sona. "And what happened to your glasses?" Kaichu, trying but not being completely able to remove the malice she was feeling. Stepping and hoping to keep things civil between everyone, Issei had also noticed the glasses, but something else. "Like I said, it's no big deal about her being late. This date was a last-minute deal, so I kind of figured this might happen. And I'm sure she's just wearing contacts now instead of her glasses," he said, noticing a few of the girls seemed to calm down after his comment about this being last minute, but some were still mad, something he didn't understand. "You look lovely, by the way, Sona. Let's head on in," laughing internally at how he made her blush with his comment. "We'd better hurry, though, if we want to get snacks before the movie starts," he said as he handed her the rose as she nodded. "Sorry, Issei, Seraphol held me up and I lost track of time," she said, getting a nod of understanding from him as he had already figured that out. But before they could get too far, Sona got pushed from behind, making her fall to the ground and lose a contact, something she didn't realize as she turned around to glare at the girls and Issei, who happened to be right at the corner of her eyesight, that had done it, before realizing that she'd lost a contact as the girls were all frozen in the position they were in. Rapidly closing her eyes, she started looking around for her contact as Issei came up to her to check on her. "Are you okay?" he asked as he noticed she was looking for something and had an eye closed. "And why do you have your eye closed? You have a beautiful eye color." Looking confused as she looked up at him with a stunned expression on her face, until she pointed behind him, and that's when he noticed the girl and the others that were in that group that had pushed her frozen and not moving. "Cool, I didn't know you could do that. How did you do it?" Getting a look of surprise when she pointed to her eye. "I've got 2 powers in my eye, Jason Gorgon. My glasses before and now my contacts help control the power as I don't have full control over them at this time. I've even frozen ultimate level devils before, so I'm honestly surprised you weren't affected too." Making him nod, but she kept going right before he could ask his next question. "I can reverse it, but still," she said as she found her contact. Commenting, Issei only could whistle at what he learned. "How about we just adjust their memories of this incident and unfreeze them after you put your contact back in?" Getting a nod of agreement from her. Right after he commented that, he flinched as he heard a voice in his head. Said the deity in his sacred gear, Didrag the Red Dragon Emperor. Issei had known him ever since Grisla helped him awaken his powers and was a welcome voice when he was bored. "So that's why I wasn't affected. That was Sona's Gorgon eye magic being activated accidentally." Issei replied back, glad to know why he was able to get around it and how strong his partner was at one point, something kind of glossed over in the past. Didrag said, then Riley commented, chuckling at his host at those words as he knew how Issei felt about Sona. "Oh, shut up." Issei could only blush and grumble at Didrag as he chuckled in the back of his mind as Sona came back from putting back in her contact while he had been preoccupied talking with Didrag. As she was adjusting the girls' memories, he went and bought them snacks for the movie. Once they got the snacks and the memories changed, they headed on into the movie, missing the scene behind them where Seraphal and her peerage had a chat with the girls about what had happened, as they weren't at all happy. Right before they reached the theater, Issei pulled Sona to the side, letting her know what Didrag had told him about how he got around her powers, which she nodded as she could see that being transferred to him. Halfway during the movie, as both Sona and Issei were enjoying themselves and each other's company, a catchy song came on and Sona's comment made Issei look at her surprised as she leaned over to him and whispered, "I'm so going to look up those lyrics once we get home." "You can sing," he said, a little surprised, but expecting the time he could hear her sing, getting a nod from her. "I might sing to you sometime soon, if you play your cards right," she said, chuckling at his grimace, but she was game to do it. Not long after, a guy behind them got pissed off at the movie and his next words annoyed both Issei and Sona. "This movie is bullshit," making both of them annoyed as this wasn't the first time he had yelled out during the movie. Issei, finally having enough, yelled back at him saying, "Then leave, asshole. Some people are actually liking the movie," causing the guy to yell out who did that before he was removed from the theater by a guy they both knew. "Looks like we got company tonight," Sona said, turning back to the movie as she recognized the devil signatures in the theater with them as people she knew. "More than a few," Issei agreed, starting to get some ideas to get them back, making Didrag chuckle as he followed along with his thoughts. "That was Papa that removed the guy. Plus I can sense Mama and my adoptive parents are here and back." Not long after that, a sad part of the movie came up which caused someone to cry in the back, and made Sona realize who else was watching them. That was Big Sis. "I bet you anything most of her peerage is here as well. I'll make sure to get them back for this later," she said before catching Issei's expression, which made her realize he was already planning something. "I know that look. What do you have in mind?" "Couple things really," he said as he put his arm around her shoulders, making her jump and surprising her at first, but she didn't mind it. "We could ignore them, or make them think we are going farther than we are. If you don't mind, I've wanted to do this all night, and if you're willing, maybe holding hands too. I think that's a good start for now," causing her to blush but nodded her head at the idea and reached up to hold his hand that was on her shoulder. They both started smirking as they heard their stalkers whispering at each other how far along they already were. Scene skip. "That movie was okay, but it seems like they are just doing the same things over again," Sona said, annoyed at one of the things she had come to love in the human world was becoming repetitive. Nodding his head as he agreed, Issei led them out of the theater and off towards a place he knew about that served real good food. Walking beside Sona, he tried his luck by reaching for her hand as he commented, "The place we're headed to eat knows about the supernatural, so you don't have to hide your identity here." Jumping at the touch, Sona soon accepted it and squeezed his hand, finding that she liked the feeling when they were watching the movie. Nodding at his words, she wondered what this place was as they walked inside the diner. She was surprised that the moment they entered, Issei was tackled into a hug by an older woman. "Issei, it's been a while. How have you been?" she said as she hugged him, getting a laugh and a hug back from him. "You know I like my friends to keep in touch," she said, but before he could comment, she looked over and saw Sona. "And you brought someone with you this time, I see. About time you found a girl," making both of them blush as she laughed and introduced herself. "I'm Anna. I run the diner here," smiling at Sona. "I'm Sona Citri. Nice to meet you," Sona said as she bowed to the woman, liking her. Right as Sona quit bowing, a new face showed up that both of them knew. "Hey Kaneko, on another snack run, making Anna giggle as they both knew how Kaneko was. Hey Issei, on a date with Sona I see, Kaneko said, surprising Sona as she had thought all of Ria's peerage hated Issei, but it seemed like Kaneko did not. Yeah, we just got done with seeing the new Pokemon movie, he said, making Sona blush as he smiled at her and pulled out a chair for her. Finally, she said, making both Sona and Issei facepalm at her words, and a table of adults started to chuckle as they heard what Kaneko had said, but the kids didn't notice the adults at the time. Looking over at Sona, Kaneko just had one thing to say. I see Issei as an older brother, and so treat him well. If you don't, she said as she punched the wall beside her, cracking it and scaring Sona as she had never seen this side of the girl, right as Anna had something to say. Did you really have to do that, Kaneko? Hey Manny, come out and fix this wall for me, would you? Anna yelled towards the kitchen, and as a guy came out to fix it, she took Kaneko over to get some snacks. Shocked at how Kaneko was acting, she looked over at Issei as he sat down. Well, that was interesting. How are you and Kaneko good friends? I thought everyone in Ria's peerage hated you. Making him blush as he remembered how they got to where they are now. I helped her out one day before I realized how much strength she had. I found her getting cornered by some thugs trying to get her to go out with them, and I knocked them out and took her out to get ice cream to make sure she wasn't scarred or anything, making her nod her head in understanding. After that she started hanging out with me, becoming a shadow of sorts, and my parents adore her. They've both unofficially adopted her, and even have a bed set aside for her for the times she has to get away from Ria's. Having her nod again as it made sense to her in a way with Kaneko's past. That explains things perfectly to me, but how did you know about this place? I never knew there were places for the supernatural around town. Auntie Grisla told me about this place, and brought me here a couple times before she moved away. There's places like this all over town. We can try other places next time, he said, seeing how she looked like she was gonna ask, getting a nod from her. Right after that, he felt something move in his pocket. Oh, before I forget, I made you something earlier. I know you don't like things that are too big or flashy, but I hope you'll like this, as he brought it out of his pocket. Laughing, she had to agree with him. You know me well by now, I don't like flashy stuff, but if it's from you I'll more than likely like it or just add something to it. She started to say as what he brought out registered. Issei, is that what I think it is? She asked as she got a good glance at what he held. It was a ring that had a red scale-like band with icy blue veins, with a green and blue gem in the center of the band. It's beautiful. Well, as we're engaged I figured I should get you a ring to signify it, he said, rubbing the back of his head, happy she liked it. The band I made with my ice magic, and the gem is a small piece from the boosted gear, which D-Drag was happy to give, as he adores you. Making her blush and D-Drag laugh inside his head at her reaction. While wearing the ring you'll be mostly resistant to poison, due to the fragment from the boosted gear, as well as be able to erect a barrier in times where you need one. Plus it'll help you on giving an early warning of pending danger, as well as help us find each other if we need to, due to the gem from D-Drag, he said before she pulled him into across the table. Sona was blushing at his words as she had once thought this ring is so beautiful and thoughtful of him. I'm glad he beat me at chess, before she pulled him into over the table, getting wolf calls and whistles from the other people in the restaurant as well as their stalkers. Thank you Issei, and yes, 1,000 times yes. I love it, making him smile as she accepted the ring, and his next comment made her blush and he had to laugh. You know, you could be calling me by my nickname, right? We are engaged. I thought only your family was allowed to call you that. Sure, but you're technically family now that we're engaged. Laughing at her expression as they started eating their supper, he just had one thing left to say. You know I love you even in moments like this. Yes, but it doesn't stop it from being embarrassing to me, she said, making him laugh. And I love you too. The next day at school, Issei was pulled into a conversation with his two friends from the kendo club, Issei and Miramaya Kaori. Hey Eyes, I heard you finally went on a date with Sona last night. Miramaya called out to him. It's about time you two got together, she said, making him facepalm and blush. Yeah, we went and saw the new Pokemon movie. Had a weird thing happen though since I showed up early, as I had a couple girls flirting with me while I was waiting on Sona to show up. Looking at each other, both Miramaya and Caddis looked happy, which surprised Issei till they spoke up. It's about time, Caddis said before catching Issei's confused look. We were getting annoyed with all the bad rumors about you, so we, the Kendo Club, started rumors of our own about how nice and approachable you are, and they, the people who started the rumors, were probably mad you were going after Sona. Not them, even with your illness, which we didn't tell anyone about. You know what, she added, seeing the look on his face, knowing he didn't like talking about it too much, making him sigh at them both. While I thank you for doing that, you know you didn't have to, though it does seem to have worked seeing all the looks we're getting right now, he said, having noticed the stares they were getting as the three were talking. Oh, I know, but the three of us know you only have eyes out for Kaichu right now, Miramaya said, looking like she wanted to say more but didn't, something that Issei caught onto but decided not to dive into at the moment. What Miramaya hadn't told anyone, not even her best friend Caddis, was that she had started falling for Issei as they got to know him better, but knew that him and Sona were starting to get close, so decided to step back from it and wish the two the best. But what she didn't know was that Issei had always thought she was cute too, both of them, and didn't know what to think at the moment after the conversation he and Sona had last night. Flashback to last night As they were leaving the restaurant, Sona mentioned something that had been on her mind all night. Hey Issei, do you have time to come in for a few minutes when we get to my house? She asked, getting a nod from him as he reached over and held her hand. As they got to her house, a little two-bedroom apartment near the school that, even though was plain and simple, seemed to be a good fit for Sona. As they walked into the house, they headed on into the living room to chat. After confirming that he didn't need anything to drink, she got right into her point. So, while I'm not too sure how relevant this will be, I figured I should bring this up now, especially after tonight's event with the girls. She started off, getting a confused nod from him. As we now know your heritage, and with who your parents are, you should be getting your own evil pieces set soon as you were born a high-class devil. Now, peerages can come in many forms, as you've heard me mention in the past, from close friends to family members to what I wanted to bring up tonight, harems, making him blush and start stuttering at her, surprised at what she was saying. Finally getting some words out, he only had one thing to say. You do realize, Sona, that if I had to choose between you and that I will always choose you, right? He had to make sure she knew that as she nodded. I'll admit that thought had crossed my mind, but not in a while, since my powers started causing more issues. Nodding her head, Sona put his fears to rest with her next words. I know that, and I'm not forcing you to choose between me and a harem. I'm letting you know now that if it comes to the point that that is a real possibility, I want you to know that you have my support, but under a few conditions, she said, getting a nod from him. Conditions being, I maintain head wife status. It's not uncommon for devils to have multiple wives, or even women having multiple husbands, which is even rarer, with one maybe two taking the role as head wife to help manage everyone and what happens. Getting a thoughtful nod from him. Another one would be no airheads, and has to be someone that we both get along with. Then, last one, you have to take care of each of us the same and not only love one person. She finished thinking about it again and wondering what might come of it. You really have thought this through, and thank you for letting me know, but I don't know how relevant it will be for now, he said, glad to have her in his life. Shaking her head at how dense he was, Sona said, I've been thinking about it since before I came to Kyoto, so yeah, I know what I'm talking about here. While thinking, I know a few people that have fallen for him and that I wouldn't mind sharing with Issei. Well, like I said, thank you for the heads up and I will try to keep it in mind, he said, giving her before he got ready to head on home since they had school the next day. Flashback and He still couldn't get it out of his head what Sona had let him know about, and also had a feeling in the back of his mind that she had a few candidates already in mind but wasn't sure who they might be. While he wouldn't mind seeing what might happen if he did try and date the two Kendoka, he couldn't help but worry what else might happen, since they didn't know about the supernatural at all yet, and if they got roped into it, if their lives would be in danger. He also had his health to think about and what might happen, but now that they knew his real parents, they might be able to figure something out to help him. He didn't know that his concerns would be gone soon, as trouble was just around the corner. As he headed towards the student council office at lunchtime, Issei realized he had a huge following of girls. As he turned around to try and get a count of how many and see what he might could do in this situation, he had to comment dryly to D-Drag, to his amusement. D-Drag, remind me to tell Cadis and Miramea that their plan worked too well, D-Drag said, laughing at his host's latest predicament. Not helping here, Issei said back, grumbling at the dragon. Right as he was about to speak up, someone he knew came out of the crowd of girls. Kaneko walked right up to Issei and surprised all the girls as she grabbed his hand and started pulling him down the hall until her words made them realize the two weren't dating. Come on, big brother. Don't want to leave big sister hanging, do you? She asked Issei, making him surprised how she was calling Sona after what happened the night before. You're calling her big sis now? Last night you were threatening to flatten her, was Issei's comment as he got pulled along, not trying to pull away. Smirking as she knew what kind of reaction she would get with her answer, Kaneko responded, sure, but that was before you proposed to her. Smirking as the girls that had been following Issei stopped mid-step and yelled what outright as they got near the student council room. Hearing the commotion outside the room, Sona slammed the door open to see her fiancé, Kaneko, and a large group of girls standing nearby with shocked looks on their faces. What in the world is going on here? She asked, only having heard the yell from the girls. Surprise came to her though with Kaneko's next words. They just learned that big brother here is no longer up for grabs, Kaneko said, smirking at the girls' expense. Sona, like Issei, was wondering why and when Kaneko had started calling her big sis, especially after what had happened last night at the diner when one of the other girls came up to her crying. Kaichu, do you know who Issei proposed to? Hopefully it's not some big-chested woman, she said, making Sona unconsciously look down at her own chest, something which Issei knew she was self-conscious about, especially when one of her friends was Ria's Gremory, who had a big chest. I don't know about impossible, Sona replied back, looking both amused and annoyed, trying not to sound too hurt or anything, but was pleased when Issei stepped in and said something. Don't worry, Sona, no one can take you away from me, he said as he put an arm around her shoulder, making all the girls look at him surprised before they saw the ring on Sona's finger. He's right, you know. He's loyal to you and won't betray you unless betrayed first. Kaneko backed him up, having learned more about him since he saved her. Exactly, he said before looking over at Kaneko. You want to eat with us today, Kaneko? He asked, with Sona nodding her head saying she was fine with it. Sure, Riaz, but you got some bad news earlier, so isn't in a very good mood right now. Plus I'd love to see the ring he gave you, she said, getting Sona to turn her ring for Kaneko to see it better. You've got great taste in rings, Issei, she said, figuring that he had probably made it himself instead of buying one. As the three of them headed off to the roof, ignoring the girls behind them as they fell to the ground finally out of their stupor of surprise, and yelled Sonakechu is engaged to Issei. Hello, son, Grafia said, as she stepped out of a teleportation circle on the roof of the school, which thankfully was empty, except for the three devils and her, and scared the crap out of them before giving him a hug as he ran up to hug her. After hugging her son, she turned towards Kaneko, and her words made the girl happy. You're both a part of my sister-in-law's peerage, and seen as a little sister to Issei, so feel free to call me Mom or however you would like to say it, she said before giving her a hug. Turning next to Sona, she repeated the process. As you're engaged to my son, you can do the same and call me Mom or however you want to say it, and let me say I approve wholeheartedly your engagement. Making Sona blush but happy that Grafia, someone who she had always respected, felt the way she did. After thinking about it for a few seconds on how she wanted to call Grafia, Kaneko brought up her thoughts on why she was meeting with them. I doubt that was the only reason you came to find us, Mama, she said, getting a nod from her. You're right, my daughter. I came to get Issei to take him to Ajuka for a checkup on his powers, as well as to possibly see if he can figure out how Issei has a sacred gear, as well, and to get his evil pieces started since he's a high-class devil. Making the three nod as it made sense now why she had come, but Issei still had one more question. Who's Ajuka, he asked, not yet having heard the name in his talks with Sona. He's one of the 4 Maus in charge of Devil Society, along with your father and my sister. As he's a genius, he's in charge of the technology department, Sona said, giving him the needed information for why they would be going to see him. Nodding his head, he only had one thing left to say that might change what was happening. We only have 30 minutes, Mama, getting a nod from her. That's fine, as the evil pieces won't be ready till later today and the checkup shouldn't take too long. The two of you can also join us if you want, Grafia said, turning to Kaneko and Sona, who nodded their heads in agreement. As she was making the teleportation circle, she had one last thing to comment. We'll be jumping straight to his office as he can get lost in his work, and it won't be an issue since I set this up earlier to make sure he'd be there, she said, making a teleportation circle appear underneath everyone. Reaching their destination, she called out to Ajuka while walking inside of a door nearby, as Issei and Kaneko looked around, never having been here before. Ajuka, sir, are you here? Walking around a corner as they came into the room, Ajuka was caught by surprise as he felt the power radiating off of Issei. Yes, I'm here, Grafia. Now I wonder what's so important, though. I see. With the powers I can feel coming off the boy and how they normally don't interact, I can understand why you would bring him for a checkup and get his evil pieces. I'm sure the powers are interacting negatively inside him, he said as his shock wore off. Come on, let's get this underway, shall we, he said, smiling as he waved the group farther into the office. Seeing how Issei was looking wary at what had happened so far, Sona stepped in and commented. Even though he may act serious and tough at times, he's a calm and collected guy mostly who loves to tinker and build things, she said as she reached for his hand, calming him. Also, he's an older brother himself, which due to it being rare within the devil community to have siblings, you'll tend to see the ones that have younger siblings be protective of young devils, she also added in making Issei smile. It's the job of older siblings to protect the younger ones, Issei said. I can't wait till Friday when we can get you to the Gremory Mansion to meet your little brother. He's been dying to meet you ever since we mentioned we had found you. Just please don't be like your father or Seraphal, Grafia commented, both making Issei laugh and causing Ajuka's eyes to go wide as what Grafia said registered. Wait, this guy here is Takumi, you mean you finally found him, he said, surprised as he hadn't heard the news yet. Grafia then started explaining how they had found him. He goes to the same school as Sona, and they had by chance played a game of chess last year with him beating her, causing Ajuka to widen his eyes again as he knew exactly what that meant, and they started getting close. As you probably surmised, his powers were working against each other, hurting him, and a couple days ago Sona asked Pico to come get me to see about helping somehow keep his ice magic in check, not expecting that he was our long-lost son, she said, getting a thoughtful nod from Ajuka. We're hoping that with the checkup you can find out possibly how the stray hid him from us, how he got himself a draconic sacred gear, and a way to stop his magic from killing him. Getting another nod. Even though both him and your father are rivals, they have each other's backs. If you want to hurt one, you'll have to go through the other, Sona said, getting a laugh from Ajuka. Sure, but don't forget we're the same way when it comes to you, he said, having a bit of fun at Sona's expense, making her blush as she knew it was true. Deciding to get to why they were here, Ajuka commented right as a magical circle showed up under Issei, which startled him till Sona squeezed his hand, calming him down. How about we get down to why we're here, Takumi? Just stand still and it won't take but a minute. Getting a nod from him. He's always gone by Issei Ajuka, sir, so we decided to keep that name instead of going through the hassle of changing everything over. It's now his middle name. Grafia corrected him, making him nod his head even as he commented. We've known each other long enough, you don't need to worry about saying sir when off duty. he said, getting an eye roll from Grafia as well as a confused look from Issei. Seeing his confused look, Sona mentioned that even though his mother was the strongest queen, she was still the head maid for the Gremry family, which earned another confused look at his mother this time. It keeps me busy, Grafia commented, making him nod his head in acceptance as he understood what she was talking about. As the magical circle finished its work, Ajuka moved on to the next thing needing to be done. While your evil pieces start getting made, how about we get the next steps out of the way with some questions, nephew? He said, getting a confused nod from Issei. Seeing the confused look, Sona commented about why Ajuka called him his nephew. The four Mao see each other as their own family, hence him calling you his nephew as he sees your father as a brother and vice versa, getting a nod of understanding from Issei. Sure, what do you need answered, uncle? He replied back, not seeing anything wrong with what he had learned today, and earning a smile from Ajuka. Just a couple questions that will help with the process. Just answer with what first comes to mind, he said, getting a nod back. First question. What's your element? Ice and dragon fire. Favorite color? After looking at Sona, Issei commented, violet and gold. Earning a blush from Sona as she leaned into him, letting him rest his head on her shoulder. She had a feeling that it wasn't just a coincidence his favorite colors were the same as her eye colors. Symbol, Ajuka asked, smirking internally as he caught the small byplay between the two. Happy that Sona had found someone that she could get flustered around and act more like someone her age, though he knew not to bring it up as he wasn't sure even he was able to get around her eye magic. Rose with scale petals, Issei commented, slowly falling asleep as he leaned against Sona happily as she began carding her hand through his hair, making him relax. He'd been trying not to doze off all day due to classes, but loved the feeling he was experiencing and didn't try to fight it. How would you see your peerage making Grafia? Sona and Kaneko perk up at the question, curious how he would answer this question. As my family, like siblings, people to protect, making the three girls happy at his thoughts on the matter. Last two questions. What would you do to protect your family? Ajuka asked, happy with how things had gone so far. Anything, Issei replied, almost asleep at this point. Final question. What's your thoughts on Seraphal Leviathan? He said, smirking in his mind as he used this as a trick question to throw new kings off balance, and he would normally get two types of replies. One of awestruck wonder and lustful thoughts, which the second one caused Ajuka to flare his power out at them, but Issei's answer. Nobody was sure if it would have been different if he wasn't almost asleep, had him laughing. Kaneko and Sona smiling, trying not to laugh, and Grafia rolling her eyes. Seraphal, forgive my words, but she batshit crazy. Seraphal would both never hear the end of this and pout when she heard what had happened that day. After getting back from the underworld, Sona gave Issei the rest of the day off from school, though had him stay in the council room. By this time, though, the girls that had been around and learned that Sona and Issei were now engaged had spread the word around school, and once it started it spread like wildfire, surprising everyone at the school. When the end of school came around, both Matsuda and Madohoma came and grabbed him to grill him about being engaged now and talk about how it happened, while also trying to get some perverted questions in, but Issei just either brushed off the questions or pushed the two away if they got too far with them. But their fun didn't last too long. Right after they had reached a park and sat down to continue their conversation, Issei felt a massive pain rip through his body, much worse than when one of his attacks hit him, and he looked down to see a spear of light through his chest that went away right before he fell to the ground. Trying to stay conscious, he looked over to see his friends being skewered through the same way he had by the fallen angel he had denied a date with not that long ago. Cackling as she finished off the three, Rainier only had one thing to say before she flew off. Not only do I get to kill two sacred gear users, I get to kill the kid that turned me down for a date. By this time, only Issei and Matsuda were just barely awake, while Madohoma had fallen unconscious. Matsuda's next words, though forced due to his injuries, caused something to happen that Issei wasn't expecting. Shit, I don't want to die here, he said, getting a then don't. Join me as my servants and live. Came out of both Matsuda and Madohoma's pockets as a piece of paper flew out of Matsuda's pocket and formed into a teleportation circle with the Gremry symbol on it before Rias herself came through the circle. Stepping through the circle, she saw her two targets and Issei down. Rias stepped over to Matsuda and Madohoma and laid 4 pawn pieces on them apiece, happy to see the glow signifying they would work, and completely ignoring Issei until he called out to her. Rias, to which she only looked over and sneered. You aren't worth my time to deal with, plus consider this payment for you telling my brother about what's been going on at school, though I don't want to even guess how you got a hold of him, she said before she took his two friends through a magic circle. Now alone, hurt and barely conscious, Issei just had a couple of thoughts left before he fell to unconsciousness himself. Damn it, Mama, Papa, Milikas, Sona, Kaneko, seems like my time has come. Mama, Papa, I'm sorry you just got me back, but am now losing me once again. I'm glad I got to meet you. I'm sorry that I won't be able to meet my younger brother. Kaneko, I'm glad I got to know you, but it looks like I won't be able to be your older brother anymore. Sona, thank you for everything. I'm glad I was able to tell you I love you, was all he was able to get out before he sucked to darkness. Cut to Sona. Sona was leaning forward, elbows on her desk, listening to a report being given by Tsubaki while the rest of her peerage did things around the room. Suddenly, she reeled back in shock, causing the young woman, along with her chair, to crash into the wall behind, the heiress holding her chest as if she had been struck with tears coming to her eyes. Kaichu, what's wrong? Tsubaki ran over, dropping the report she was holding to rush around the desk and check on her king, with the rest of the council not far behind having been alerted by Tsubaki calling out and the chair crashing into the wall. Sona didn't answer Tsubaki outside of shaking her head as she was still trying to recover from the massive shock to her system when she suddenly heard a voice, frail, barely conscious, come into her head, recognizing it instantly as Issei's. Damn it, Mama, Papa, Milikas, Sona, Kaneko, seems like my time has come. Making Sona start shaking her head in denial and start saying no, 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 no. Please don't say it's true. Confusing the girls right as the council room door slammed open, surprising the girls as Kaneko rushed and having heard the same thing going on in her head. What cemented it for Sona though was Issei's last words before she quit hearing his voice as if he had already passed away. Sona, thank you for everything. I'm glad I was able to tell you. I love you, which made her cry out for him right as Kaneko reached her side. While this was going on, her magic activated in reaction to her emotions going haywire due to her wish not to lose Issei and sent out a massive shockwave of power with her and Kaneko in the center of it throughout the school and shocking the rest, her peerage, into falling back from the power coming off of her, before pulling her and Kaneko into a magic circle to Issei's location, and leaving the rest of the student council confused on what the hell had just happened. Issei. What she didn't know or realize until much later was that she had somehow used teleportation magic to get to Issei without a contract or even knowing where she was going, as well as somehow pulled along another person. She would later learn it had to have been her magic reacting to her emotions at the time and pulled Kaneko along, possibly due to Sona knowing how much she loved Issei too, even if it was just a brother-sister relationship. Plus, after talking about it with D-Drag, he commented that it could have been the engagement ring reacting to her magic somehow, and helping move them to his location due to the fact it had a piece of the boosted gear in it. But all that was just a guess, as nothing like this had ever happened before to his knowledge. Cut to Kaneko. Kaneko was on her way back to the student council office after school to hang out with Sona and Issei when she couldn't help but notice that something felt off but couldn't place it until she heard Issei's voice in her head. Damn it, Mama, Papa, Milikas, Sona, Kaneko, seems like my time has come. Rushing to the council room, she ran in and could tell that something had just happened to Sona, as all of the council was hovering around her. As Kaneko ran up to Sona, she heard in her head, Kaneko, I'm glad I got to know you, but it looks like I won't be able to be your older brother anymore. No, please don't leave me. Big brother, she cried in her head, hoping he would hear her, right as she reached Sona. Seeing Sona shaking her head in denial, she went to hug her, knowing exactly what was happening. Right as she reached her though, Sona's magic activated with her desire to not lose Issei and pulled them both to his location. Cut to Grafia, Serzech, and Milikas. As soon as she got off work, Grafia went with her husband and younger son to see Ajuka as Issei's evil pieces were done. Both Serzech and Grafia were proud of their son as he had the power within him to get a full set of mutated pieces, which was extremely rare. Most sets only came with one, if any, as a mutated piece. Right as she stepped forward to take the box from Ajuka holding the pieces, she stumbled, hands instantly going to her chest as if struck by something, which if it wasn't for Milikas grabbing the box, the pieces would have fallen all over the floor. Grafia, what's wrong? Serzech shouted at his wife as he grabbed her, keeping her upright as she looked around wondering what had just happened. As Milikas looked on scared as to what happened and Ajuka looked around trying to find anything amiss that might have caused this, Grafia started to answer him. I don't know, I felt like I'd just been hit in the chest by a light SB before both her, Serzech, and Milikas' eyes widened as they heard a voice in their heads. Damn it, Mama, Papa, Milikas, Sona, Kaneko, seems like my time has come. Making Grafia, and by extension, Serzech as he was holding on to her, fall to their knees. No, please no. Don't let it end now as we just got him back, Serzech said, starting to cry. Ajuka, who had just turned towards his computer screens to try and figure out what had happened, snapped his head back to them as Serzech's words registered in his mind, and he swore to himself, realizing something had to have happened to Issei and it wasn't good, right as the three heard Issei's voice in their head again. Mama, Papa, I'm sorry you just got me back, but I'm now losing me. I'm glad I got to meet you. I'm sorry that I won't be able to meet my younger brother. Milikas, who had never heard Issei's voice, but knew of him through his parents and couldn't wait to meet him, wondered if that was his voice in his head. Is that big brother? I've heard about what's going on with him, that he sounds so bad, but before he could say anything, Ajuka stepped in, taking charge since he was the only one that had what could be called a level head in this situation due to not hearing the voice. Milikas, hand me Issei's king piece quickly. I left a contract on him during the checkup in case something happened, so I can get to him now, he ordered, and after Milikas handed it over he immediately teleported out, leaving the family huddled together as Grafia pulled Milikas into the huddle and hoped that Ajuka got to their son in time. Back to Issei. Kaneko and Sona had just reached Issei and realized why he had sounded so weak and wasn't able to say much when he talked to them. In their heads he was face down in a park with a massive hole in his chest. As they rushed over to him, they tried everything they could think of, crying all the while hoping to anyone that would listen that he would make it through to keep Issei alive, as they could just barely feel a pulse on him. Even trying to use Sona's unused mutated rook pieces, but they only glowed dully, showing that they weren't powerful enough to reincarnate him. Right as it crossed Sona's mind to try and contact someone for help, Ajuka showed up in a teleportation circle and instantly took in what was going on, before moving to put Issei's king piece on top of Sona's rooks, and all three started glowing strong, signifying that they were strong enough for the reincarnation process, and sank into his chest, stunning both Sona and Ajuka that it took 3 mutated pieces, before Sona pushed that to the back of her mind as she started the process of adding him to her peerage, while Kaneko hugged him from behind, glad to have not lost him. After finishing the incantation, Sona leaned down to listen for a heartbeat and could hear it, before leaning forward and giving him on the forehead. "Don't you ever do that to me again, Issei," she said, knowing he wouldn't be able to hear her at the moment. Sona jumped slightly when Ajuka put a hand on her shoulder and commented, "I'm glad we made it in time. Why don't you take him home and start the skin process, and I'll go tell Grafia," was all he got out before a massive blast of power knocked him off his feet, while leaving Sona and Kaneko alone. But Ajuka wasn't mad or anything after he realized the power that had knocked him down was coming from Issei. But what happened next surprised everyone there, including 2 new faces. We'll come back to them in a moment, that had shown up right before the massive wave of power came out of Issei, and they weren't affected by his power either. Where Issei's hair had been a mostly brown color before, it now had streaks of gray going through it, just like Grafia's, and his skin had turned a slightly darker tint to it, but only just noticeable if you had really keen eyes, such as the ones Ajuka had. It looked like his magic powers had finally balanced themselves out inside of him, as ice magic, fire, and something like steam was swirling around Issei, and by extension, Kaneko and Sona, but it wasn't hurting any of the 3. Scales grew over half of his body while the other half turned to ice right as 2 skeletal dragon wings popped out of his back before retreating back into him. Right as the 2 new faces rushed over scared about what they had just witnessed, and shocking the other 3 before Sona and Kaneko recognized them and calmed down somewhat. Seeing the 2 new arrivals but noticing how Kaneko and Sona didn't seem worried, Ajuka decided to leave it be and finish his original statement but adjusted slightly. "That was interesting. I'll go let Grafia, Sirzech, and Milikas know he's okay while you get him home and work with these 2, helping them understand what they just saw," he said, pointing to the newcomers as Sona gave him a nod of thanks and had one thing to comment on before blasting Ajuka off his feet with his response. "You have a knack for understatements." "Thank you, Sotan," he said, trying to lighten the mood a little, but was instead knocked off his feet by Sona's magic. "I'll head out now. Let me know if you need anything else," he said, a little breathless from the blast to his stomach, before teleporting out. Sona packed a punch these days. Nodding her head once more, she turned her head to Miramea and Cadace, the newcomers that had shown up late to the party. "I'm sure you 2 have a bunch of questions," she said, getting a nod from them, "but can we save them for tomorrow? I promise I will explain everything soon, but I need to get Issei here home and finish the healing process," she said before pulling out a pad of paper and writing down her phone number for the 2. "Please, don't talk about this to anyone until you talk to me, Issei, and most likely by extension Kaneko here," she paused, pointing to the other girl, "about what you saw." She finished, hoping they would accept her words and leave it for tomorrow. After throwing a look at each other and nodding, Miramea agreed but had one question to ask. "I think we can agree with that for now, Kaichu, as we both want to know what happened before we showed up, but one question if I may," she asked, getting a nod of approval from Sona. "Was that magic we just saw?" Sighing but thankful it was a, for the most part, simple question considering what had happened, Sona just replied with yes it was. "There's a lot of stuff you 2 don't know about, but I'm sure Issei wouldn't mind you knowing considering how close you are," getting a nod of acceptance. "But before I forget, can I get both of your numbers too, just in case?" she asked, getting a nod before passing her notepad over and getting their numbers. "Well, with it I hope you 2 have a good night, and if you need anything let me know," she said as she prepared to teleport out, not wanting to try and do any other way after the day's events and the 2 girls seeing what they had seen. After Sona teleported out, Kaneko sighed as she looked at the girls in front of her and said goodnight before leaving herself, knowing where exactly she should go after the night's events and not wanting to go back and possibly deal with her peerage mates who might try and find out what's going on. Looking at each other after they were the only ones left, they could only laugh at the absurdity of what had just occurred before their very eyes. Issei's body changing, growing wings, everything was beginning to be too much to handle, but they did as requested, knowing that Sona would uphold her honor and talk to them tomorrow, so they headed home. As he slowly woke up, Issei at first couldn't figure out where he was. Then once he figured out he was in his bed, how he got there. But as that thought came to the forefront of his mind, another one came up that took more precedence. There was a warm body pressed against his. He just realized he didn't have any clothes on, naked body, and that body felt like no clothes were on it too. Looking down, he realized that Sona was lying next to him just as naked as he was. "Sona," he said in shock, waking her up. "Morning, Issei," she said before her mind caught up and she jumped up and gave him a hug. "You're awake," surprising him. "Of course, but what's going on? How'd I get home? Plus I thought I died yesterday," he asked before getting a slap to the face from her. "Don't remind me about that. "You scared us half to death when we heard your voice in our heads, and I felt you getting stabbed," she said, confusing him at first, but then he remembered calling out to his loved ones right before he passed out. "I almost broke down completely when I thought I'd lost you," she said, burrowing her head into his chest, trying not to cry but not able to stop it completely. Issei held on to her, surprised for a moment, until he realized just how close she had gotten to him and that any death of his would hurt her badly. And he had probably made it worse by not accepting her request to reincarnate him, even if they both agreed his reasoning was a sound and valid thought. But talking about it and it happening were two different things, and he promised in his head to do everything he could to keep it from happening again. "I'm truly sorry for what I caused you, but who would have expected that fallen angel to do what she did? I promise to do everything I can to not let something like this happen again," he told her, pulling her in close and doing his best to calm her down, which seemed to work. Calming down just by being in his presence, Sona finally moved away from Issei's chest, but only far enough she could look up at him. "You better keep that promise. You were lucky that your evil pieces were ready in time and that Ajuka had placed a contract on you when we were at his office getting you checked out," she said, having heard from him how he had shown up so quickly, not long after Sona and Kaneko did. He'd known instantly something had happened after seeing what was going on with Grafia and Surzech, as they were hearing Issei's voice in their head just like Sona and Kaneko did, and took immediate action. "It took your king piece and my 2 mutated rooks just to reincarnate you, which on that note, your illness should be gone now that you're back to being a devil," she said, before another bit of crying hit her. "Just please don't do that to me again, even if it means we get married right now, or even make love to me and put a baby in me." It was bad enough the first time around, as Issei planted it on her forehead, helping calm her down more. Issei couldn't fault her for anything she was saying. He had gotten to know her well enough by now to know that she took friendships seriously, and they had gotten close even before he knew about them being engaged, so he just held her close and let her feel at home. Sona, though, realized she had something she needed to mention to him before anything else happened, but as she leaned back to speak, his bedroom door opened, and his adoptive mother came in before stopping as she saw what was going on. "Honey, Sona and Issei are both in his bed naked," she said, yelling down to her husband as she closed the door, missing both Sona and Issei and starting blushing at her words. "Sounds like we'll be having grandkids in the future," her husband replied back, making the two's blushes deepen as they looked at each other. "Grandkids," Emiko yelled back, sounding like she was alternating between being happy that it might be happening and rushing back in to make sure it wasn't, causing both kids to laugh at each other. But before Issei could get up to get dressed, Sona stopped him to tell him something important. "Issei," she said, getting his attention, "we've got a slight situation that popped up after you passed out yesterday and we found you," she said, causing him to pay close attention and nod for her to continue. "Cadis and Miramea showed up right as a magic blast came out of your body as it changed some and saw the magic, and now know that there is more out there in the world than they originally thought. I'm supposed to meet them today and explain things to them due to how hectic yesterday was. I requested to meet them today, and they agreed." Getting a shocked look from him as he learned 2 of his best friends had been pulled into their world, even if it was by accident. "I was planning on having them meet me at the council office after school, and while I would love you to be there, I don't want you to push yourself as you were just stabbed," she said before he stepped in and said, "I will be there." Getting up and going to the restroom, he noticed his hair had slightly changed with silver streaks in it, which he liked, and his eyes now looked more like a dragon's with slits in them. Just remembering something due to seeing his eyes, he called out to D-Drag. "Hey D-Drag, you still here?" he asked as Sona came up to him after hearing his question. He replied sheepishly out loud to where Sona could hear him too. Hearing how bad his partner sounded that he couldn't help, Issei told him not to worry about it, getting a nod from Sona, as even though she wasn't happy, she wanted to try and push it to the past and not deal with it if possible, but knew she would have to when talking to the Kendo girls. Getting to the main point about why he had asked D-Drag, he asked about the eyes, and he said it was more from his influence, but did mention that he could change them back with magic, which Issei decided to do whenever he was out in public as he liked the new look. He also felt a closer connection to D-Drag than before, but decided to come back to that another day as both Sona and Kaneko headed off to school, after Kaneko came up and hugged him tightly, glad to see him up and moving around, after being told to not worry about him for now and he would see them in the council room later when it came time to talk to the Kendo girls. The student council had given Issei the rest of the week off, putting his absence down as recovering from a stabbing attack, and as the week after was spring break, no one besides the student council, Miramea and Cadis, and Kaneko had seen him. He had talked to the Kendo girls and told them everything, surprising them about the depths of a world they had known nothing about and making them think about some things, and then spent most of the rest of the time spending it with Sona playing chess or just cuddling, as well as finally getting a chance to go and meet his little brother Milikas, who he got right along with and had a blast just hanging out with him and having fun while trying not to overdo it like his father was known to do, and letting Grafia get a lot of pictures of the two hanging out. He had also spent some time talking with Ajuka about his checkup, and he stated that, as Sona had mentioned, his powers were no longer working against each other now that he was a full devil again, but due to the issues his powers had caused, his body had 16 years of damage dealt to it and would take time before he would be back up to full strength as his body healed itself. He also had a guess how he had been able to get a sacred gear. Whatever the stray had done to keep Issei from being found had changed his genetics enough from being a devil to being more human that it must have registered him in the sacred gear system that controlled who got gears. It was also possible it was just a glitch in the system. He had also explained the interesting turn of events that had happened due to it taking both Issei's king piece as well as Sona's 2 rook pieces. Due to the fact that his king piece had been on top and went in last, Issei technically wasn't a part of Sona's peerage. He simplified it by saying that most peerages are considered master-servant relationships, but with how it turned out in Issei's case it's more of a partnership. Issei could deny being a part of her peerage when it came to stuff like raiding games, but he knew he would never do that, as he would do anything he could for her. What the students at Kyo Academy saw come Monday morning after not seeing him all week was Issei and Sona walking hand in hand through the gates like there wasn't a care in the world. 2 people were in great mood seeing Issei finally after the incident. Matsuda and Madohoma ran up to the 2 and talked to them. "Nice hairdo. How are you holding up?" Matsuda said as he got a glimpse of Issei, making him laugh and Sona roll her eyes, though both he and Madohoma wanted to talk about what had happened back then but couldn't due to how many people were around. "Thanks. Happened after the stabbing," Issei said, fully expecting they had questions but knew they couldn't ask with where they were at. Looking over at Sona for a second, hoping she'd understand what he was trying to do, he commented, "Hey, did y'all hear about that new app that just came out? It shows what piece from the game of chess you could be and what powers you might get if it was a real-life game," he said, surprising the group, but everyone caught on quickly that he was trying to give them a safe way to talk about it. "I got 2 rook pieces, an ice and draconic fire magic. Somehow though I redid the test the same way and got a king piece but the same magic." Catching on, Matsuda then Madohoma commented, "That's pretty cool. I got 4 pawn pieces and an absorption ability. Sweet. I also got 4 pawns but a reflecting ability apparently," making both Issei and Sona look happy at what they had gotten, while Sona had a thought. Now it makes sense that Rias and her peerage would think that the 2 had Issei's magic instead of him. She thought, but it wasn't enough to calm her down after hearing what Rias had done to Issei. Issei had told her that Rias had come and saved her new pawns, but completely left Issei alone when she took Matsu and Moto. She had instantly contacted her sister and Surzech, who were just as pissed and were going to do something immediately, but Issei managed to stop them, saying that it would be better to handle all her punishments after they met with Lord and Lady Gremory later in the week when Lord Gremory got back from business trips and let them know their grandson had been found. "Nice. I got a king piece too, as well as water magic and some eye magic," Sona said, keeping her thoughts to herself about their king as it wasn't her place right now to let them know, though Issei did make sure to let them know about what was coming later in the week for their king. After hearing Sona's words and realizing that she was a devil like them, and a king no less, both boys rushed to Issei planning on pestering him about his love life again, but Sona stepped forward and grabbed their collars before realizing that they hadn't meant anything bad by it, so let go of them. "Sorry about that, but I'm still anxious over what happened," she said, getting a nod from the 2 of them in acceptance. "No worries, we should have thought about it more before we jumped at him like that," Matsuda said, getting a nod from Madohoma as Issei came up behind Sona and wrapped her in a hug. "Am I to expect you to be more protective of me from now on?" he asked as Sona leaned back into him, amused. Not that he could blame her or would, but it still amused him. "Yes, but not just me," she said as she saw the student council and Kaneko walking towards them. "I'm sure you can guess who else would be without question," she finished, looking up at his face. He had grown a couple inches during his transformation, so she had to look up more than before. Smirking at his fiancé, what he said next had his 2 buddies laughing at them while she blushed. "Sure, but they aren't the ones that said that you'd marry me right that moment or let me put a baby in you to make sure it didn't happen again," he said, laughing as she turned around to push him. "While that may be true, you didn't have to say it out loud where people could hear you," she said, blushing up a storm at his words before he leaned down and at her before hugging her again. Fine, I won't mention it again," he promised as the rest of the council and Kaneko showed up. Walking up to the 2, Kaneko's next words had the 2 blushing up a storm, the student council, Matsuda and Madohoma laughing so hard they could hardly stand, and the rest of the students nearby that heard it too shocked for words. Kaneko could tell they hadn't done anything with her senses, they were still pure, but she couldn't keep a joke from coming out to help with the mood. "Is this to do with what Issei's parents were saying last night?" she asked as she rubbed Sona's stomach. "Am I going to be an aunt?" Kaneko's words would cause many troubles in the days to come for the couple. After Sona had gotten to school, she waited for the members of her peerage to show up for an emergency meeting to catch them all up on the night before once things had calmed down somewhat after getting Issei home. She'd contacted Tsubaki to let her know she'd let everyone know in the morning what had happened and to have her let the peerage know about the emergency meeting. And to say they were shocked would be an understatement, as everyone there had grown close to Issei over the past year and didn't like what they had heard. What none of them knew at the time, due to Issei having forgot to bring it up due to what had happened that morning, was Rias's involvement in the situation and would have made it worse. Tsubaki, her mind working through all she had learned, asked what the next plan was and how to deal with the fallen angels. What's the plan now, Kaichu? Are we going to go after the fallen, or has that not been decided? Getting a nod from the rest of the peerage. Sona sighed, wondering that herself, but she knew she needed to give orders for now concerning the issue. For now, we do nothing about them. I need to contact my sister and see what options we have before we do something rash and possibly make the situation even worse than it is now. Even with the fact that they attacked first, she said, getting a nod from everyone. For now, I want everyone on alert at all times and contact me the instant anything happens. I don't care how small, but if you get attacked first, then you are authorized to defend yourself. Getting another nod. Tsubaki, approving of the plan, had one more question to ask before school started. Understood. Kaichu, what's the plan for dealing with the kendo girls? Having heard about how they had stumbled into the situation last night and wasn't sure how Sona wanted to deal with them. Nodding her head at the question, Sona said, I'll be telling them everything here in the council room after school, as I'm sure if Issei had the option to, he would anyways, and I trust them, especially after seeing how much they care about him. Getting a nod of acceptance. Momo, Rhea, can you grab the two for me after school? I'll message them letting them know to expect you and bring them here. I'll be grabbing Issei and having him be here too, as he said he wanted to be. But I want every one of you here too, she said. Getting a nod from everyone showing that they would be here. Final thing before I'm done for now, we need to make sure and fill out the forms giving him the week off due to the attack. And I'll be doing that in a minute. Making everyone nod their head at her words. You're dismissed. See everyone later. Kaori and Yui had gone through the day wondering what would happen when Sona talked to them, while also not being sure what to expect after what they saw the day before. They had received the message from Sona alerting them to Momo and Rhea picking them up after school, and had also let them know that she had alerted the kendo club they wouldn't be there today, so they weren't surprised when the two came up and had them follow. What they weren't expecting to see, if they were being honest, was Issei there also, and that Sona was looking absolutely pissed, but was doing her best to hide it. What no one besides Issei and Sona knew was that right before they had come to the meeting, he had told her about what Rhea had done when she picked up his two friends, and suffice it to say she was furious, and so were his father and her sister after she called them about it, but he had managed to keep them from doing anything for now, but barely. Hey girls, he said, standing up from the couch he was sitting on when they entered, causing them to run up and tackle him into a hug, grateful to see that he was alive and almost knocking him to the ground. I'm sorry to have worried you two yesterday. I wasn't expecting that to happen at all, but I'm sure you have a lot of questions. So we'll do our best to answer them, he said, pointing to himself and Sona and making the two nod. Coincidentally, Kaneko hadn't been able to join them due to having to go to the Orc and deal with stuff there. After having everyone sit down, Sona behind her desk and everyone else finding seats, Sona took the reins to get the ball rolling. As I said yesterday, I would explain what you saw and answer any questions today, so here we are. My question though is, where do you want us to start? She said, getting a nod from the two at the perfectly valid question in their minds. After looking at each other for a second, Kaori spoke up. They had talked it over before coming here about who would mostly be asking questions, but had decided to just play it by ear. And if needed, Kaori would take over from them. If you don't mind, I'd like to get out of the way now how we came across the incident last night, as I would be surprised if you didn't wonder that. I know I would, she said, getting a nod from Sona to continue, as it was something she had been wondering in the back of her mind, as Tsubaki brought everyone tea. It had just been what some people would call at the wrong place at the wrong time, though in this situation it hadn't ended badly for them. Just awkwardly, the two of them had been on their way home, due to kendo practice being cancelled early from the power starting to flicker wildly and the building itself shaking, with no one being able to figure out the reason to, so the instructor told everyone to head home to be on the safe side. And while they were passing near the park when they had seen Sona and Kaneko surrounding someone on the ground with an older guy standing above them that they didn't recognize, after making the decision to run over to see what was going on and possibly offer help. They got to the group right as Issei's power had knocked over Ajuka without hurting anyone else in the group. Nodding her head, Sona had one comment. Thank you for letting us know, as that had been a question on my mind, but as hectic as yesterday was for us is why I requested to leave it till today to answer any questions. So back to my original question. Do you have any, or should I go ahead and dive into what happened? But it will require some information given to understand exactly what happened. Looking at each other again, both girls nodded and said they would like to dive into what happened the day before. Nodding once again, Sona dived into giving information, having talked it over with Issei that she should do it for the most part, since he had only recently gotten back into the supernatural world. Even though he knew a lot from his time with Grisela and Sona, not all of it was up to date. Due to your question yesterday, I would assume you know something about the supernatural, but if you don't mind, let me just go over most of it for now, and go from there. Getting a nod. You asked me yesterday if magic was real, and like I said, it is, she said before calling up a magic circle and pulling out a globe of water just as a demonstration, making the two girls' faces turn shocked. Most of the mythologies out there you probably have heard about are all real, but for the point of this chat there are only 3 you need to know and learn about. Getting a nod. From the Christian religion, you have three major factions: devils, angels, and fallen angels. Devils and angels are pretty self-explanatory, I would think, once more getting a nod. But fallen are angels that have fallen from grace and aren't allowed in heaven anymore. The three factions have been at war for over 1,000 years, but recently been under a détente, and for the most part hostilities have ceased now. It might seem weird that I'm mentioning this, but it leads to where I'm going with all this, she said as she braced for anything to happen. Why I mention all that for is to say that none of us here, besides the two of you, are human, she said as everyone in the room unfurled their devil wings, surprising the crap out of the two kendo girls. But both Sona and Issei noticed they didn't seem too worried about it, if you can't tell by our wings. Understandable either way, we are all devils, but only me and Issei are pureed devils. I will get back to that after Issei gets more into his history now that we know more, she said, getting a nod from Issei as he took over the reins. Like Sona said, we've learned my backstory earlier this week thanks to Sona asking for some help due to my illness from who we now know as my birth mother, he said, getting a shocked look from the two as they had heard about his past and how he was adopted. As you know, my illness was killing me, but what we hadn't known at the time but Sona has guessed was happening until recently was that my magic was the cause of it, which at this time he created a rose out of ice and brought out his boosted gear and explained the basics of it for the girls. This on my arm is what's known as a sacred gear. It was created by God to help humans fight against the supernatural. But we will come back to it in a minute, he said before putting it up and getting a nod from the two. Sona had the thought back not long after we first met that I might have devil heritage due to my ice magic, but she didn't look into it more until a couple days ago when one of her sister's teammates, for want of a better word for now, came to check on her and she requested her to get my mother, not knowing that she was my mother, until both her and my father showed up and recognized me. Turns out I'm the oldest son of one of the current leaders of the devil faction and had been kidnapped from my parents' house when I was only a baby, and the stray that did it somehow changed my genetics enough to where I could get a sacred gear, as it's extremely rare for a full devil to get one, he said before seeing that the girls were still in shock. Do you want me to stop for a minute and let you process what's been said so far, he asked, kindly not wanting to push too much information on them at once, and they nodded. Kaori though had a question. You said that you and Issei were full devils, Kaichu, but what does that mean for the rest of the council? And from what happened yesterday, I would assume Kaneko is too a devil, she said, getting a nod from the two. Sona took over the reins for the time being. Yes, both of us were born into a devil family and are known as high-class devils. Both those that are born into high-class families and those that have risen up in ranks to high-class devils are given what are known as evil pieces, she said as she pulled out a pawn piece, which we can use to reincarnate humans into devils as our servants, she said, and stepped in again before either girl could say anything about the last point. No, it's not as bad as that might sound in a properly run peerage. The king and their pieces work together as a family, but there are peerages out there that are run poorly. Everyone in the student council is in my peerage, while Kaneko is in Ria's Gremories, who is also another high-class devil, peerage, and the orc is her peerage, and Issei is currently the only one in his. This time Yui spoke up. Peerages, and from what you had in your hand earlier, I'm guessing there is a chess theme to all of this, deciding to skip over the whole Ria's deal for now. Nodding her head, Sona continued, yes, peerages are the groups that high-class devils control, with the high class as its king, and they use the chess pieces to reincarnate someone into their group, and they work together. Like I said, depending on what piece you have gives you different perks that can be used in a fight. Getting a thoughtful nod from the two. You also mentioned sacred gears. Can we get a little more information on them? I noticed you said Issei has one, Kaori said. Sacred gears were created by God. Sona started having to pause due to the headache, to help humans like you protect themselves against the supernatural. As you heard, there are many different levels of gears that can do many different things, from ones that can summon all kinds of swords all the way up to the one like what Issei has, which has the soul of a dragon inside of it and allows him to control fire. After that got explained, Sona dived into what happened last night. I would like to keep going into this, but I feel like we should go ahead and explain what happened last night. And here me and Issei will split up from up to where he remembers to where we came, and she said before handing the reins once more over to Issei. I'm sure you noticed that I was missing from classes yesterday afternoon. Getting another nod. We had gone to the underworld, where devils live, to get me a checkup to see what could be figured out about my illness, which what we've figured out is my powers, the ice magic and the sacred gear I showed you, which allows me to control fire. By the way, we're fighting each other in my body for control, shocking the two, as well as get my evil pieces started being made, as since I just recently found out I was born a high-class devil. All I had to do to get them was go in and they would start the process after we got the checkup done. Sona gave me the rest of the day off, and after school, Matsuda and Madohoma came by to hang out, and we went out to a park and got attacked by a fallen angel. At this point, Sona stepped in due to how touchy this part could get. What happened next we can't explain a lot about due to complications, and until we see what you want to do after we explain everything. But we will get back to that part. Getting a confused nod from the two. Suffice it to say, the other two were grabbed by another person who left Issei out there dying by himself. And only I would say chances how I found him. I was working on paperwork here in the office when I felt like I had been struck by something, and which turned out to be I somehow felt the strike that killed Issei, and only realized it after I heard his voice in my head calling out to me. My magic power then somehow activated and pulled me and Kaneko to his location. She had heard the same thing in her mind too, where we found him dying and tried everything we could to revive him, including reincarnating him into my peerage, but I didn't have powerful enough pieces. Seeing their confused looks, she gave more information. Depending on how powerful someone is or how powerful their sacred gear is, would depend on how many pieces they would take to be reincarnated, and the only ones I had at the time weren't powerful enough due to his heritage and D-Drag right at this time. The man you saw with us, he's one of the leaders of the devils and head of technology department, and is also the creator of the evil pieces, showed up with Issei's finished king piece, and with it and my pieces we were able to revive him. Which is when you two showed up and saw what happened. From what Ajuka said, what you saw, the cold and hot powers and wings were his magic inside him starting to work together instead of killing him. Seeing the stunned looks on their faces, she finished off there. I'm sure I just gave you a massive amount to think about, but we do have one more thing to offer, but I'll let Issei take over once again, she said before he stepped up. I hope with everything you just heard here, you won't think any different of us or become afraid. We aren't here to hurt you or anything of the sort. We still want to be friends with you too, but I want to extend you a couple offers. Getting a nod. 1. Join us, join my peerage and help protect the world where you can, and that mainly just extends to Kyo, but still this has many benefits and a couple drawbacks to it too. I'll be going to meet my younger brother in the underworld over the spring break, and I'm offering you the chance to come with us even if you don't take the first choice. This might help you make a decision, but it's up to you. 3. If you want to forget everything you learned here, not our friendship or anything like that, but just about the supernatural, we can remove your memories of this and we can continue to live the lives we were, but I wouldn't mind you keeping your memories of what we are, so I don't have to keep as many secrets from you. 4. Keep your memories, but don't join a peerage. Surprised at what was being offered as well as what they had learned today, the supernatural being real, Sona, Issei and the student council, some of their best friends not being human, was a lot to take in, but they knew deep down that they could trust these people, and after looking at each other they nodded their heads. Personally, I wouldn't mind going with you to meet your real family, Issei, and would love to hear more about what might happen if I was to join you. Kaori said I just would need to clear it with my parents, but I don't think they would mind. I'm in agreement with Kaori and would love to go with you to meet your birth parents. Yui agreed with Kaori. Happy that they had agreed to it, Issei decided to go ahead and explain what pieces both he and Sona thought the two girls would best fit into, as well as some of the perks of what came with being a devil, hoping that they would join him. Devils have, compared to humans, better strength and resilience, as well as a much longer lifespan. Upwards of thousands of years if some are to be believed, depending on what piece you're reincarnated as would depend on how and what stats are boosted, he continued, getting a thoughtful nod from them holding up a pawn piece. He continued, the pawns could be considered an all-rounder type and is the basic unit of measurement for a reincarnated devil's power. But don't be fooled by it, as a pawn can be useful in any properly run peerage. They have the power of promotion, which allows them to promote to any other piece, like knight or queen, except king, and use their abilities. Next he pulled out a knight piece. The knight is what I would think fits the two of you the best. He said they have exceptional speed, precision, and reflexes, but little defense, which normally leads to weapon users, and they have to keep that in mind while in battle, making them look thoughtful at what he had said, but couldn't find anything to fault him in thinking that would work for both of them. Pulling out a bishop piece, he continued his lessons. Bishops are baseline magic users that are specialists at spellcasting but also have low defense, though anyone can learn magic and use it. Next he pulled out a rooks. If you go off of today's games, would be considered tanks. They have exceptional strength and stamina, but low mobility. He then pulled out the last piece, the queen. Whoever is the queen in a peerage is normally the second in command and takes over if something has happened to the king or the king isn't available. Though this can depend on the peerage, they are also the most balanced piece, having the advantages of the knight, bishop, and rook pieces without the drawback. He said finish going over all the pieces, as he looked over to Sona to see if he missed something. Taking over the reins once more, Sona continued, trust me when I say this, but that's what could be considered a crash course on the supernatural world. And if you do decide to join Issei's peerage, decide to keep the knowledge of the supernatural but not join a peerage or ask for your memories of this to be removed. Like Issei said, whatever you choose, it won't change our thoughts on the two of you, as you have proven yourself in my eyes and become great friends with everyone here. She finished, getting a smile from the two as they thanked her. Well, unless anyone else has anything else to bring up, I think we should call it a day here, as we have given you a lot to think over. Getting a nod from everyone at the idea. Just remember that you can't talk to anyone about this except for those here and the ones in the org. But feel free to let us know about any questions and about if your parents are fine with you going with us to see Issei's parents. Getting another nod from the two as everyone left. But Sona called for Issei to stay back for a minute. Issei, hold up a second. Getting a nod. After everyone left, Sona stepped over to him and gave him a hug that went well, don't you think? Getting a nod from him. Yeah, I thought that they took things very well, all things considered, and I hope that they take us up on my offer, but I'm not going to hold my breath on the small chance that they decide not to, he said, getting a nod of agreement from her as she wasn't too sure what the two might choose. Better make sure and let your parents know that they might have more guests than planned next week on the chance that they get to go ahead to come, she mentioned, getting a nod from him at the suggestion as they left the office to head home hand in hand. BGMI mansion. As she sat in her father's study, Riaz didn't know what to expect. She had been called to appear at her parents' mansion with the rest of her peerage, and had shown up to see that Sona had been called on too, as well as Sarafal and her queen Mukuru and Knight Pico. And Grafia in the back with Milikas and three cloaked figures. Kaneko had also moved to stand in the back with Grafia with her permission, now waiting on her brother to appear as he had to answer a call. She couldn't keep a feeling of dread from popping up in her stomach. Flashback during the 2 weeks before the meeting. Serzech's POV. Walking into his parents' house. Serzech was furious. Both he and Sarafal had recently gotten more information from Sona about when Issei had died and had immediately started making plans to deal with his sister, but Issei had managed to talk them down for the time being by saying they should push that off until the planned meeting with Lord and Lady BGMI. Serzech and Riaz's parents, to let them know that their lost grandson had been found, and figuring out punishments then, and they had reluctantly agreed, seeing the reason as sound for waiting. While the meeting had already been planned out, it wasn't required that Riaz be there originally. With the latest problems, he was on his way to get the plans changed with his mother. After walking in and finding a maid, he requested her to find his mother and let her know he was here for an important issue, and went to one of the sitting rooms to wait for her to arrive as the maid left. As his mother walked into the room, she could tell that something had him pissed off, but that he was trying to hold it in for now, sitting down across from him. She started the meeting off, "Hello son, if you don't mind me asking, what's got you in such a mood?" That I can sense it, easily surprised at what she could sense coming off of him, and that she could tell something was wrong. She hadn't felt him be this pissed off in recent memory, so she was a little concerned. Knowing what she was talking about, he tried to rein in his feelings and got to what he came here to do. "We have a problem. Something came up that I needed to make changes to. Who all I need here for the meeting we'll be having as soon as father comes home," he said, getting a confused nod from her to continue. "I can't say exactly what's happened due to a promise to hold off on it until the meeting, but I do need to, like I said, change who I need here. I need Sona and peerage. Riaz and peerage, me, Grafia, Milikas, 1, possibly 3 guests, and Sarafal plus whoever she wants to bring from her peerage." Thinking about it for a moment, Venelama couldn't think of any reason not to agree to who he had said needed to be at the meeting, but was curious about the 2 new guests. "As far as I'm concerned, that should be fine, but if I may inquire, who are these 2 new guests you have that you want to come with you?" she asked, more out of curiosity than denying them coming, as originally it was just 1 guest coming along with Sona and possibly her queen, as well as Sarafal. She didn't ask about the first guest, as they had already gone over that when the meeting first came up. Friends of Sona's that have recently learned about the supernatural and indirectly are involved in the situation that just popped up, he said, keeping most of the things to himself as promised so that it didn't slip out what happened to anyone who didn't know already, as he knew his parents would be thrilled to hear Takumi had been found, but not what else happened. He had heard that the 2 Kendo girls would possibly be coming with Issei and Sona when he came to meet his younger brother, and both Grafia and Serzech happily gave approval for them to come. And he had also mentioned how they had learned about the supernatural and offered them a spot in his peerage, but wasn't sure if they would take the offer yet. Nodding her head as she thought about it, she commented, "I don't see anything wrong, and I doubt Zioticus will. So I'll let him know. Do you want me to send summons to Sona and Riaz, or will you do it?" she asked, getting to the next question with the change of plans. "If you would do it, I think it will be best, and just put it as a summons with the reason to be announced at the meeting." Getting a nod from her, "I'll let the guests know, and like I said, I'm not sure right now if the 2 new ones will be here or not. But I knew I should put them on the list as a precaution, but with that I need to get going. Just had to make sure to get this done as soon as I could," he said, standing up to leave. Nodding her head once again, she stood up to see him off, but had to ask one question. "I know we said we wouldn't push to hear what's going on, but if I may, how bad is it that you had to come and change who you needed to be here?" Thinking about it for a second, he commented, "If I hadn't been stopped, I would be forcing the meeting to happen today if at all possible, though as it is I've promised to wait till the arranged meeting time," he said, getting a stunned expression from Venelama as those words registered and she saw him off. Sarafal POV. While Serzech was making the changes to who needed to be at the meeting, Sarafal was dealing with the other issue that Sona had told them about, the fallen angels and Kuo that had killed Issei and his friends. And contacting the governor of the fallen angels, Azazel, opening up a communications circle, she contacted Azazel directly, having already set up this meeting beforehand, so knew he was expecting her call. "Good afternoon, Sarafal. Not very often I get a call from you." Azazel started the conversation with. Azazel had the current look of a 30-something-year-old man with black hair and yellow bangs, and what some would call a technology freak, but more so for sacred gears, which he loved to study and find everything out about them that he could. He was the first one to pull out of the war between the 3 factions and was known for not trying to start a fight. "Hello Azazel, I'm sorry if you would like to chat and catch up, but I've got a situation that popped up recently involving some fallen angels, and I'm honestly not in the mood for small talk right now," she said, getting straight to the point. Azazel, who had known her long enough to realize that she wasn't in a playful mood today, nodded for her to continue. The other day, one of your fallen attacked a high-class devil and his 2 friends in Kuo and was able to kill them due to events that transpired years ago. And pure luck, I'm sure you remember how Sirzic's oldest son was kidnapped years ago, she asked, getting a nod. I don't know if you'll have heard yet, but he's been found recently and was attacked the other day but was able to be saved due to both my sister Sona and Ajuka getting to him in time and reviving him, she said, getting a shocked look from him, from which she could almost say with certainty didn't look faked. I'm calling, 1, to get your word you didn't send them for that purpose, which I don't think you would, and 2, to try and keep hostilities from getting worse by keeping each other informed, and finding out what exactly you want us to do in this situation, trying to keep things calm, which was her main job as foreign liaison. As Issei was definitely shocked to hear what had transpired and did his best to make sure Serafall knew this wasn't his doing. I can promise you I didn't send any Fallen to kill anyone, but I did send Fallen to check on known sacred gear holders that aren't either a part of a faction or hadn't awakened them yet, as we both know what could happen when one awakens, he said, getting a nod back. I'll certainly do a check on my side and see if I can find any information and keep in contact with anything I find, and when or if any devils have contact with that group you have my full permission to take them out, but if possible I'd like to capture one alive for interrogation. But if not, that's fine too. Nodding, she said, I've known you long enough to know you wouldn't normally have sent someone on a mission like this, especially into another faction's territory, and while I don't like the thought of not knowing there were Fallen in Kuo ahead of time, I can't deny why you would do what you did. Thanks for taking the call. As Issei knew he had most likely dodged a bullet this time due to the fact he knew how much of a Siskin Serafall could be about her sister, and was thankful it didn't end badly. He had taken a very calculated risk by not alerting the devils to what he was doing, and it could have ended in disaster. It's no problem, I'll let my assistant know to have any calls or messages from you forwarded to me instantly if you let her know it's related to this, getting a thankful nod back from her as she said goodbye and ended the call. As Issei POV. After hanging up with Serafall, he called in his head secretary Penemu. I need you to do a couple things for me, SAP, getting a nod, contact Volley, and let him know I need to see him in my office, and I need you to dig into anything you can find about the crew we sent to Kuo and see what might be going on with them, as they defied orders and killed 3 sacred gear wielders. We need this done quietly, and only Yumi, Volley, and possibly Barakil and Shimhazi should know about this for now. I don't want whatever is going on to get outside our knowledge, he said as she nodded and wrote down what he needed done. As she started to step outside the office, Azazel had another thought and stopped her also. Let the twins know to stick around and not go out of contact, at least for a while. I think they'll be a good help for this if we need to send someone there ourselves to help out, getting a nod from her as she left. Or club room. Riaz was working at her desk on paperwork with the rest of her peerage lounging around waiting for contracts, when she got a letter from her parents stating that her and her peerage were required to show up at her parents' house the set after next for an official summons. No reason behind the summons. Just said that the reason would be announced at the meeting, which was weird in itself, but she knew it wasn't something she could ignore and might be a good time to show her new pawns around the underworld, but she was annoyed that she had misjudged somehow what powers they had. She didn't think they'd be what she needed to deal with her situation, but that was at least a small issue right now, and she still had time sending a reply back. She warned the rest of her peerage to keep the date open as she went back to paperwork. Student Council Office. At the same time that Riaz got her letter, Sona got one herself, but she wasn't worried about it due to knowing it would be coming. Sirzich had warned her to expect one as he was going in to change the plans with his parents and get a summons sent out to both her and Riaz to keep suspicions down. She sent a reply and told her peerage, who hadn't heard the full story yet, to keep the date open and made plans to tell them before the date. Muramea POV. Walking to school the Friday after spring break, Kaori wasn't sure what to think about how her life had changed in just 2 weeks from the incident where they learned about the supernatural, to meeting Issei's real parents, who turned out his father was the brother of Riaz, surprising the Kendo girls since Riaz had been causing so much issues, but it also made a small amount of sense if one thought about it that she didn't know they were related yet. Both her and Yui had gotten permission to go with Issei and Sona to see his parents and meet his younger brother, and had a blast. His parents were easy to get along with and had made them feel at home, as well as helping answer any questions the two might have about the supernatural, and while there they had decided to go ahead and join Issei's peerage as his 2 knights. While they were in the underworld, the two had decided to try out their new strength by going against each other and were surprised at how much stronger they felt and faster they could move than before, and knew that they would have to be careful not to show too much strength doing anything with the Kendo club. As she stepped into the school, she saw Issei having to deal with more questions due to Kaniko's little prank on him and Sona, but he seemed to be dealing with it okay, so her and Yui just walked up and said hey to him. After turning around and seeing the two of them, he smiled and asked if they could come by the student council office during lunch for a quick update on things, not going into details about what due to it being supernatural business which the girls knew they couldn't talk about in the open, so they just nodded their heads. They knew something big was going on that involved both Sona and Issei, but they were being tight-lipped about it, and not even the rest of the student council knew about it from what they could tell, so they weren't worried about it too much, though it seemed like they might learn more at lunchtime, so the two Kendoka gave a nod of acceptance. Normal POV. Sona sat in the council office waiting on everyone to get there to get them caught up on what was going to go down the next day. Since only her and Issei knew the full details, as everyone got there, she waved Issei over to her before she started on the meeting. Go ahead and start eating. I'll try and make this brief. Kaneko, I'm sure you've heard about it from Rias, but there's more to it than she knows. The meeting tomorrow is to take care of a couple things. For Lord and Lady Gremory to meet their grandson, she said, pointing to Issei, and to also deal with Rias herself, surprising everyone. Both Sona and Issei had been trying to figure out if they should tell Kaneko about this early before the meeting or not, but knew they shouldn't. After checking with Serafal and Surzech, they were doing it now. What none of you know about the incident with Issei is that Rias went by there and grabbed both Matsuda and Motohoma and left Issei without doing anything with him while reviving the two. Before we heard his voice in our head, she said, making everyone understandably furious. I know how that will make everyone feel. Believe me, I did too once, Issei told me, and I contacted my sister and Surzech immediately, but we decided to wait until this meeting so we could get all the possible punishments out of the way at once, instead of possibly causing issues before this meeting. She paused there for a moment, getting her thoughts in order. I knew everyone here would want to know that going in, but right now our job is just to be there as support, and Surzech has said both he and Serafal will deal with it, as this could have cut connections between the two clans. But it hasn't come to that, but possibly barely, she said, getting nods from the group. Kaneko, I wish I didn't have to be the bearer of this for you, but I knew you would want to know about it, and as far as I'm concerned, you can stand as close to me and my peerage tomorrow as you want, or I'm sure Grafia wouldn't mind you standing by her in the back, from what she said the other day. Getting a nod from the girl, but Sona could tell she wasn't taking the news well, which was no surprise. Turning to the Kendo girls, she kept going, Kaori, Yui, if you want to come with us and see how this turns out, we have permission to bring you with us. Surzech's got that changed over just in case, and if you do, you will be standing in the back with Grafia, Milikas, and Issei, likely wearing a cloak to keep Rias from recognizing you, and can follow along till we announce who Issei is. But I'll be honest with everyone, I don't know how this will go down, as my sister and Surzech haven't said anything besides they'll deal with it, so expect anything. Kaori indeed was furious, but understood that there wasn't anything to be done about it right now, and why they would keep it from the group until the day before the meeting. I would love to go. I've already got my schedule cleared and checked with my parents and want to see this through myself. I've grown tired of all the rumors going around, and hopefully this will quell most of them. Getting a nod from Yui. I'm good to go too to the meeting, just let us know when to be here, Yui said, feeling the same as Kaori. She knew there were times that stuff had to be held back, and that if the knowledge had been said before now to the group, it might have caused more issues than it was worth. Nodding her head, Sona had one thing left to say. I'm sorry to have kept this from everyone, but I knew it could possibly cause issues if it was known too soon, so it's why we pushed it off till now. Getting an it's okay Kaichu from everyone. Dismissed. Be here tomorrow by 3 p.m. and we'll make our way to the Gremory mansion, she said as the bell rang to signal the end of lunch. As the group, all besides Kaneko who had to show up with Rias, gathered in the student council room, Sona gave one last bit of information. Remember, no one but us, Kaneko, Surzech, Grafia, Milikas, and Serafal know what this meeting is about, and we need to keep it that way and let my sister and Surzech handle it unless called upon. I don't want to do this either, but it's come to this point that something needs to be done. And so here it is, she said, getting a nod from everyone as a teleportation circle popped up and Grafia came out, surprising everyone. Grafia, welcome, but I'm surprised to see you here, Sona said, surprised to see her here instead of waiting for them at the mansion. Nodding her head at everyone, Grafia then mentioned why she was here. Hello Sona, I came by to grab Issei, Mirame, and Caddis and bring them separately instead of with your group. Getting a nod from Sona since they weren't going to be by her but back by Grafia, as the three in question moved over to Grafia's side, and the four left not long after. Stepping into another portal with her peerage, Sona reached the Gremory mansion right about the same time as Rias and her peerage showed up. Sona hadn't had much contact with her since the incident, trying to keep something from slipping out that she knew what happened, and only contacted her when she needed to. Hello Rias. Sona, hey, seems like we both got called here, Rias said, surprised to see that they had also been summoned. Any idea what this might be about? Seems like I didn't know. I don't have a clue. I just received a summons to show up here, she said, keeping her face neutral for now, as both groups walked into the mansion heading towards Lord Gremory's office. Venelama POV. While waiting on her son to come in from a phone call, she couldn't stop herself from thinking about what this meeting could be about. She hadn't seen Surzech that pissed off in a very long time and knew there was very few things that would do it, the biggest one being family, and as soon as one of the guests that had been mentioned came in with Grafia, she couldn't help but feel a connection, though couldn't place it, and was wondering who they were as Surzech walked into the room. Flashback end. Walking into the office, Surzech was glad to see that everyone was here that he requested be here as he walked up to his father's desk. And his next words surprised everyone in the room. Not in the know. Father, enough is enough. We have to stop spoiling Rias, he said, not quite yelling, but everyone there knew he was being dead serious. Rias jumped to at his words but chose to not say anything till she knew more. But she's the heiress, and that doesn't explain why she left one of our clan to die and almost cut ties with the Citri clan. Surzech cut off his father as he tried to say something, causing everyone not in the know to gasp, and Rias to wonder how she almost cut ties with the Citris. Explain. Venelama spoke with a sharp edge to her voice, knowing that he wouldn't make an accusation of this type without reason. She also knew how much her husband spoiled Rias, but she needed more before she would punish her daughter. She went and left my oldest son to die, once again confusing everyone not in the know, but his parents were the most surprised out of the bunch as they realized something. Wait, you finally found Takumi, Venelama said as her eyes caught motion in the back and snapped over to Grafia, who had an arm around one of the guests. With Milikas hugging the same person, Milikas might be one thing, young as he was, but she had never seen Grafia do that in front of them except in very rare occasions and when it concerned family. And she knew then who that one was, finally starting to figure out why her son was so pissed off when he came to change the plans for the meeting. Yes, from what Ajuka was able to determine, the stray that kidnapped him from us somehow changed his genetics around where he got turned into a half-human and suppressed his demonic powers, though that change allowed him to receive a sacred gear and unlocked his ice magic, and they started fighting each other not long after the stray finished whatever he did. He left him in an alleyway and was adopted by a couple in Kyoto, but now Ria's actions almost cost him his life. At this point, Rias couldn't help but ask a question. Who's Takumi? She'd never heard that name before to her confusion, but now that she thought more on it, it did spark a small reminder in the back of her head. Takumi is your oldest nephew, just a few months younger than you, and was kidnapped when you were only a year old from his crib. Zioticus spoke up to answer her question and letting everyone else know that didn't. Okay, but how did I almost kill him and end our alliance with the Citries? I've never met a Takumi, she replied, still not seeing how she was in the wrong here. You don't realize you know him due to the fact that the couple that adopted him gave him a different name. We only found out about it due to the fact that Sona thought she noticed a resemblance to Grafia in him and asked Pico to request her help with his magic, since it was vying for control with his fire-type sacred gear in his body and tearing it apart, not realizing the connection until we showed up. Okay, but that still doesn't answer the question of how I almost killed him, she started saying, and then winced at Matsuda's words to Madohoma standing next to him, though he thought he'd said it quietly enough for only Madohoma to hear him. Forgetting about Devil's great hearing, did she forget about leaving Issei to die when she revived us and causing Sona's peerage to snort? As Rias turned to glare at the two. Who's this Issei you mentioned just now? Venelama asked the two newest members to her daughter's peerage. Issei's been our friend since we were in diapers pretty much, but has had a massive health issue these past few years that can cause attacks that make him cough up, but don't let that fool you, he'll do anything for his friends. Having saved both mine and Madohoma's lives before, his health has been so bad for a while now. He coughs up whenever an attack hits, and it's said he won't live until graduation, Matsuda said, having gotten permission to bring this up from Issei before the meeting. He sounds like a great young man, I wouldn't mind meeting him one day, Venelama said. I'm surprised he's not here considering Sona revived him, Rias said, taking a sip of water from a cup she had nearby, missing the smirk from Surzech. And that right there's the problem, Rias, you left their friend to die, and by extension, when the couple adopted Takumi, they named him Issei, he said, making his mother glare at Rias, while her father just frowned at her for now before he asked the next question on what his son had brought up. Okay, but how did she almost cut our ties with the Citri clan? At this point, Sona stepped in as it involved her directly. Issei is my best friend and fiancé, both of which Rias has known about for a while, but she still left him to die. Yes, it's true I revived him, but what would have happened if I hadn't made it in time, or my pieces hadn't worked out, she said as she stepped over to Issei, figuring now was the time to reveal him, and also leaving out the fact of that it also took his king piece to revive him, as she removed the cloak that had been hiding him and surprising Rias's peerage and causing her to choke on her water, while Surzech stepped back to put his arm around Issei, and Tsubaki had managed to get a couple pictures of Rias's shocked face since she knew what her king was doing. Now completely understanding her son being so mad, Venelama demanded an answer to what exactly is going on, but it was Kiba who answered the question, trying to defend his king. He tried to claim it was an accident when he fell on her once and groped her, he said, making Sona confused as she hadn't heard this story yet. You groped Ria, she asked, getting a shake of the head from Issei and his friends. That was a complete accident, I swear it was right before the rumors started, and I happened to be going down some stairs when an attack hit and tripped, and she was unfortunately on her way up the stairs at the time. I didn't recognize her when it happened and tried to apologize, but she didn't listen and ran off, getting a nod from Matsuda and Madohoma since they had been there and spoke up before Rias could. Both of us can back that up as we were with him when it happened, Matsuda said, getting Venelama to motion for him to continue talking about it. Like he said, we'd been going down some stairs talking when an attack hit him and caused him to stumble. And though we tried to catch him, we missed, and he broke his wrist when he landed. He finished as Grafia went to check his wrist, while Issei said that it had already healed just fine. Now that you mention it, I remember when you broke your wrist, I just never did hear what caused it, and I don't know how I didn't realize at the time that you weren't fully human how fast you healed, Sona said, remembering that time Rias had. You were more focused on keeping me alive, and getting me to agree to you reincarnating me if I died to worry about something like that, he said, making her blush. Don't remind me about that, it took your mutated king as well as my two mutated rooks just to revive you, surprising everyone not in the know, except his parents, Kaneko and Sona, as they had heard it from Ajuka after the incident, or been there when he was revived. But how can that be? The Devil King Devola said that anyone that would take more than 3 mutated pieces would not be able to be reincarnated, Lord Gremory stated, shocked at everything they had learned today, as well as mad at his daughter for what she had done. Forgive my words, but Devola, if it wasn't for Sona and Ajuka I wouldn't be here right now, Issei said, having covered Milikas's ears before he spoke, causing Surzech to laugh and Sona to lightly hit him in the stomach with a stern look. But if Issei was born a full devil, how did he get a sacred gear? Kaneko asked a question she still wasn't entirely sure on, and her question had both Serafal and Surzech give each other a look before he answered. The sacred gear system is a bit buggy, one could say, as stuff like this happens every now and then, plus whatever happened to him to hide his demonic powers might have been enough for it to register him in the sacred gear database as a human, he said, literally coming up with it off the top of his head. But it was a reasonable theory what he was trying to hide, as no one except the four Maoists on the devil's side, the Seraphs, and the Cotter from the fallen angels, knew that God had died in the three-way war centuries ago. Not even Lord and Lady Gremory knew about it. That could explain how I was born a full devil and got my sacred gear, Tsubaki stepped in to point out, making everyone thoughtfully nod, and Grafia commented something to Milikas that she had forgotten to mention to him till now. I forgot to mention this till now, Milikas, due to everything happening, but Issei has adopted Kaneko as a younger sister, so that means you can consider her your older sister if you want her to be, she said, with him nodding his head rapidly yes, and hugged Kaneko, who gave him one back, not minding having another brother figure. Before we move back onto the reason we're all here, if no one has any complaints, how about we let the last two guests remove their cloaks and let them introduce themselves? Serafal asked, getting a nod from the other adults as Issei stepped over to them and they pulled off their cloaks, surprising Rias in her peerage. I'd like to introduce to everyone who hasn't met them my two knights, Murayama Kaori and Kadis Yui, are two good friends of mine from school that recently found out about the supernatural, and I offered them the chance to join my peerage, and they both agreed as the two bowed to everyone present. After nodding her head at the two, Serafal continued her last point now. Unless Rias has anything to add, she asked, looking over at her, who answered, not at the moment. She went on to what they were here for. How are we going to handle this situation? Even if she hadn't realized it at the time, she almost killed her nephew, and came close to cutting ties with the Citries also, from the reports that I've been getting from Pico when she checks up on Sona. She's been spreading false rumors about him for a lot of the past year. She finished wondering what would go down, while causing Lord Gremory to close his eyes in contemplation. Benalama, though, wasn't having any of that, and pulled him out of his chair by his ear. We'll be back in a few minutes with a decision, causing both Surzech and Issei to wince in sympathy for him, having had their ears pulled before too, though before they left the room completely, Surzech did mention to them what they had decided for Issei's name. While the decision on what to do with Rias was being decided, Sona and her peerage moved over to talk to Issei, Yui, Kaori, and the rest of that group, and watched as Milikas and Kaneko started playing some patty cake, as Rias's peerage, besides Kaneko, were quiet, wondering what was going to happen to their king. With Lord and Lady Gremory, this is a very serious issue. Honey, she needs to know this is not acceptable actions from her, Venalama said as they reached the hallway outside. I know and agree, but I'm having a hard time figuring out a good punishment for this. The only ones I came up with before you pulled me out here are either too harsh or too light in my opinion, he replied back. What do you mean? Well, on the harsh end of things, I thought about pulling her completely out of the human realm and making her stay in the underworld, but that could bring up arguments with the arranged marriage, and I know that even though Surzech is pissed off at her, rightfully I should say, he doesn't want the marriage to go through due to Riser's arrogance. That's true and not your fault. Riser was once a good boy but has let his power run to his head these days, she said, agreeing with him so far. What else? On the lighter side, I thought about pulling her governorship of Kyo, which was supposed to go only to Sona originally, deciding not to go too far into that right now as Venalama nodded. The only other thoughts I've had so far are removing her as heiress, and transferring it over to either Milikas or Issei, and trading Kaneko from her over to Issei, as it seems like she's gotten really close to him. Like I said, the only issue I can see if all these ideas are either too harsh or too light. Getting another nod as she thought things over. I agree that they seem too light by themselves, but what about merging some together? Leave her as heiress, but remove her governorship of Kyo. Trade Kaneko between the two, and have her monitored anytime she's in the human world so nothing like this happens again, she said, getting a thoughtful nod from him. What would I do without you, honey? He said, giving her a, as they headed back into the office. After reaching the office, Lord Gremory announced the decision. We have come up with a decision first. I'll be going to the Devil Council and having her joint control of Kyo removed and moved over to Sona as sole governor second. Kaneko will be traded over to Issei due to how close the two have gotten third. Whenever she's in the human world, she'll be monitored at all times to keep something like this from happening again, which caused Rias to look pissed, but Surzech stepped in before she could say anything. Unless Kaneko agrees to the trade, I would not agree to the second punishment, causing everyone to look at the girl in question as she thought about it. Sure, she would love to be able to spend more time with Issei, but she didn't want her leaving to cause someone in her old peerage to get hurt or killed. With her being monitored, will she be required to do stray devil hunts? As if understanding where her thoughts were going, Lord Gremory put those to rest. You don't have to worry about that, as the council has been planning on making it where peerages with less than 6 members can't go after strays anymore, which made her decide to go with the trade. As Rias hasn't done this before either, this will be a good chance for both of you, Lord Gremory said as Issei used the method Adjika showed him to pull out his case of evil pieces and get a rook piece out. As a magic circle was drawn, place the piece that is being traded in the center of the circle and stand off to the side, he told them as they listened intently to his directions and followed them. Now start letting your magic flare out and extend your hand towards the center, and say the chant that I'm about to teach you to disrupt and change the link between pieces and their current king so they are now linked to you. Repeat after me, he said as he walked them through the process. Once the process was done, Ria said she was tired and requested permission to head to her room, and getting it but chose to say one thing before she left. Issei, I'm sorry for everything that's happened to you and hope we can work things out. Getting a nod from him as she left for her room, Serafal also left to head home with her peerage mates. Happy with what had happened with the meeting, while Sona's peerage excused themselves to give Issei a chance to meet his grandparents. But Issei stopped Sona by grabbing her hand and also asked his peerage to stay so his new knights could also meet his grandparents. Scene skip. Grigori HQ. As Issei was going over the notes from what they had learned about the team he sent to Kuo, and it wasn't good from what they could find. There was someone working behind the scenes to cause issues wherever they could. But they couldn't find a reason behind it yet, though they did find some interesting information about an event coming up about to happen in Kuo that he would make sure the devils knew about. Right as he was finishing looking over everything and started to plan his next moves, he got a letter from Serafal. Looking over it, he had to whistle at the news. Ria's Gremory would no longer be co-governor of Kuo due to recent events, and Kuo would be under the full control of Sona Citri, making him thankful he got this letter before he did anything. Already having permission to send agents to Kuo to help with any issues that came up, he wrote a letter to be sent to Serafal explaining what he had found, and also wrote letters to Sona and Issei to be delivered by his agents. Calling for Petemu, he gave her his next plans for what they had been planning. Send this letter off to Serafal and call in the twins. I need them to go to Kuo and be our representatives during this upcoming issue, and have them take this letter with them to give to Sona Citri, he said, handing her the letters. Before remembering something else, also let Vali know to keep up his surveillance, and he has permission to step in if needed, getting a nod of approval from her as she left to send the orders. Stepping over to a window looking outside, Azazel couldn't help but wonder what else is going to be coming in the next few months, and this might be a good time to start preparing for peace talks between the three factions. As Issei sat down to get to know his grandparents, Rias and her peerage moved off towards her bedroom while Matsuda and Madohoma excused themselves from the group and headed off towards a library they had seen nearby, not wanting to be near in case Rias got angry at them. Kiba, when they reached Rias' room, stayed outside watching the door and looking back on all the things he knew about Issei. They realized he had just been following along with his king and what she had been doing, not really thinking about it too much on what it might cause for anyone, and vowed to try and make it up to when he could. Akino, for her part, sat by her king as Rias lay down on her bed looking up at the ceiling. Rias was her best friend and had helped her through a tough time in her life, so she would follow whatever she was doing even if she knew it was wrong. She did, though, decide to try and help both Rias and Issei work towards fixing the issue. Rias was laying down on her bed thinking back on all the times she met or ran into Issei to see if she could use any to hate on him, but she couldn't, all due to one fact: she was very afraid of the sight of, and no one in her family or peerage knew it. She could hide it well when it came to stray devil hunts and other stuff, but something in her snapped whenever it happened with Issei's attacks, and she had had a feeling that the incident mentioned in the meeting had been an accident, but her instincts kicked in and she ran. She thought back on all the times she'd ran into him or talked to him, and most of them there had been somewhere on him she had noticed. The first time was when Sona had introduced her to him, and he still had some on his hand from an earlier attack he hadn't noticed, and though it was dried, that wasn't too bad for her but still affected her. The second time she happened to be right in front of him when an attack hit him, and got on her before he could cover his mouth. Third time was the stairs accident, where it gotten onto her. Then he did his best to keep away from her as she started spreading rumors due to her fears, but there was one more incident she could think of that happened between the two, and this one was in no way his fault. She'd been walking up some stairs when Issei had been hit by a guy above her, after she had started spreading rumors, and the hit had knocked out a tooth from his mouth and the white tooth had fallen down and landed on Rias, rolling down her arm. But that one wasn't his fault either way. She sighed as she decided there wasn't anything she could do to get out of her punishments, and decided to take them with grace and go with it. As he did try to be friends with her in the beginning, it was just her fears that drove it to where it ended up. She was sad though to lose Kaneko, but she would never try to keep one of her peerage members if they weren't happy with where they were at anymore. After all, she considered all her peerage members as family and would do her best to help them. Though she couldn't stop from being a little annoyed at Matsuda and Madohoma for speaking out earlier, she was sure she would have done the same in their shoes. Meanwhile, Issei was having a good time getting to know his grandparents, and they certainly were glad to have him back and welcomed his knights with open arms as well, sitting there holding hands with Sona. Issei was glad how things had gone over with the situation and hoped he could work things over with his aunt not long after the boys split off from the girls to have their own man-to-man chats. Scene skip. After hanging out with his grandparents some, they had to get back to the human world to prepare for the engagement party that had been planned. The original plan had been to have two parties, one with just his adoptive parents, then another with his birth parents and Sona's, but Serafal had changed that plan earlier in the day to where it was going to be one big party with everyone. So Sona grabbed her peerage as well as Issei and his and made a teleportation circle appear under them, taking them back to the student council office as the Kendo girls left to get ready themselves as they had been invited. Sona's peerage pulled her away to get her ready and just to have fun teasing her again about being engaged. Issei and Kaneko meanwhile headed off to his adoptive parents' house, planning on moving Kaneko in later, and were trying to figure out how they would explain her now living with them full-time, and finally decided to go with a partial truth. Grafia and Serzech had formally unofficially adopted her as well and had asked if she could live with him now instead of where she had been living, and plans had been already set up with her previous residence where there wasn't any issues there. Emiko was ecstatic, already loving the girl as if she was her own, and immediately rushed her off to find a dress for the party. Though due to her small frame they had to settle for a smaller skirt than she would have liked, she got a white dress covered with sparkles from neck to waistline and had short sleeves that barely went past her shoulders, while the dress's skirt just ended above her knees when standing, and also had ruffles. Issei, for his part, chose an outfit that was dressy but still casual, as he went without a blazer and had on black dress shoes, black pants, and a turquoise dress shirt, black vest and red tie. It was basically the same as what he had worn for the movie date, but had all the buttons buttoned up instead of a couple buttons undone as he was putting his watch on. He wished his younger brother was going to be here, but his birth parents had decided to leave him at home, so he decided to do something for him later. His fathers decided to follow along with Issei and wear the same, though Issei wore a black shirt, and Serzech wore a red shirt. Emiko wore a black dress that was tight-fitting around her legs but had a slit down the side for movement. Grafia wore a strapless dress in the same color as Serzech that went down to her ankles. With Sona was thankful that she had heard what Issei had planned to wear tonight and was able to turn her peerage towards that when looking for something for her to wear. She put on a turquoise gown, with a ruffled skirt reaching halfway down her shins with the innermost layer, though she didn't like the top part of the dress as it pushed up against her ass a little too much for her comfort and showed them more than she was used to. Right as she finished getting dressed, Akane showed up, having been sent by Serafal to help get her ready for the night, shooing everyone away so she could work on Sona's hair. Putting it up in an elegant side bun, thinking that she was done with getting ready, she went to stand up but was stopped by Akane. "We really ought to try and find some jewelry for you to wear tonight. Besides your ring, let's see about finding a necklace for you," she said, knowing how Sona felt about those things. Sona groaned, knowing that Akane meant well, but she never did like wearing stuff that showed off more of her chest than was needed, since she was very self-conscious about it. Akane just chuckled at the girl as she walked over to Sona's jewelry case. "I'm thinking about silver, or something simple," she said, looking for something she remembered seeing, a certain necklace not long ago. Before finding it, Sona just nodded her head, hoping that Akane would be able to find something that wouldn't show off too much. As Akane turned around and put the necklace she had found around her neck, it was a red heart-shaped crystal necklace on a simple silver chain that didn't lower the heart too far down, and Sona was happy with her choice and thanked her. For Sona's family, both her mother and Serafal went with simple pencil-style dresses with slits down the right side for easier walking, with her mother going for a white dress, and Serafal going with a middle shade of blue. Her father decided to stick with the business suit he had been wearing at work for the party, but did remove the blazer as it was warm outside. Everyone couldn't help but laugh though when they got together at both Sona and Issei, as they couldn't speak after catching sight of each other. Finally, one of the men, no one was quite sure which, coughed into their hand, and the two broke out of their trance and showered each other with praise on how they looked, then got on with the party and had a great time. Scene skip. The next day, while Sona and Issei were out on a minidate in Kyoto, they happened to run into a nun who said she had just moved into town and was to work at the church, something which drew both Issei and Sona's attention, as they knew the church was inactive in the town and wondered about foul play happening, especially with how there was fallen angels in the town. They had heard from Serafal what she learned from Azazel and figured that they had brought her here to the town for something, and figuring it was for her sacred gear after they saw her heal a little boy's knee after he had fallen, giving each other a look, they decided to look into it more when they got back home tonight. After dropping her off at the church, and Issei noticing the fallen that had killed him looking at them from one of the windows, they headed on home, waving off going into the church as they could already feel a headache coming on just from being this close to a church. As they left, they talked about what they had just seen. "I don't like leaving her there at the church. I feel like that we might have just led her to her death," Issei said, letting Sona know what his thoughts were, getting a nod. "I agree, but right now, even with what Azazel told my sister, I don't feel right barging in there and dealing with them without more proof. I'll contact my sister later and get another update, and we'll go from there," she said, getting a nod from him. "Plus, with the new rule the council has in place, we wouldn't be able to handle this ourselves and would probably have to call in reinforcements," he said, reminding her about the new rule where only peerages with over 6 people in it could handle strays or fallen angels if it wasn't in self-defense, and the peerage has to have proven themselves. The ruling that Lord Gremory had talked about right before Kaneko was traded had come down as an official statement earlier that day due to how many smaller peerages were having issues when it came to stray devil hunts. The Devil Council had a new rule on its way to where only peerages that have over 6 people in them, not including the king, can go after strays, and the peerage has to have proven themselves to get the job. Sona's peerage was just 1 member short as it sits, though they weren't too sure how Issei having 2 rook pieces and her 1 pawn having 3 would affect it, so we're going with the plan that they wouldn't be able to handle the situations for now. True, but that honestly doesn't bother me too much, as it helps make governing the town easier, but it does come with more paperwork since I have to send a request out now whenever a stray pops up in our area. I'm sorry Ria's lost joint control over the territory with you that had to have helped with dealing with paperwork, he said quietly, glad he didn't have to worry about it right now himself. While I agree with you a little bit, I'd rather have to deal with more paperwork than losing you, she said, blushing. Don't worry, I don't plan on leaving you anytime soon. I know, and you better keep that promise, she said as they continued their walk, not noticing two new presences that had just arrived in town. Meanwhile, the twins, Els and Lynn Silhaueska, had just arrived in Kuo on their latest assignment from Azazel. They had been on standby for the past 2 weeks waiting on him to get more information on what was going on within the devil territory of Kuo, and had finally gotten enough to be ready to send them over there with letters to give to the governor of the territory, and now they just had to find her, having been told to check Kuo Academy for the Citrieras. As they got their bearings, they happened to catch the Citrieras walking around with someone, likely her fiancé they had heard about, having seen pictures of them through town, so decided to try and catch up with them and let them know they were in town. As Sona and Issei finished their little date walking around town, they called their peerages and told them to meet at the student council office to catch up on her group's contracts and see how they were going, as the higher-ups were still trying to figure out the best way to split the town between the 3 peerages. Though Kaneko was cleared to continue her contracts she still had active from when she was with Rias. After they reached the school and had started the meeting, they had a knock on the council door, and they could feel 2 new supernatural presences outside. After both Issei and Sona gave each other a look, wondering who would be knocking on the door, and new presences at that, she told them to come in, surprised to see what looked like 2 high school-aged girls walk in. I hope we're not intruding on anything, but we come bearing news and with permission from Governor General Azazel and Mau Leviathan, the one with long hair said as she held up a letter, and both of them not stepping too far into the room, knowing that the devils were probably on high alert with everything that had happened recently. Getting a nod from her king, Tsubaki walked over and got the letter and handed it over. After she read the letter, she passed it over to Issei and decided to give them the benefit of the doubt for now, as her sister had said that she had talked to Azazel and he was working with them, so she waved the girls into the room. What is your message? She asked, already working on figuring out a way to contact her sister and get their story verified. As I'm sure you have noticed, but we are affiliated with the Fallen Angel faction. My name is Els, and this is my twin Lynn Silhaueska, by the way, and as Azazel is hoping to work towards peace with the 3 factions, we were sent here by Azazel to give both the Citrieras and her fiancé a heads up on an event that the rogues that are currently in this territory are planning. Getting a nod for them to continue, she kept going. He's been busy within the Grigori trying to quell rogue elements within, and this group is just one of the latest and has been working on bringing a sacred gear wielder to Kuo to pull her sacred gear out of her, making both Sona and Issei think back to the nun they took to the church earlier. We're here to pass on anything we know as well. The help is needed. What do you mean by help is needed? Sona asked, thinking about all the new information they had learned so far. As we said, some of the more dangerous elements have started to go rogue and rebel, and the group that has made their way to Kuo is part of that, but only 3 of them are, as one has been blackmailed into helping them out. So basically, Azazel is wanting us to do his dirty work for him in this situation, Issei said, catching on to where this was headed before getting a look from Els. Both Lord Azazel and Lord Barakil are working on tracking the one that is currently considered the leader of the rogues as well as the strongest, Cockabeel. Okay, so you say that you have permission from the Maus to be here, which I can understand from what I've heard from my sister. But the thing I'm not understanding is how we would be the ones tasked with this, with the Devil Council's new law of only peerages with over 6 people in them, not including the king, can handle situations like this, Sona said as a teleportation circle popped up in the room, dropping off her sisters Bishop Akain and Knight Pico. You're right, but they can't argue against it when the Maus personally give the order for your peerages to mobilize and handle this situation, which is why we're here to give credence to these girls' words as well as help out with training, Akain said, startling everyone at their quick entrance, though Sona nodded her head in thanks to the bishop and turned her head back to the girls. What can you tell us about the rogues that are in my territory? She asked, glad for the 2 to have shown up and now didn't have to worry about contacting her sister to clear what the girls were giving them as information that was legitimate and wasn't another plot. The group of rogues has been consolidating power and pulling resources to this location in secret, mostly rogue exorcists, and has a plan in the works, like I mentioned, to pull a sacred gear out of a nun that has either recently reached Kuo or should be here soon. We also wouldn't put it past them to try and attack both the Grimory and Citrierases while they are here if they were trying to start the war back. That would be one way to do it. I think she was more meaning their names and abilities than their plans, as them attacking us was almost a given in our mind, Issei said, his mind going back to what happened a couple of weeks ago, and getting another look from Els as she recognized him finally from pictures. You must be the recently found son of the Mau Lucifer, if I may inquire, since you worded it that way, Els asked, having heard of him from Azazel but not recognizing him until now. Normally I would wonder how you would know about me, but since I know Seraphal has been in touch with Azazel, it makes sense. Yes, I am, he said, getting nods from the twins at that. Anyways, onto the 4 fallen that have moved into Kuo currently. They are Donasik, Rainair, Midulth, and Kala Warner, the last of which is being blackmailed by Donasik from what we can tell by him holding a sacred treasure of hers. They all can cast light spears and are 2-winged angels, but only Issei and Rainier are middle to low high tier 2-winged angels, so are more dangerous, though none of them have any real battle experience. She said, giving them more information on the group from what they had learned. How long do you think we have until they're prepared to do the ritual? From what our guy we have watching them has figured out, they still have to gather supplies before they can do it, and we're guessing about 3 weeks to get everything, but that's just a guesstimate. She said, knowing that the letter mentioned another person was watching the group while the twins dealt with the devils. We can help with training as extra hands and also help in the battle as needed. She also mentioned getting a nod from Sona and Issei as Sona opened up a drawer in her desk and pulled out a contract paper. We will take your help, but I would ask that you get this paper to the person watching the church and it'll help out too. It's a way for them to contact us in case something happens and you aren't around. Handing it over and getting a nod before Pico stepped in to start talking about the training. Issei, since technically you aren't a part of Sona's peerage, you and your peerage don't have to partake in the training, but your father would like you to at least practice with your mother to help give your magic skills a boost. Either way, we will also help train the rest of your peerage whichever way you decide. She said, getting a nod from him. I will partake in the training, but I would also like to learn more of my magic from my mother. And could you also find someone to help me train physically? Getting a nod from her. If you wouldn't mind letting me know what sacred gear you have, I'll know what to look for and someone to help you train. She replied, getting a thoughtful nod from him as he made a decision he'd been thinking about for some time. If you don't mind, I think now would be a good time to let everyone know what my gear is. Can you go get my father and anyone else that should be in the know about it? That is a suitable request. Give me time to gather them, Akane said as she stepped back to take a portal and gather the Maoas. She knew that the Maoas had been talking about what gear Issei had, so it wouldn't take much to get them to come. Plus, they were in a meeting right now about the upcoming situation in Kyo, so it was a simple matter this time around. Eyes, are you sure you are ready for my peerage and everyone to know what your gear is? Sona asked, unsure if it was time or not. She could understand why he wouldn't let most people know since he was this generation's Red Dragon Emperor, and she had even given him the suggestion of keeping it quiet for now, but Issei quelled her worries. Sona, you used 2 rooks to revive me. I'm a part of your peerage, so they have a right to know, and it's time since only you and Aunt Grisela know what gear I have. Akane came back before Sona could reply, as it only took Akane mentioning why she was back for the group to come. After everyone got settled, Issei got into how he learned about his powers and how Auntie Grisela, as he knew and called her, helped him out and taught him what she could before she had to leave for Europe to help train the next batch of exorcists, which caused the Mao's eyes to widen as they recognized the name. Grisela Quarter was a well-known and renowned exorcist, easily among the top 5, and she had known Issei from a young age, yet she didn't try to bring him over to the angel's side. They didn't know whether to be worried about her coming back to try and bring him over to their side, or glad that she hadn't tried to get him to join them. Rather than telling you what gear I have, I think I'll show you, he said as he drew power to his arm, getting ready to summon the boosted gear. Deciding just to get it over with without too much fanfare, he called the boosted gear out and stunned everyone in the room. D-Drag said, yawning, having woken up from a nap when the boosted gear was called upon, causing Issei to laugh and his parents to look at him in confusion. What do you mean by stepping up training? His father couldn't help but ask the dragon, putting aside his surprise at his son being the wielder of the boosted gear of all gears. Okay, but if that's true, how was it that he was killed and had to be revived? Sirzech asked, not quite sure what to think of the new information, and making D-Drag sigh, as while he knew this question would come up at one point, he still didn't like the answer. He sounded both sheepish at not having been able to help his partner and proud at where Issei was power-wise. Sirzech was happy though at what he had heard about Issei's power and how much potential he had. Based on the power he had felt from Issei when he first met him in the student council office, he was certain Issei would reach the upper tier of ultimate class devils by 21. But after hearing D-Drag, he felt certain that he could easily reach his power if not surpass it. He said, surprising everyone in the room. Then I would like to start training tomorrow morning, as I've got to grow strong enough to protect Sona, but don't want to only train one of my powers. Mama, would you help me train my magic? Grafia couldn't help but notice how grown-up her boy was starting to sound at the moment and was also extremely happy at him requesting her help, becoming so overwhelmed by his words. She couldn't speak, so just nodded her head at him. Sirzech for his part stepped in and assigned his rook Sutter to help Issei in physical training, as well as adding his peerage into the mix too to help get the 2 peerages ready. Sutter, Grafia, I'd like you 2 to stay in town while training him, as I don't feel it would be right to take him to the underworld and possibly cause his adoptive parents to worry about him. I'll also send my knight over to help train Kaori and Yui in their abilities as knights, he said, before remembering another factor. While we're at it, we should see about having Sona's pawn Kazuki join in on the training and get stronger too. Getting a thoughtful nod from Sona as she commented, that's true, but I'll need to talk to him about it first. I try not to call on him unless it's an emergency and leave him to his own devices most of the time. Which Sona amended after thinking about it for a second with, yes, this could be considered an emergency in some aspects, but still. She said, getting a confused look from him. While I can understand freedom of movement, he normally doesn't even show up for full peerage meetings from what I've seen, Issei replied. Getting Sona to give him the reason as she remembered no one outside of her peerage and sister knew the circumstances with her pawn, due to it never being brought up before. Normally I would agree with you, but his parents were killed a few years ago and he's got 5 brothers and sisters that he takes care of. When I found him, he'd been killed by a burglar as he protected his siblings, and I revived him as I didn't feel right leaving his siblings to go through the system, and I let him do his own thing so he can take care of them. I've helped him where I could, but he's requested that he doesn't get much help unless he asks for it, and I have let him know he can ignore group summons, and if I need him I'll call him separately. Getting a thoughtful and understanding nod from Issei. Do you mind calling him here for me? I would like to help him with his situation if possible. Getting a nod from Sona as she pulled out her phone to call him, as it was easier for him to answer a phone call than a communications circle. Sona was also thankful for his boss being the easygoing sort of boss that didn't mind when Kazuki had to leave and do stuff for her, as it wasn't very often she had to call on him. Kazuki was the oldest member of Sona's peerage, right at 20 years old with short and messy chestnut-colored hair. As soon as he showed up, Issei pulled him into another room to have a private talk. Things are about to start heating up around here, both due to fallen angels causing issues here within QO as well as the Devil Council has made it harder to handle some situations. Smaller peerages were starting to have issues dealing with strays, so now there are new regulations on what it takes for peerages to handle them. But the issue is that while you will need to be at a certain level training-wise, it won't always be enough. The problems we have incoming will require experience to handle. He started getting a thoughtful nod from Kazuki. Thankfully, the Devil Council can't cancel a direct order from the Maus when we order a peerage to mobilize. We need to have the future leaders ready for anything, and with Sona being one of them, she's gonna need her peerage ready to go and capable to handle situations. Now I know and fully understand that you have to help your siblings, but I'm asking you to also step up and help Sona through this upcoming situation, and I will help in any way I can. I owe her my life. She saved me and allowed me to live and keep caring for my siblings, so I will do anything to help her. If you think I need to get stronger, then that works with me, Kazuki said with conviction, making Issei smile. Great. First, have you met Issei? Yes. Great kid. I heard him and Sona finally got together, and I'm happy for them. That makes this easier then. He's my son, but he was kidnapped back when he was a baby, and thanks to Sona we finally found him. Now, I own the house right next to his adoptive parents and would like to give it to you, as I'm sure being close to Issei and Amiko will help you with your siblings, as I'm sure they'd love to help. Are you sure? I'll gladly pay you back for it. Consider it a gift. I'm sure it will help you in more ways than one, with Issei's adoptive parents nearby and you not having to worry about bills anymore. Then I thank you. Now, you were talking about getting training in for the upcoming issues. I've got some kendo training back when my parents were still alive, and I'm decent with a sword. Based on that, what would you suggest? I would think you might have an idea if I may say so. Getting a nod back. Issei and his peerage are going to be getting trained under my Rook Sutter for physical training, so I would suggest starting there for now. I can also work towards finding you a sword if you would like. Thinking he should also ask Issei's knights if they would like him to do the same. I would love it if you could, but it doesn't need to be anything special. When Sona revived me, we found out I had a sacred gear when Sona revived me called Area of Elements, and as there are a few areas I know I can control the element tied to it by singing the area for it. I've used it a few times heating food or controlling the temperature in my house. Nodding at the news, Issei led both of them back to the student council office where Kazuki stepped forward to Sona and kneeled, letting her know to call on him more often now when she needed him, and that he was looking forward to the upcoming training, causing her to smile at him and let him know he was dismissed to go and tend to his siblings. Issei now stepped forward with a question he'd thought about while his father was out of the room. I can understand us training to deal with this situation as we'll be the ones going in, but shouldn't Riaz also be doing some training? He asked about his aunt. The two of them hadn't talked much yet after the whole deal at her parents' house, but he was giving it time and still hoped they could work things out between themselves. And it also made sense due to the fact that it had only been a day since it had happened. Issei sighed at the question. You're right about that, but they will be doing their own training on the side as they'll mainly be backups for this mission. And since everyone but her new pawns are the only ones that need training, she's handling it herself, splitting the training between the 3 other devils while the ones not doing the training will be doing their own style of training. Nodding his head as it seemed like they were getting themselves ready in their own way, Issei nodded his head, making the older devils move on to finishing things for the night. After making sure Grafia and Sutter had a place to stay while doing the training, Issei asked the kendo girls if they would like him to get them a sword to use, and after getting a yes from them, everyone left for the day to get ready for the upcoming training session. Scene skip. The next 2.5 weeks were hellish for the 2 peerages, but they got a ton of training in. Everyone was able to learn something and were ready to deal with the fallen. Sona was able to train her water magic up enough to where she focused enough she could turn small amounts of water to ice and dubbed it Ice Bullet, and also worked with her eye magic what she could without letting too many know about it for now and can control it about 75% of the time. On her bishop's side, they mainly focused on learning new spells, though both didn't have a specialty in any element like both Sona and Issei do. Momo for her part leaned more towards learning spells directed towards defense and barriers, while Rhea leaned towards more offensive magic. Tsubaki for her part worked on being able to control her sacred gear better, being able to go from only able to use it once every 30 seconds to now every 5 seconds, and also able to control where the blasts were directed instead of right back at the attacker. She was also now able to make up to 3 mirrors to use to redirect attacks. All in all, Sona's peerage was able to use the 3 weeks to their advantage. On Issei's peerage side plus Kazuki, both boys were put through the ringer by Surzic's Rook Sutter, since he had trouble holding back with the 2 of them. They both grew faster and made a training setup of 2 days of training and 1 day off. Kazuki was able to bulk up more from his training and now has more prevalent muscles. Sutter even commented that if he kept it up he could earn the title of Elemental Blade down the line thanks to his sacred gear. He had also opened up to everyone in both Sona and Issei's peerage recently and gotten to know everyone, and they all considered him as an older brother figure. It also helped that after moving into the house next to Issei, his siblings were happier than ever, seeing both Issei and Kaneko as an older brother and sister respectively. Though they thought it was funny that she was around their height, and both of his adoptive parents loved having them around, claiming them as adoptive grandchildren. Thanks to being in Rhea's peerage before being traded to Issei's, Kaneko had some training in combat, but didn't have a refined method. She mainly worked on the basics, rebuilding her fighting style and increasing her already high defense and strength stats. With the Kendo girls, they had learned when they were reincarnated that they had sacred gears. Kaori had the blade blacksmith gear that allowed her to create holy swords depending on the will of the user, and was able to develop it enough to where she could use it as many times as she needed. Though did still request the weapon that Surzec promised to help her get just in case something happened she would have a backup. She also tried working her way towards her balance breaker, which allowed her to summon a group of knights to help fight, but wasn't quite able to do it within the time frame, though no one gave her any grief for it as she had just recently started working towards it. Yui for her gear got the momentum pillage, which allows her to drain whoever she is attacking speed and use it herself, which she learned to use pretty well by the end of the 3 weeks and was able to even drain high-class devils' speeds and use it against them, something that nobody had been certain about at first when they learned what her gear was. They both were also able to gain strength under the guidance of Surzic's Knight Saoji Akita and learn more about how the Knight piece worked and the weaknesses that came with it. Issei, whenever he wasn't training under Sutter, was working on his magic with his mother, though it was more figuring out the boundaries he could push with it than actually learning how to use it thanks to his training with Griselda. He did learn a few new magic attacks he thought would come in handy down the line with his ice magic, as well as some other styles of attack magic, as his mother didn't want him to just rely only on his ice, while also figuring out his own fighting style, which was a mix of karate, jujitsu, and kickboxing. He didn't consider himself a master in any of the styles, though he did get a good start on working that way. On the last day before the 3-week estimate was up, something the group was thankful for that they had gotten to use to train for this. The adults left to head back, leaving with the words that the group should train on their own now and get some battle experience before requesting any more help. With that, the group met back in the student council with the twins giving a quick briefing from what they had learned from Volley, who was still watching the church. They also warned the group that they had warned Calawarner about the upcoming attack and would pull her out of the church right before the attack by Sona's group started, though they didn't dive into how that would happen at the time. Issei and Kaneko would be the ones dealing with Rainer as he had a score to settle with the Fallen. Sona would take on Donasek as she was fairly certain she could handle him, while Els and Tsubaki would handle Middle and would either help out Issei and Kaneko or vice versa depending on whoever ended their battle first. Everyone else in the group would handle the stray exorcists that the Fallen had gathered, though the twins did warn them that they had heard there was a crazed exorcist in the group that was unpredictable in his actions, so expect anything from him, and gave them his description. Then, as night fell on the final day of the 3 weeks, the group made their way to the church to do battle. As the group moved towards the church, they still hadn't figured out how they would save the nuns, since the group that was watching the church hadn't been able to get that information before the raid, so they just decided to play it by ear. They did decide that the team working on taking out the exorcists would also take the task of finding her and call in support as needed. As they got ready to move, Els had a communications circle near her ear waiting on confirmation of the removal of Calawarner from the church, which along with an attack at the front of the church would signal the start of the fight. As the group split up, Issei took command of the Fallen team and Sona took the Exorcist team, as it had been agreed upon by both peerages and approved by the Maus that the two of them would have joint control over this mission, since it would be split up at times and would be easier to give orders by one or the other when needed. Meanwhile, Volley team location. Volley POV. Looking at the church where we had been doing a boring mission recently of keeping an eye on some rogue fallen angels, I was ready to get this done and move on to some real fighting. Knowing that Azazel wanted at least one alive and that they had what might be the best method to do it without risking anything, I turned towards my companion Arthur Pendragon and his sister Lefay, the latter of which was integral for the upcoming start of the battle. "How's it looking? Are we good to go?" I asked Lefay, getting an enthusiastic nod back from her. "I'm as ready as I'll ever be, I believe, considering I haven't tried this spell before outside of testing. I just don't have the power to send her to the underworld yet, or at least I don't think I can without further testing," she replied. The magic she was talking about was one our team had worked on making after learning of an old glitch that used to be a part of the contract papers that the devils use. The glitch, before it was removed from the papers, could be used to forcefully summon a devil tied into the clan that had their magic circle on the paper, and if the person that was doing the summoning was talented enough, knew what they were doing, it could pull anyone from that clan. Even though it was fixed, Azazel had heard about it and mentioned it to LaFay once when she had asked about a way to help move people out of situations or anywhere else something like that would come in handy, and he told her about the glitch and said if she wanted to make a spell for something like that, it was fine, but if it was ever used in a way that would hurt the fallen angels, he would not help her or anyone she taught it to get out of it, making it be one of the few times she or anyone on Volley's team had seen him fully serious on something. And LaFay took his warning to heart and got clearance from Azazel himself before she would use it here, as well as for Linz, who had been taught the magic as well in case it might be useful for this situation somehow, and got the go-ahead. Nodding at her words, I had one other concern with this mission. Azazel did warn me to be careful if I brought my team in, considering who's a part of it. I thought knowing that one of the devils in this town was related to a person on my team and it could cause more issues than it was worth, so I made sure to keep her out of the mission, and just brought Arthur and LaFay with me. Then begin the operation. We'll stay back and watch from here. I ordered, giving the go-ahead to LaFay to start the operation. Back to Issei, normal POV. With Els and the group that would be attacking the fallen angels, she had a hand to her ear listening into Volley's team as they activated the magic to pull Calawarner to them, knowing that LaFay wasn't sure about the spell she was using if she could send her anywhere besides to her location, and Linz, who was with the group going after the exorcists, was doing the same thing. As they got confirmation that the teleportation was successful, they gave the go-ahead to move on to the battle, which started with the team going after the exorcists to create a distraction in the front, giving an opening for the other group to go in and start the attack on the fallen angels. As Issei and Kaneko found Rainier, they worked together like they had practiced with Sutter, having decided to work together on defeating her early on in the training. Though most felt that either of them could take Rainier on by themselves, especially after Kaneko got retrained. They knew that working together would be best, so practiced in the time they had and were pounding the fallen to a pulp between them, batting her between themselves like a tennis ball, doing their best to keep her from catching her breath. Rainier, for her part, had learned early on that between the two of them they were absolute power hitters, but couldn't do anything with the knowledge as they worked together to defend each other when she tried to attack one and then hold her down and give the one she tried to attack a chance to pound mercilessly on her. And she was absolutely pissed at herself for killing Issei, now that she knew he had the boosted gear, which he had gotten to the point in using it where he could easily boost certain parts of his body to help him in a fight, though he was mainly boosting his speed as he was strong enough even to not need to boost his strength. She'd even tried to beg for her life, but she had gotten no remorse from Issei or Kaneko since he knew that she would likely do this again since she went after innocence once. He didn't want it to happen again. While Issei and Kaneko were having a field day using Rainier as a punching bag, Els and Tsubaki were having a hard time taking down Middle due to the fact that while she didn't have much battle experience, she had leaned more toward learning sacred gears along with Azazel and was a tough nut to crack either way, all the while trying to throw the two off their game by throwing taunts at them. Though Els was able to keep her on her toes thanks to being a close-range brawler fighter who used gauntlets set up specifically to fight fallen angels that were given to her for this mission. And it also helped that Tsubaki was using her sacred gear Mirror Alice to throw back any light spears Middle threw, though hadn't been able to get any solid hits in on the fallen while working around and in tandem with Els and throw multiple light spears back at her, and was making progress. Though that changed for the better when Issei threw Rainier into Middle's side, throwing her off balance and allowing Tsubaki to hit the two with some thrown back light spears, not doing a lot of damage but nonetheless would help finish off the two fallen. As they were close to finishing off their fallen angel targets, Sona was just finishing off Donasi, having been able to protect herself using her water magic to throw up shields that were able to block his light spears and keep him back enough she could use her magic to call out water dragons to deal damage to him, and had him on the ropes when he decided to cut his losses and cast a bright light that blinded Sona long enough for him to get away, planning on trying to get to the nun's sacred gear out to help turn this battle around, as from what he could tell they were losing. Sona, for her part, decided to leave him be for now, knowing he wouldn't be able to escape when to check on the group taking out the exorcists. She also couldn't help but wonder after thinking about it some more why the fallen would think that the gear that the girl had would help turn the tide of a battle. Sure, it could heal any injury except death, and most enemies would target the healer to deal with them first. That group was having a field day, hardly having any issues taking care of the rogue exorcists, though they didn't see the one they were warned about anywhere. Is it just me, or do these guys seem way too easy? Kaori said as she mowed through a group of exorcists, not even needing to worry about her gear for the moment. While she would have loved to help take care of the fallen themselves, she knew that since both her and Yui were still new to the supernatural world and their powers, it was a smart decision to keep them back and not have them go against any stronger opponents for the moment, and knew her fellow knight felt the same. Sure, but I'm sure a lot of that would be how much this group trained. I've seen exorcists before in action and they can be tough groups, but it might change with Rouge groups, Lynn said to the group as she stayed in the back helping with defense for the group. During the training weeks, Linz had been quiet and shy when the training first started, letting her sister do most of the talking except when she was asked to question herself. But she had slowly warmed up to the group, mainly the kendo girls surprisingly, and had helped where she could when someone was needing help with defense magic learning, as she knew quite a few spells for that, as well as being proficient in water and a little bit of fire magic. Seeing a chance to deal some damage with the help of Kazuki, she yelled at him to get ready as she cast a water spell that swept the exorcists off their feet and left water on the floor, which Kazuki used to his advantage as he called on the area for lightning, casting it and used the water to amplify the effects, causing major damage to the exorcists, killing many of them and severely wounding the rest right as Sona walked into the room, making her proud at what the group had been able to do. Good job, everyone. Now that that's done, let's see if we can't find the nun, and I'm sure where we find her, we'll find Donosik, as he ran off before I could finish him off, Sona said, giving the group their next orders and getting a nod back from the group. Meanwhile, right before the exorcist group finished their battle, the other group was just finishing their own battle. Even though the light spears Tsubaki threw back at the two fallen hadn't killed them, they had wounded the two enough for the fight to end faster. Tsubaki and Els were able to finish off Middle with a roundhouse kick from Els, which knocked her to the ground right as Tsubaki cast a spell that threw blasts of wind onto her, nicking her heart and shredding a lung, finally killing her. Reina, for her part, was barely alive by this point too. Both Issei and Kaneko were sure they'd broken a few bones in her before they'd knocked her into Middle, though what they didn't know, but Reina felt, was a broken rib which that had punctured her right lung, making it hard to breathe, and which is how she had been knocked into Middle, as she had tried to catch her breath and been caught from behind by a kick from Kaneko. After they untangled and got back to fighting, Issei had gotten in a boosted punch trying to go ahead and end it, which threw her into a wall of the church, knocking her out. Though he did go ahead and throw a fist through her gut, finishing her off right as Middle was killed. Right after they finished off their targets, they grouped up and moved on into the church, where the group had just found the underground entrance. As they moved down the stairs, Sona updated the group that Donosik had gotten away from her and might be downstairs waiting on them, getting a nod from the group that hadn't heard the news yet. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, they came across what they had both thought and feared, Donosik down below getting ready to start the process of stealing the sacred gear from the nun. He had created a barrier in front of him that the group couldn't take out without the risk of bringing the roof down on their heads, though those that happened to be at the right angle saw Lin smirk at something. "You fools, you gave me the chance to steal the girl's gear, which will make me invincible. Nothing can stop me," he yelled as he tried to start the process, but was stunned as he saw a magic circle pop up under the girl and pull her away from the cross into the group. "What did you do?" he screamed, not liking where this was going. "Oh, just another use of the spell that pulled Calawarner out of here, that I was taught. I don't have to tell you how it works, but suffice it to say I can pull anyone to my location if I'm close enough to them," Lin said as the nun teleported next to them and started to fall as she was unconscious before being caught by Lin's and Els, while Issei had started creating a dragon made of ice using his magic to take down Donosik, who in a fit of rage charged at the group instead of trying to run away. "Damn you," he yelled, removing the barrier, while bringing out light spears as swords to slice down Issei. But he didn't get the chance as Issei's dragon was ready and tore into him before he got anywhere near the group and tore him to pieces, finally ending the battle. As everyone calmed down from the battle, they took stock with everyone and that no one was too injured from the fight. "Good job, everyone. Let's get outside and get ready to call this mission a success," Issei said, getting a nod from everyone as they moved back up the stairs, after sending the remaining living exorcists through a portal to the underworld with a letter saying who they were. Sona, though, remembered another issue and turned towards the twins. "How are we going to handle finding Calawarner's treasure that Donosik was holding?" Getting a nod from the two. "The group that was helping by watching the church will go and help her find it, as they only teleported her to them," El said, having already brought that up with Volley, and getting a nod back of acceptance since Sona already had known people were watching the church due to the note from Azazel, though had one more question. "Can you explain the magic you used to pull the nun to us with? I've never seen it before today. Let's get back to the council office first if you don't mind, so we can clear out of here, and I'll explain what I can," Lin said, hoping to push it off for the moment, and after a couple of seconds, got a nod of acceptance from Sona as the group teleported back to the school. As the group got back to the school, Sona was already making a call to her sister to let them know they had completed the mission as Lin's and Els set Asia down on one of the couches. Neither Issei nor Sona were surprised when not long after she got off the call a teleportation circle popped up with Seraphol, Graphia, and Surzech popping out, surprising the rest of the group though. "So everything has been handled then with the fallen angels, at least with this group?" Surzech asks, getting a nod from the group, which made the adults give a relieved sigh, thankful that everyone was safe. Seeing 3 new faces in the room, they turned towards the 2 that were awake, assuming they might be the twins that Azazel sent to help out the peerages, though they had no idea on the one unconscious. Seeing the adults turn towards them, El stepped forward to introduce themselves. "How do you do? I'm El Silhaueska, and this is my twin sister Linz," before they both bowed at the adults, from which they could feel a massive amount of power from them. We were sent by Azazel to help solve the latest issue with the Rouge Fallen Angels. Smiling at the girls, Seraphal stepped up since she was over foreign affairs and introduced the newcomers. A pleasure to meet you. I'm Seraphal Leviathan, head of foreign affairs, and this is Sirzech Lucifer and his wife Graphia. I know you saw us when we first gave this assignment to Sona and Issei, but we never fully introduced ourselves, she said, surprising the twins as they hadn't realized who they were dealing with, but were happy that the adults in front of them seemed nice. Thank you for the help that you gave to Sona, Issei, and their peerages. Thank you for your kind words. We had a fun time and got to meet new friends, Els replied smiling, as Sirzech stepped up to take charge of the meeting. Like Seraphal said, thank you for the help that you gave to Sona, Issei, and their peerages. This will hopefully help form better relations between the two factions in the future. Though if no one has anything more to add, we should probably start the debriefing. Hitting a shake of heads from everyone. Probably a good place to start is with the girl who is unconscious on the couch. I'm going to guess she is the nun that was the goal for this mission. Hitting a nod from his son. You got it. She was unconscious when we saved her and she hasn't woken up yet, possibly due to whatever they did to her before the ritual, but that's just a guess at the moment. Hitting an understanding nod from the adults, right as the person in question woke up. As she woke up, Asia couldn't help but be confused as to what had happened. The last thing she remembered was being forced downstairs by the fallen angels and strapped to the cross and tortured before she fell unconscious due to the pain. As she sat up and looked around, she couldn't help but notice how soft the couch she had been lying down on was, as she noticed many faces she didn't know. Mostly kids her age and a couple of adults, but she did notice the two who had helped her find the church a few weeks ago. As she got her bearings, she was both happy and a little worried that everyone else in the room was being quiet, letting her look around and give her the chance to say anything first. Hi everyone, she said, trying to keep her fears in check. Both Issei and Sona gave each other a look that spoke without saying anything, and Sona stepped in as a spokesperson for the group. How are you, Ms. Argento? I'm sure you have many questions for us, but it's good to see you again, though I wish what led up to it was under better circumstances, she said, getting a scared look from the girl, something she could understand, as the girl was in a room with people she didn't know besides her and Issei. But that was just from a little bit of a conversation between them as they helped her find the church. What would you like to ask first, or would you like for us to explain why and how you're here? Still scared about not being sure what was going on, she decided to just go with the flow and see what was going on. First, can you explain what happened? Then I don't honestly know what to ask besides that, she said, though thought she could feel supernatural auras in the room from everyone, and couldn't help but feel she had seen the adults' pictures before. Nodding, Sona dived into it, hoping the girl wouldn't be too scared when she learned everyone here was devils beside herself as well as two of the Maoists. After looking at her sister, who gave her an uncharacteristically serious nod, she got started. Certainly. First, my name is Sona Citri, and the one beside me that also helped you out is Issei Hayaudu, my fiancé. Now I'm sure this will be a shock to you considering your background. When we helped you find the church, we realized something was going on, as we've had issues with the fallen angels who were using that church lately. She started before catching the shocked look coming from Asia. Yes, we know about the supernatural world, and everyone in here is a part of it themselves, as we are all devils, she said, deciding to get it right out from the beginning, as her, Issei, and their peerages spawned their wings from their backs, both surprising and scaring Asia since she was, now excommunicated, nun and had heard bad stories about devils. I'm not surprised by your reaction to what I just said, but like I said, after we met you, we learned that the group of fallen angels that were working out of the church were, while under orders to be here, defying the fallen angel governor general's orders and killing people within Kuo. Mostly from what we can determine were sacred gear wielders, and we had noticed that you had one when you healed the boy at the park. And after doing some digging, learned that what we feared might be happening was going to happen and started making plans to get you out of there. Sona continued before noticing it looked like the girl wanted to ask a question. If you have any questions or concerns, please speak up. We won't hurt you or anything of the sort. You said that you had issues with the fallen in this town before. I still can't believe what happened tonight, as from what I saw before they did what they could to help me after my incident, she said, pausing here as pain rolled through her eyes, which Sona and Issei caught mostly due to them being at the right angle, but knew they shouldn't bring up for now, so left it alone. I'm not sure what to think at the moment with everything that had happened. I can understand that and won't push for any details past what you would want to give us right now, or as time comes to pass if you want to get things off your chest. I'm sure you would be able to find someone within this group willing to listen, Sona said, deciding to not dive into what might have happened to her with what she called the incident. What I may say right now might be blunt and not what you want to hear. Are you okay for me to continue? She asked, getting a shaky nod from the girl. As I said, the fallen angel known as Rainer attacked Issei here and two of his friends a couple of weeks before you came into Kuo, and said something about doing it due to their sacred gears. What no one outside a few within the devil community knew at the time was that he was a pureed devil that had been kidnapped at birth and recently found, which started an investigation by the Maoists and the fallen governor general, which led us to learning more about the group here which were acting against his orders on what they should do within Kuo. And we learned that a nun was being sent here and was likely they were planning to pull your sacred gear out. Not saying that would have killed her, as she wasn't sure if the girl could handle it, but the shock on her face made Sona realize Asia knew what was left unsaid. We worked on getting ready to take down the fallen in the time after we met you till today, and when we made it to the church and found you, they were in the process of starting to pull your gear out. Though we were able to save you without you dying or anything, and took care of the fallen besides the one known as Calawarner, who as Issei learned was being blackmailed into helping. She finished, noticing that Asia seemed to be getting overwhelmed. I'm sorry if everything has been coming at you too quickly, but do you have any questions for us? We'll do our best to answer them if possible. Still trying to get her head wrapped around everything, especially being around devils right now, she did have a couple of questions. So what happens to me now? And could I get introduced to everyone else? She said, still feeling like she should recognize the adult still but couldn't place it. Certainly. To answer your first question, what would you like to do? I am willing to help what I can as I'm the current governor over Kyo itself, so we can figure something out if you would like to stay around, but we can come back to that later. As for introductions, I'll let the twins go first, then me and Issei will split up here and introduce our peerages to you, she said, motioning the twins forward. Elle stepped forward and introduced themselves to Asia. Nice to meet you. I'm Els and this is my sister Lynn Silhaueska, sent here by Azazel himself to help make sure things didn't get any worse than they already were between our two factions, and help with whatever we could. She finished before they both bowed. Sona then waved her peerage forward. My queen Tsubaki Shinra, my two bishops Momo Hanakai and Raya Kusaka, and my pawn Kazuki, she said, pointing to each in turn as they bowed towards the nun or waved in Raya and Momo's case, which seemed to calm Asia down some, right before Issei stepped forward and introduced his peerage. Sona also decided on leaving out that Issei was a part of her peerage as well as having his own for another day. As for my peerage, my two knights Yuikates and Kaori Miramaya, and my rook Kaneko Taoju. As they bowed and turned themselves, Issei though turned towards his parents and sister-in-law and moved over to stand next to them as they stepped up. Seraphal, being her usual self, stepped forward to introduce themselves. First off, I would like to let you know I wish this hadn't happened to you, and I hope you'll find new friends with this group. Even though our two sides are not on the best of terms most of the time, it's not always the case. I hope you won't be too scared when we introduce ourselves, but I'm Seraphal Leviathan, the Mao of Foreign Affairs, and this is Serzech Lucifer and his wife Graphia. Shocking the nun as she now realized just who she was in the presence of. We're here, one, since we're the ones that ordered these two peerages to deal with the situation, as well as Sona is my younger sister, and Issei is the long-lost son of Serzech and Graphia. And we wanted to make sure everyone was fine after the operation tonight and check on you too, since this operation was to help keep you safe, she said as she walked up to the girl and hugged her, surprising the girl, though it wasn't too long before she returned the hug, starting to feel safe around this group, before the group moved on to finishing the debriefing. Scene skip. As they finished the debriefing from the attack on the church, Serzech brought up an idea he'd been thinking about for a while. Now that we're done with the debriefing, at least unless something comes up later after talking with Azazel, I've got something I have been looking into for a bit, getting everyone's attention. I've been looking into it for a while, but I'm planning on upgrading your adoptive parents' house Issei to make it easier for when you get more peerage members or anyone else that you might want to have housed there. Getting a surprised look from Issei and his group while Sona had a contemplative look on her face. It isn't a bad idea, we just would need to figure out a way to keep his parents out of the way so that we can get it done within a timely manner while also keeping the supernatural a secret, she said, thinking for a bit before commenting. What about getting them a vacation somewhere that would be for the normal amount of time that it would take to build one, and Issei and Kaneko can stay at my apartment for the time being, she suggested, having already made the calls about getting 2 apartments set aside for the twins and Asia, since the twins had asked if they could stay within Kyo since they had gotten close with everyone, and pending talking it over with Azazel. They had been cleared with Sona and the Maoas, and it wasn't too big a stretch getting apartments where she lived due to the fact her family owned the building. And Asia had requested somewhere too, having nowhere else to go due to being kicked from the church, and felt safe with this group. Asia wasn't sure what it was about everyone here, but she couldn't help but feel at home with everyone here that had done their best to make sure she was safe and did so without knowing anything about her. Issei for his part was surprised at the offer, but did also understand where his father was coming from and didn't mind it too much. Sounds good to me, but how will we handle our neighbors? Kazuki and his family could move into the house or just work around it, but that just handles them, he said, getting a nod from his father, having already planned for that. Already taken care of. We passed on the news about it to your adoptive parents while everyone was training the past few weeks, and they agreed. We had just told them that we were working on getting any plans built up while we waited, and we already got your neighbors cleared up. For now, Kazuki and his siblings will still use the house next to yours, but that can always change down the line. Getting a thoughtful nod from the group since everything seemed to be in order. Not long after that, the group left with Issei going with Sona, the twins, and Asia towards the apartment block where Sona lived to show them around and make sure everything was in place for the trio. Scene skip. Planning for the new house came out without any issues. They got his adoptive parents out of the way for 2 weeks on a vacation to Kyoto, while Issei and Kaneko stayed at Sona's house for the little bit of time it took to get the house built using magic. Serzech had his team go all out when they designed and built the house, with 4 floors above ground and 3 below, and an elevator that could be used to access all the floors. The first floor was the kitchen, dining room, and a big sitting room, as well as a private study for his father. The second and third floor had 4 bedrooms apiece, with just a small wardrobe and bed till someone moved in and used the rooms, with a shared bathroom on each floor. The fourth floor had private rooms for his parents, Issei and Kaneko, and each also had their own private bathroom attached. For the bottom floors, the first floor had a massive swimming pool as well as a communal bath that could be either set up with a men's and women's side or a communal one with just a press of a couple of buttons. The second held a full-sized movie theater, and the third floor held a training room set aside for Issei, his peerage as well as anyone else, along with an area set aside for teleportation circles so people could come in and out easier. As for the teens, they still had to deal with school and devil contracts, which Issei's group had been able to get started on after the council decided on how to split the town between the 3 groups. And the kendo girls were getting used to the work and had already gotten a couple of contracts. Issei, for his part, was able to get some more pieces into his peerage, as the twins joined him, as well as Asia, with Linz and Asia taking a bishop piece, and Els taking his final rook piece, while all 3 fit in well with the devils within Kyo and had also made quite the scene when they joined Kyo Academy as second years. With the twins, they had gotten an agreement with Azazel to stay within the town, and he seemed to be acting like he had planned for this to happen. He even gave them permission to join a peerage without giving them permission if they so choose, though he denied it when they tried to confirm what he had just said. After thinking about it, they figured it wouldn't be a bad idea, considering what they had learned from training, and just hanging out with this group, it wouldn't be a bad thing. They had always been more of the type to roam around and not stay in one place too long, but had run into Penemu by chance one day, and after learning more about them, had got a meeting with Azazel for them, and over time got to where they started helping out the Grigori when they could before being put on full-time as hired hands for taking care of any issues that might come up where someone their age was better suited than an adult. When this assignment came up, they weren't sure what to expect, but after everything that happened, they decided to join Issei, and the group welcomed them with open arms. With Asia, it took her some time to fully warm up to the group, partially due to having grown up being ingrained that all devils were bad. But she did finally get to where everyone considered her as a close friend, and vice versa, and even was able to open up with everyone about whatever came up as a topic, especially Linz, as they both were more of the introverted types in the group, though they did learn early on that she had lived a sheltered life, no surprise considering what her life was before she got excommunicated and sent to Kyo. To say she was shocked when she learned what had almost happened would be an understatement, but she also couldn't help but be thankful that the group had been able to catch on and save her. After all, they came from different aspects of lives and both sides weren't even on good terms as it was, but here they were helping her to the best they could without any complaints. After some time thinking about it and talking to the group, she decided to join them as a devil, even though she was warned that she wouldn't be able to pray anymore, but felt that it was the right decision, and thanks to helping her and giving her a place to call home even with their different backgrounds. Right as the 2 weeks were coming to a close, Asia decided to go ahead and move into Issei's new house as she felt safe around him, and even though she hadn't had a chance to meet his adoptive parents, she felt that it would go well, just from what she had heard. When the two did get home, they instantly took a liking to her, much to the girls' happiness. While the twins decided to stay at the apartment building which Sona had graciously helped them get, Sona, the Kendo girls, and Tsubaki decided to move into Issei's new house, Tsubaki so she could stay near her kin, which Issei was fine with, though, to no one's surprise, Sona moved into Issei's room since they were engaged, though it didn't stop jokes being thrown at them for staying in the same room. When his adoptive parents got back home from their vacation, Issei couldn't help but throw a little jab at his son, saying that he sure seemed to be gathering a lot of girls around him now, much to Issei and the girls' embarrassment, and earning a slap from Amiko. They had already given clearance for the rooms to be used by anyone that Issei or Surzets might request, and were more than happy to have more faces around to dote on, and loved how the new house had turned out and the layout of everything. Not long after his parents had returned, Sona brought everyone in Issei's peerage into a meeting to let them know about something she'd been able to get set up for them. So, normally I wouldn't have been able to set this up for you myself, you would have had to do it, but since we're engaged I was able to get everything set up for your peerage to go to the familiar forest to obtain your own, she said, surprising the group, as while they had learned about familiars, with everything going on it had been pushed to the back burner until a better time could come up, and it seemed like it had come. Next week during the full moon, your group can go and get them. Nodding his head in thanks, Issei did have a request of Sona which she didn't mind too much. Sure, if you don't mind, could you come with us though? Should be fun to see what everyone gets. I'd love to go, she said as the group finalized their plans for next week. As the group consisting of Issei, his peerage, and Sona got ready to make the jump to the familiar forest, Sona received a call for backup from her Bishop Momo, who was out doing a contract. Sorry Issei, but it looks like I'm needed elsewhere. Go ahead and make your way to the forest, I'll catch up with everyone afterward, she said before seeing the look on Issei's face. I know that look Issei, but I'll be fine. You should go with the group and get your familiars while the time is ripe. Are you sure? I don't want to leave you in a bad situation where I might have helped, he said, having thought that Momo sounded like she might be in trouble. Smiling at him as she knew how he was, she calmed his fears. I'm sure. After the training we all went through, I'm sure we'll be fine. She just needs help since she's more oriented towards defense magic. she said, reminding him of that fact, so he decided to trust his fiancée for now. Okay, but don't be afraid to call me if you need assistance. I am your rook after all, he said as he had her before she stepped away to use another teleportation circle. As the group teleported to the familiar forest, everyone but Kaneko, who had been there before, looked around amazed at the size of the forest they were in. Everywhere they looked there were massive trees and bushes, as well as what sounded like what might be a creek nearby but couldn't be seen from where they were. While they were looking around, Kaneko for her part called out her familiar and let it roam free for the time being. Right as Issei was wondering where the person that they were supposed to meet was, the one who ran the familiar forest, they heard a noise to the side of them and looked over to see a man with a red baseball cap worn backwards, a green shirt, and a pair of jeans pop up out of nowhere. Welcome, welcome everyone, you must be the Hayatu peerage I was told to expect, getting a nod from Issei. How many people are here to get a familiar? Including myself, we have 6 needing a familiar. Interesting, interesting. What kind of familiar would each of you like to get? I want something cute and cuddly, Asia replied. I wouldn't mind something along the lines of a cat, Lin said. I think we'd both like a canine, the Kendo girl said. I don't honestly have a preference, said both Issei and Els. Well, those aren't too hard to find and we can start with the canines as they are the closest to our current area. If everyone will follow me, we'll get this show underway, the master said as they followed him towards one area of the forest, with him having a conversation with Els and Issei to help try and figure out a good familiar for them. Issei for his part felt D-Drag stir in the back of his mind as they kept walking. D-Drag asked, Sure, I don't mind, he replied before making a decision. Actually, if you'll direct me to her, I'll go do it now and get it done. Hey familiar master, do you mind if I take a detour real quick? I'm the current wielder of the boosted gear and he's asked me to go talk to Tiamat. Getting a surprised look from the master. I don't mind, just be mindful and don't get yourself hurt, he said, surprised to hear that he had the latest Red Dragon Emperor with him tonight. Thank you, good sir. Kaneko, if you would go ahead and help everyone else find a familiar, he requested, getting a nod from the girl as they split up. Scene skip. As they found the cave where Issei could feel the energy that had to be coming from Tiamat, he found a large pale blue dragon that was currently sleeping. Tiamat was a good-sized dragon, even with her wings folded, and the cave was barely big enough for her frame. She had 2 sets of horns, one twisting and rolling like ram horns, and one set curved just enough not to stick straight up. Issei hadn't realized that she had woken up due to still looking around, that he jumped when she spoke up. Are you just going to keep standing there staring at me all day? She asked, yawning, having woken up from sensing his presence and another that she knew all too well. While she would have normally attacked anyone that came near her if she sensed D-Drag on them, something about this boy stilled that reaction to her surprise. I'm sorry about that, Tiamat. I hadn't realized you had woken up yet, Issei said, trying to be respectful and hoping he hadn't pissed her off as he could sense the enormous pressure coming off of her from her power. You're forgiven, though I wonder how I can sense D-Drag on you, even though you seem different from any of his previous wielders I've come across. Not too sure what to think about what she could sense coming off of the boy. D-Drag made himself known as the boosted gear popped up on Issei's arm. Oh, is he willing to help take the blame for you after you borrowed some of my treasures which then got destroyed in your fight against Albion? She asked, seeming to up the pressure that Issei was feeling coming off of her as he looked down at the gear. So that's what you meant when she wouldn't be too happy to see you, he said, not too sure what to think about what he had just heard, getting a nervous chuckle back before D-Drag responded. He said pointedly at her past transgressions of killing his hosts and getting a glare from her at the gear as it glowed and dropped off the said items on the ground in front of the two. Surprised at what D-Drag had done, she nonetheless decided to drop the issue for now after making sure he wasn't lying. Thank you, though I would like to learn more about you, boy. He seems both powerful and humble. From what I've come to understand, I was kidnapped as a baby from my cradle and they believe my genetics somehow got changed around enough to register me as a human supposedly in the Sacred Gear database, which allowed me to obtain D-Drag here. But I was born a full devil to Surzech and Graphia, he mentioned, with Tiamat remembering hearing about something like that happening. I do remember hearing about the current Lucifer raising hell when his son was kidnapped. No wonder I can feel so much power coming off of you and you're not even using the boosted gear, D-Drag said, impressing Tiamat as she decided to make an offer to the boy. Issei was surprised to see her start transforming in front of him, and even more so with her next words. Well then, how about a proposition for you? Tiamat had the shape of an older human girl with pale blue hair going down to her shoulders and deep blue eyes that reminded him of the ocean. How would you like to have a Dragon King as your familiar? Surprising Issei. Are you sure? I wouldn't want to inconvenience you in any way by having you join me, he said, not too sure what to think about the offer, but I would love it if it was possible. A Dragon King as a familiar. Anyone would be crazy not to take the offer when they are the ones making it. Well, your worries are touching, I'm sure. I've been in the forest for a long time, and I feel like with your power, you will be getting into plenty of interesting opportunities in the future, she said, getting a nod from him as he prepared to do the ritual to make her his familiar. After they finished the ritual, he had a blue dragon head mark on his right shoulder, while she had one on her shoulder that looked like the normal magic circle that he used. With that, they got ready to get back to his peerage and check on their progress on getting their own familiars. Scene skip. Right as they teleported back to the group, they found that everyone besides Asia had found their familiar. Els had gotten a red raven-looking bird. Lynn's got a Siamese-looking black cat, and the Kendo girls both smaller-looking dogs, black for Kaori, white for Yui, but that was about to change as Asia saw something off to the side. Asia POV. Having not seen anything that I felt like would fit me as a familiar yet, I was beginning to feel down, but I didn't count myself out for the count yet. Right after Issei came back and let us know what happened on his end, I happened to look off to the side and saw a flash of blue in a tree, which I recognized as a dragon after turning my full gaze to it. "Hey, guys," I called out, getting everyone's attention. "Look up high over there," getting a shocked look from the familiar master as he saw what I had found. Well, you found an extremely rare find there, miss. That's a sprite dragon and you don't see many of them in the forest," he said, getting a look of shock. "If you want to capture that one as a familiar, I would do it now as they are untamable as an adult." Tiamat stepped up at this point too and gave some more information. "He's right, even with as long as I've lived in this forest, I've only seen a handful myself. Their main ability is lightning attacks but can be useful to help defend against weaker opponents," she said, though thinking something felt off about Asia but couldn't quite tell what it was. As the group was talking excitedly behind me about the rare find, I felt myself being drawn towards the little dragon as if something inside of me was pushing me to take it as my familiar. I took my chances and moved towards it and getting the dragon to notice our presence and turned to look at us before looking at me with curiosity. Right as I was going to ask the familiar master or Tiamat about what I should do next, the sprite dragon flew down towards us yelling raw, gaining a gasp from everyone as we weren't sure what was going on with him. Though I became more surprised than anything when he flew up to me and started to nuzzle its face against mine. Can someone please explain what might be going on here?" I asked, starting to get a little worried, though it was also starting to tickle, and I did my best to keep from laughing, as I didn't want to scare the sprite, though I did let out a little giggle as I reached up with my hands to see what would happen. Both the familiar master and Tiamat were surprised at what was going on with the little dragon, though the master did get words out first. "It seems like the little dragon has taken a liking to you. I would suggest making it your familiar now, as I think you've found yours," he said, getting a nod from everyone as the dragon landed in my hands and I set him down to do the ritual like I had been shown. Normal POV. After Asia completed the ritual, the dragon flew up into her arms and let her hold him. "Good for you, Asia. I'm glad everyone was able to get their own familiars tonight," Issei said as he looked around at everyone to make sure everything was in order, but before he could say or do anything else, the sprite yelled "Ra" once more before flying over to Issei and doing the same thing he had done to Asia in the beginning, surprising everyone there. "Well, this is unexpected," the familiar master said as he tried to step towards Issei to get a better look, only to get zapped by the little guy. "Well, that just proved my point I was about to say, but normally these guys don't like other males and will do exactly what he did to me. What changed, I wonder?" Tiamat had the same thoughts, but had a guess though as Asia stepped over to Issei, not sure what was going on. It may be due to it sensing D-drag on Issei and he chose to accept him. Giving a guess for now, though the master couldn't fault the guess as he had no clue himself. Asia, who couldn't help but feel elated at what the small dragon had done, she had started having a small crush on Issei the more she got to know him, decided on a name for the dragon. "I think I'll name it Rassei after what it yells out in Issei," she shyly said as she let the dragon go back to her, hugging it. While Issei had a stunned look on his face, having recognized what the name signified, though didn't mind too much either as he prepared a teleportation circle to get them out of the forest. "Thanks for all your help today. It was fun, but we need to be getting back," he said, getting a wave of goodbye from the familiar master as they teleported to the council office, with Issei hoping to get some time with Sona before they went to sleep, and figured he'd start looking for her there since that's where they split up. What he wasn't expecting to see was that Sona was talking to two new faces in the office, though he thought he recognized them. If nothing else, had probably seen them around school since they had QO Academy clothes on, and surprised the new girls as the group came back. Sona was glad to see the group back and seemingly in a good mood. "Welcome back, everyone. I just was giving these two a quick briefing on the supernatural. As you know, I got called away to help Momo, who when she reached her contract realized there was a vampire in the same apartment building trying to attack these girls and called for assistance." Getting a nod from Issei as he went ahead and dismissed his group and let them go on their way as he moved over to Sona. "I still could have come with you, but I'm glad that everyone is safe," he said, wanting to say more but decided to leave it be after seeing they were fine right as one of the girls spoke up, making both of them turn towards the two. I hope I'm not interrupting anything, but if you don't mind me asking, why are you telling us any of this? We're both just normal girls here without anything special to us," one of the girls asked. She was a first-year girl with long dark brown hair and twin ponytails named Ruruko Namura. Right as Sona was going to answer, the other girl stepped in first. The second girl, Tomo Meguri, was a second-year with shoulder-length reddish-brown hair with swept bangs and a single strand of hair standing up. "Sorry, Ruruko, but that vampire might have actually been there targeting me. My family has known and been a part of the supernatural in the fact that we exorcise demons, which are different than devils, just in case you might wonder. So it's very possible the vampire knew or realized I was a Meguri and attacked me, and you happened to get caught in the crossfire." It's also possible it was one of those wrong place at the wrong time situations, she said, surprising the group still in the room, though Sona quickly realized that she had heard about the Meguri family and their abilities, but hadn't ever realized that Tama was one of them. I feel like I should be mad about you hiding something like this from me, but I can also understand why. Though I'm still not sure on why you would tell me any of this. I'm not special in any way. Wait, you're not mad at me for what happened? Even if I was possibly the reason we were attacked. Not really. Like you said, it could have been just bad luck on our part, or he could have been attacking you, but I'm not going to blame you for what your family does as a living. Families with jobs like that always have enemies. Thanks, Ruru. I'm glad that you aren't mad at me, Tama said before Sona stepped up to answer Ruruko's earlier question. To answer your earlier question, you don't have to be special to be helpful. Just knowing about the supernatural means that you can help keep incidents like that from happening again. Just with the knowledge, you'll be able to be more aware and help better with situations in the future, she said, getting a nod from Issei as they had both sat down at her desk by now. Okay, but like I said, what can I do? I don't know how to fight, and I wasn't able to do anything to help in the situation earlier. Don't forget I wasn't able to save us either. True, but you were able to at least help, which was more than I could do. Yes, but it wasn't enough, Tamo said, sounding more annoyed than anything before turning to Sona. Taichu, I saw how you were able to defeat the vampire easily, and I know how devil peerages work. Would you be willing to add me to your peerage? She requested before bowing to Sona, and after a moment's thought, Ruruko asked the same thing. Surprised at what had just happened, she wanted to make sure Ruruko wanted to join them. She could understand where Tama was coming from, but wasn't sure about the other girl. Before asking her, she turned to Issei to get his thoughts, and he just shrugged his shoulders, saying it was her choice in the matter. Sure, she'd be getting another peerage member, but it was also one that knew nothing about the supernatural before today, though she was wanting to do it of her own volition. Are you sure, Namura? Once you make this decision, there is no turning back. Getting a serious nod back from the girl. Thank you for the concern, but I'm sure. If it means being able to help Tamo and anyone else, then I'm willing to do it, she said with conviction, and allowing Sona to understand she did know what she was doing and was okay with it. Pulling out her evil pieces, Sona thought about what piece to use on the girls. Remembering that Tama was using a sword to try and help defend the group when Sona got there, she pulled out a knight piece for her, and since there wasn't anything really special for Ruruko, just pulled out a pawn piece, willing to accept the girl. Ordering the girls to lie down on the ground, she placed the pieces on their chests and did the chant to add them to her peerage, getting a welcome from the group that was still in the office, mainly those that lived at Issei's house and had decided to wait on Sona and Issei to head home. That's all we'll do tonight. Come back tomorrow and we'll go over more of the current situation with the supernatural and get started on your training, she said, getting a nod of acceptance from the two as everyone got ready to leave. Well, that went well, all things considered, Issei said as he reached for her hand as the group got packed up and made their way back to his house. I agree, and we even got more members, which I honestly wasn't expecting when I brought them back to the office. Right now I'm just ready to get home and cuddle for the night, Sona said, squeezing his hand as they walked towards his house, blushing at her words as the rest of the group laughed at her. I agree. We'll see everyone tomorrow, Issei said as they reached his house and bid good night to the rest of the group. Issei Takumi Hayadu Gremory. Title: Red Dragon Emperor. Evil Piece 2x Mutated Rook. Mutated King. Peerage: Issei Hayadu. Sona Citri. Sacred Gear: Boosted Gear. Powers: Ice Magic. Fire Magic. Ability to boost his power every 10 seconds and use it himself or pass it to someone else. Dragon Shot. Many more are not unlocked. Skilled in hand-to-hand combat. Skilled Magician. Other engaged to Sona Citri, son of Surzech and Grafia, though grew up in the human world with knowledge of his powers after he was kidnapped as a baby. Power levels: Strength A+, Speed B, Magic S, Hand-to-Hand A, Endurance S. Sona Citri. Title: Heiress to the Citri clan. Governor of Kyo. Evil Peace King. Peerage: Sona Citri. Sacred Gear N A. Powers: Water Magic. Eye Magic Gorgon Jisai. Some control over Ice Magic. Magic Expert. Master Tactician. Other engaged to Issei Hayadu, sole governor of Kyo after the incident involving Rias, Issei, and the Fallen Angels. Power levels: Strength C, Speed C, Magic A+, Hand-to-Hand D, Endurance B. Rias Gremory. Title: Heiress to the Gremory clan. Evil Peace King. Peerage: Rias Gremory. Sacred Gear N A. Powers: Power of Destruction. Expert Magician. Power levels: Strength C, Speed C, Magic A, Hand-to-Hand D, Endurance B. Kaori Murameya. Title: Evil Piece 1x Mutated Knight. Peerage: Issei Hayadu. Sacred Gear Blade Blacksmith. Powers: Ability to summon holy swords on a whim to help fight enemies. Skilled Swordswoman. Power levels: Strength C, Speed A, Magic C, Hand-to-Hand B, Endurance C. Yui Kades. Title: Evil Piece 1x Mutated Knight. Peerage: Issei Hayadu. Sacred Gear Momentum Pillage. Powers: Ability to pull enemies' speed away from them and harness it for herself to use. Skilled Swordswoman. Power levels: Strength B, Speed A, Magic C, Hand-to-Hand B, Endurance B. Chiba Yuyudo. Title: Evil Piece 1x Knight. Peerage: Rias Gremory. Sacred Gear Sword Birth. Power's ability to create demonic swords at will and use them against enemies. Sword birth. Power levels. Strength B. Speed S. Magic C. Hand-to-hand B. Endurance B. Taniko Tauju. Title: Evil Piece 1x Mutated Rook. Issei Hayaudu. Sacred Gear. Powers: immense strength and durability, befitting her being a rook. Senjutsu. Enhanced senses. Master in hand-to-hand combat. Power levels. Strength S. Speed C. Magic C. Hand-to-hand S+. Endurance A+. Lin Silhaueska. Title: Evil Piece 1x Mutated Bishop. Issei Hayaudu. Sacred Gear. Powers: water magic, fire magic, defense magic, decent mastery. Power levels. Strength C. Speed C. Magic A+. Hand-to-hand D. Endurance C. L Silhaueska. Title: Evil Piece 1x Mutated Rook. Issei Hayaudu. Sacred Gear. Powers: fortification magic, immense strength even before using fortification to strengthen her hits. Power levels. Strength S. Speed C. Magic D. Hand-to-hand S+. Endurance A+. Matsuda. Title: Evil Piece 4x Pawn. Ria's Gremory. Sacred Gear reflection type. Powers. Power levels. Strength C. Speed B. Magic C. Hand-to-hand B. Endurance B. Madohoma. Title: Evil Piece 4x Pawn. Ria's Gremory. Sacred Gear absorption type. Powers. Power levels. Strength C. Speed B. Magic C. Hand-to-hand B. Endurance B. Akino Heimjima. Title: Priestess of Thunder. Evil Piece Queen. Ria's Gremory. Sacred Gear. Powers: Holy Lightning. Expert Magician. Extreme Sadist. Power levels. Strength B. Speed B. Magic A+. Hand C. Endurance B. Asia Argento. Title: Holy Priestess. Evil Piece 1x Mutated Bishop. Issei Hayaudu. Sacred Gear Twilight Healing. Powers: ability to heal any supernatural being, be it fallen angel, or devil. Twilight Healing can heal any injury besides amputated limbs, reducing exhaustion, or cure sicknesses. Due to her kind nature, Asia has to be careful if she was to try and heal in a wide range it could affect enemies too. Power levels. Strength D. Speed C. Magic A. Hand-to-hand F. Endurance C. Tsubaki Shinra. Title: Evil Piece Queen. Sona Citri. Sacred Gear Mirror Alice. Powers: ability to redirect enemies' attacks back at them at full power. Skilled Magician. Power levels. Strength B. Speed B. Magic A. Hand-to-hand C. Endurance B. Momo Hanakai. Title: Evil Piece 1x Bishop. Sona Citri. Sacred Gear. Powers: Skilled Magician. Defense-oriented magic spells. Ability to reverse any power or object's ability and possibly use it against the attacker. Power levels. Strength C. Speed C. Magic A. Hand-to-hand D. Endurance B. Rei Kusaka. Rank. Title: Evil Piece 1x Bishop. Sona Citri. Sacred Gear. Powers: Skilled Magician. Attack-oriented magic spells. Power levels. Strength B. Speed C. Magic A. Hand-to-hand D. Endurance B. Tezuki. Rank. Title: Evil Piece 3x Pawn. Sona Citri. Sacred Gear Area of Elements. Powers: control over different elements if he sings the song related to the area of that element. Power levels. Strength C. Speed B. Magic C. Hand-to-hand A. Endurance B. Volley Lucifer. Rank. Title: White Dragon Emperor. Evil Piece. Volley Team. Sacred Gear Divine Dividing. Powers: ability to have the enemy's strength every 10 seconds and transfer it to himself to use. Master in hand-to-hand. Immense demonic power. Immense stamina. Power levels. Strength S. Speed A. Magic S. Hand-to-hand S. Endurance S. Lefei Pendragon. Rank. Title: Evil Piece. Volley Team. Sacred Gear. Powers: immense magic potential. Reverse teleportation magic. Ability to summon Gogmagog. Power levels. Strength C. Speed B. Magic S. Hand-to-hand D. Endurance B. Arthur Pendragon. Rank. Title: Evil Piece. Volley Team. Sacred Gear. Powers: Holy Sword Caliburn. Natural Born. Holy Sword Wielder. Master Swordsman. Power levels. Strength S. Speed S. Magic B. Hand-to-hand B. Endurance C. In the time since Issei's group had gotten their familiars, not much had changed for the teens. The new additions had both easily fit into the group and found that while the training was harsh at first, it did help them gain strength. Tamo had warmed up to the kendo girls since they were all swordswomen, and even Maruko had found the rest of the student council and Issei's group easy to talk to about anything. The biggest thing to happen though for the group before summer break was that Rias and Issei finally had their chance to get together and work on fixing their strained friendship, as Rias apologized to him profusely and let him know why she did it. She'd had a fear of that no one else knows about, and something with his condition always kicked her fight or flight into flight mode. Issei for his part accepted her apology and understood what she was talking about and could see how something like that would cause issues. And while they were at it, he worked on helping Sona mend her friendship with Rias, and once they were all under better speaking terms, they started having a meeting between the three of them at least once a week, just catching up on things going on around town and with their peerages, and that's where he was headed now, was to one of those meetings. "Hey Sona, Rias, sorry I'm late," he said as he opened the door to the orc, only to realize there was someone new he'd never met before in the room. Who the hell is this that would talk to you two so casually? I'd ask the same thing. Who the hell are you? Issei asked back, not liking this guy's attitude. Clearly you haven't heard that you shouldn't speak without permission when around your betters. What the hell, guys? Arguing like children. You both should be ashamed of yourselves. Sona stepped in, trying to calm things down, as she could tell Issei was getting pissed off, but she knew that with how both guys were, she probably wouldn't be able to do anything in this situation. Clearly neither of you know what you're doing if you're letting a peon like this talk to you so casually, Riser said, figuring this guy was just some human or lookless devil, as he couldn't feel very much power coming off him. You want to put your money where your mouth is, asshole. Damn it, why am I not surprised neither of them is listening to me? Sona thought as she turned towards Riaz, hoping to get this stopped before it got any worse. She only knew one way that should stop this in its tracks. Riaz, call Grafia please and get her here. She should be able to get this situation calmed down. Getting a nod of agreement from her as she moved away to make the call. What didn't surprise the two was that Grafia's magic circle popped up even before Riaz finished explaining what was going on. Grafia had been in a meeting when she got the call from Riaz and knew instantly what had happened even before the story finished, so excused herself to go deal with the situation, and found it exactly like she knew it would be. While she would normally have been there from the start for something like this, since they all knew that Riaz was not a fan of the agreement, things changed at the last minute where she couldn't be there, and it turned out that it was a bad mistake. She had to internally smile at her son, who was calling out Riser, who Riaz was in an arranged marriage with, for his stuck-up attitude, but kept her face neutral. Enough, you two, she said, not yelling but making sure to have put on her authoritative voice to make sure they stepped down. Issei knew immediately he needed to step back, as he didn't want to deal with his mother being pissed off. Riser, for his part, couldn't fathom why they were protecting this boy, but did back down, as while he had never officially met Grafia before, he knew of her power. And she did outrank him. As you wish, though I don't understand why you three won't let me take care of this arrogant human, Riser said before Grafia threw a small icicle past his ear, making Issei wince, as he knew how much those could hurt from training, though also kept quiet. He knew that if his mother had been called, then this was something big, but as he hadn't heard anything, he didn't know what. Though had to guess it likely had something to do with his aunt, both cause of it being Grafia called, as well as the meeting was in the Orc Club room. You call him arrogant, but I doubt you even know who he is, she replied, getting a confused look from him. Please, enlighten me then, as it seems like I'm missing something. I'm sure you heard about how years ago my oldest son was kidnapped from his crib at our house by a stray devil. Riser may be arrogant and not worry about anything but himself, but he did vaguely remember something like that happening and making the news. I do remember hearing something along those lines, and also that he had been recently found. But you can't tell me this boy is your son. He couldn't believe that this boy could be the long-lost son of Grafia. Not only could he not feel any power coming off of him, and his arrogance still somewhat upfront. Smirking internally, Grafia turned to Issei, with him understanding what she was asking him to do. Issei, if you would please. Getting a nod from him as he let free some of his control on his power go and let just a bit of it out, enough to prove that he was his parents' child, and causing Riser to step back in shock, as he hadn't been expecting this from the boy since he hadn't felt it on him at all, which meant that he had a lot of control over his powers. After a couple seconds, Issei sealed his power back up before going and hugging his mother and sitting beside her as she prepared to be a mediator in this situation. Yes, this is my son, so I would be careful on words next time. Well then, I'm sorry for my ignorance. To have so much control over your power though is staggering, so you must be very talented. Thank you. Now if you don't mind, could you tell me who you are? I am Riser Phoenix, the second son of the Phoenix clan. I only came here to the human world to try and convince my fiancée Riaz to come back to the underworld instead of living in the dreary human world. I already told you, Riser, I will not marry you. I don't care that this is an arranged marriage, as I want to marry someone of my choosing, not like this. I don't know why you're so against it, as this is for the betterment of the devil community, since we're both from noble families. I will not marry you. Issei at this point had one question going through his head, as this was the first he had heard anything about this. This is more for my curiosity than anything, but why couldn't you just ask another noble and break off this agreement? It's expected of noble males to have children to continue our lines, so I'll likely take multiple wives. Then why are you trying so hard? I would go and find someone more willing. I won't say you don't have a valid point, but as you two are related you might see things differently, but who wouldn't want to marry her? She's beautiful and powerful, and one I want to marry. Seeing as this was going nowhere, and as she knew of a way that Riaz might be able to get out of it due to being in the room when the marriage agreement was made, slight though as it was, Grafia stepped in, getting everyone's attention. If I may, in the original written agreement, there was a way for Riaz to get out of the marriage if she is unhappy with it, and that is to request a rating game and win against Riser. Before anyone could say anything in response, Riaz stepped in. Then that's what I want to do. I'll do anything to get out of this. Well then, I think this should be an interesting game at the least, since I've got a full peerage as well as experience in rating games. With those facts in place, I'll give you a month to prepare and possibly find more peerage members if you only have the ones that you dismissed earlier when I showed up. Until then, Riser said as he teleported out of the room. Riaz for her part just sighed in exasperation. Why was he the one I had to be engaged to? At least this time it was just him and not his whole peerage. What do you mean by that? You heard him talk about how he'll likely take multiple wives. He was being nice, I'm sure, since Grafia was here, but he was meaning slaves. He's a womanizing jerk and spent the last time here groping his queen and just making a scene. Issei was starting to understand why Riaz wouldn't agree to this marriage. Now I wish that this was my problem so I could deal with the guy myself. While I thank you for the thought, it's my problem, not yours, Riaz replied, thankful that he felt that way when she noticed that Sona looked like she just had a great plan come to mind. Sona, you're right, it's not his problem right now, but we could make it his, she said, remembering a little-known fact to most of the devil community for the moment and making both Riaz and Issei look at her in confusion while Grafia smiled and excused herself to get back to work as she knew what Sona was going to suggest, planned on making sure that it would be cleared to happen. Don't forget I had to use my 2 mutated rooks along with Issei's king piece to revive him, so technically he's a part of my peerage, but we also have a unique situation in that he can deny being my rook if he so chooses. I honestly don't know how all of it works, but from what Adjuka told us it has something to do with the fact that it took 2 different pieces from 2 different peerages, she said, getting a shocked look from the two as they caught on to what she was talking about. So if he agrees to it, you could trade him to me and he'd be able to fight for me in the match, Riaz said, having forgotten about that fact but was starting to be thankful they had made up by this point. I don't mind. I'd love to take that guy down a peg, Issei said, looking forward to the idea, though he did have to ask a question. If I join you, does that mean my peerage would also have to fight? Not too fond of the idea if he was being honest. No, in situations like this only the person traded is required to fight even if they have their own peerage. But that still leaves us with the issue of not enough manpower to take him out of the game, especially when you factor in his phoenix abilities that allow him to heal from any damage. Issei for his part had started getting a plan in the back of his mind after hearing her thoughts. Then we would just need to overwhelm him. Do you think Kiba and Akino would be able to stall for about half an hour for me? He asked, not sure if his 2 buddies would have had enough training to help in that part of his plan yet. Not by themselves. What's on your mind? Ever since I got back as a devil, my time I could boost up to before I was at my limit got increased by a lot, and after 30 minutes of boosting, my ice magic is the closest D-Drag has ever seen from anyone using ice magic to being able to freeze his flames, and I believe I can use that to our advantage, taking Riser out of the game by immobilizing him. I like the idea, but to get that much time, they would definitely need some help. Unless, Riaz said, pausing to think right as Sona caught on to what she was thinking. Don't tell me you're thinking what I think you are, she asked, getting a confused look from Issei. Yes, I am Sona. I think with Issei's help, we can get Gasper's power under control if I can get my brother to agree to the request. Who's Gasper? You already know Akino and Kiba, but I've got one more you haven't met yet. That's one of my bishops named Gasper. He's a half-vampire and has a sacred gear that he has no control over currently, and as powerful as it was deemed necessary to seal him away to keep him from accidentally hurting someone. What's his gear? It's known as the Forbidden Balor View, and allows him to stop time of anything within his sights from moving, and even though he has no control over it, he's able to freeze someone for 10 minutes. She replied, getting Issei to understand why they would do something like that right as Sona had something to say about it. Are you crazy? The only person that's able to get around his power is Serzech's. Plus there is no telling if your brother will unseal him for us. Well, it's worth a try in my opinion. Maybe as his son, I'll be immune too, Issei said, not minding the idea as Riaz made a call. Scene skip. A couple hours later, the 3 of them and Serzech were seen walking the halls of the Orc building towards one room in particular that had "Do Not Cross" signs on it. While Issei had seen this room in his times while visiting the Orc, he'd never thought to ask what was behind the door. As soon as Issei had agreed to try and train Gasper, Riaz immediately called her brother to see about getting the room unsealed since he was the one that had done it originally, and he set aside time later in the day to do it for them. I'm glad to see you 3 getting along well nowadays, and that you're sticking up for her, Issei. What can I say? I'll always do anything for family or friends. I wish I could say I raised you well, but I guess I can thank Issei and Amiko for that. Don't feel bad, Papa. It wasn't your fault, nor do I blame you or Mama for what happened, Issei said as they finished walking to the door where Riaz stepped aside for Serzech to undo the seal. I just want to say I want to make sure Issei's able to get around the gear. If he's not, I'll be sealing him back up. He warned his sister, who nodded in acceptance at his words, and he undid the seal. Looking into the room, Riaz saw the box Gasper loved to use and it moving from what she guessed was him inside, shaking at the door being opened. Hey, Gasper, I think I found someone that can finally help you gain control of your powers. And I know new people are scary, Gasper replied, making everyone but Issei sigh at the usual response from the boy. You do realize you'll need to come out at some point, right? But I don't want to, he said, once again getting a sigh from Riaz, though it soon turned to surprise at Issei's next move. Sighing at what he was seeing, Issei walked up to the box before picking it up and dumping the boy out onto the floor. If you're a man, why are you acting like this? We can't afford to be scared of everybody and everything. Besides, you're a part of my aunt's peerage, and how would you feel if something happened to her and it was due to you not being there and could have helped keep the situation from happening? Do you want to be able to help her or let her down, he told Gasper, who looked up at him in shock. While Issei might have been surprised by the girl clothes the vampire was wearing, he'd heard more about him while they were waiting on Serzech to be free and wasn't surprised. But people are still scary, Gasper said, still afraid of people from growing up and his fear of what might happen if his power activated at the wrong time as he quickly looked up at Issei before looking back down. I get it, you have a power that scares you, especially as you have no control over it, but if you learn to control it you won't have to be scared, and I'm willing to help you learn to control it and overcome your fears, but you need to be willing. I'm willing to become your friend and help you make that leap. Gasper couldn't explain what was going on, but something was happening and he was starting to warm up to the idea coming from this boy that had shown up recently and he was meeting for the first time, and hoped against hope that his power wouldn't affect him as he looked back up at Issei, and hoped against hope that he would be able to do what he offered and be able to get more friends. Right as it seemed like his words had reached the boy, Issei felt a weird pulse roll over him, which he figured had to be Gasper's gear activating, but was happy to determine that he didn't seem to be affected by it as he offered a hand up to Gasper as they formally introduced themselves, with Gasper being surprised to learn that Issei was related to Rias, as well as the fact someone else was able to get past his power. Issei, for his part, was happy to see that his son was both unaffected by Gasper's power and was able to bring the boy out of his shell, even if it was just the beginning, as he bade farewell to Rias and Sona, deciding to leave the group to their own devices. Rias, for her part, was surprised at how easily Issei had gotten Gasper to come out of his shell, and hoped that the change would continue to happen and Gasper would be able to hang out more and not be so introverted, but knew with his past it wouldn't be a fast change. Sona, for her part, was happy for her fiancé that he was able to do this much for the boy, but wasn't surprised either, having spent so much time with him, as the group made their way to the main room of the orc to talk upcoming plans. The group, consisting of Rias, Gasper, Sona, and Issei, stayed around and talked a little bit, just trying to help get Gasper more out of his shell and get a game plan in place. Thankfully for Issei, who still needed to sleep, was that Gasper was a dampier, so was able to walk and do stuff during the daytime. Issei suggested Gasper just to get the ball rolling on trying to get him out more and comfortable, while also working on a way to get him acquainted with the 3 peerages members within QO. I have a request for you that will help us get started if you're willing to help me. He started getting a shaky nod from the boy. I would like you to start by working on being outside of your room during the day, even if it's just here in the orc building, and try and get it to where you are okay being outside of it for at least 2 hours a day. You can keep your box with you and climb in it if you need some time, but I want to get you where you don't need it before we get into the training. I'll make sure and stop by when I can and chat for a bit. Gasper, for his part, seemed to be on the brink of going back to his room, but also wanting to try and learn from Issei. We'll try, senpai. But do you think this will help? I think it will if you are willing for it to. I know it won't be an easy process, but we'll do this together. Gasper nodded at his words, hoping that Issei would be able to help him get out more, as he felt the support he was giving him, and he decided to give it his best, as Issei decided to call it a night and start tomorrow. If you want to try it tonight, especially since people won't be around once we leave, go ahead, but I would personally suggest waiting till tomorrow to start, as I'm ready to call it a night, he said, getting a nod from everyone as they stood up and said goodnight. Scene skip. The next week went by normally for the group as Gasper slowly but surely worked on staying outside his room like Issei asked him. Issei, for his part, to help Gasper, came by every day during lunch break and after school just to talk to the boy and learn more about him, while also bringing the members of the 3 peerages who hadn't met him by one by one, so he could get to know them a little bit and get more out of his shell. Though it did happen sometimes where he accidentally activated his powers. It wasn't an issue, as Issei had made sure to warn the person he had with him what to expect and not get upset at the boy if it did happen, and the meetings did help the boy out some more getting out of his shell. He also started working on gathering rubber balls that would help with the next part of his training plan. After the 4th day of the week, Gasper had finally worked up the courage to stay out of his room like Issei requested, but even took it farther and was able to do it for up to 5 hours without his box. Rias was surprised to see him outside his room and without his box, not even a week since they started working with him. He had started to, when he got scared or anything that might have required him to go in his box, just close his eyes and take a breath and then go on from there. Rias had happened to be nearby one time when he almost had an attack and watched as he was able to calm himself down and not cause his powers to go off by just closing his eyes and breathing slowly. It surprised her so much, she started thinking of having a talk with her father after this whole mess was over about some things. Once he told Issei, they moved on to the next bit of training. Using the balls he had procured while waiting on Gasper to gain more courage, Issei had him stand right next to a tree while Issei threw the balls at him, trying to get him to stop the balls with his powers, while also slowly continuing to bring in the group's peerage members just to help him more get used to people, which seemed to help some. They used this method until it seemed like they hit the limit of how much they could help Gasper out at controlling his gear 12% of the time, so bumped it up a notch. The next step of the training had Gasper standing closer to where Issei was throwing the balls to hopefully get him to where he would activate his gear, which seemed to work as they were able to get it up to where he could control it 60%. The time before, it seemed like they had hit his limit with this method. With this having seemed to reach the best they could get with, they got to training with the rest of Rias's group to get ready for the upcoming game. While they weren't able to learn what exact type of ground it was going to be on besides being designed around Kyo Academy and probably a normal match against peerages, Issei did learn of a couple of things. This would be Ria's first rating game. Even if it technically wasn't an official one, there was a chance it would be broadcast, and that there was a recently added addition to the games that were known as promotion squares and could allow pawns to promote without going all the way to the enemy's base. Even though they had no proof of it being in the game, Issei was soon putting plans in place in case it was. The whole of Ria's peerage had learned early on that he was the best strategist out of the group, and after hearing of what plans he was able to come up with, they were happy for it. After Issei and Ria had worked out their differences, him and the rest of the orc had slowly worked on their relationship with him too, and was on its way to being good friends. With a plan in place for the upcoming rating game, the group was ready to go when the time came. The day before the rating game, Sona traded Issei to Ria's, which happened right as Riser came by to see if Ria's had changed her mind, though was surprised to see them making the trade, and even more so when he learned why they were able to. Though he did say he would have allowed Issei to fight in the match for Ria's without going this route. Most of the group that happened to be in the orc at the time figured that knew anything about Riser figured it might have been due to Tiamat being in the room too in her human form, knowing how he was. Scene skip. Hoping to keep things from getting too hectic for his son, Serzech had been able to talk his parents and the Fenix family into not broadcasting the game outside of wherever anyone from the two families or the peerages cleared to watch it might be watching from, as long as they could record the game and play it at later dates. The only ones outside of the heads of the families and Serzech were Issei's peerage, Tiamat, and Sona with her queen. Grafia, for her part, was the announcer for the game, and after getting the game going, moved to sit by her husband to watch her son in action. Outside of Serzech and Sona, no one else knew that Gasper had been released and would be a part of this game, and most hoped or figured he would use the powers he had as the son of Serzech and Grafia from the beginning. The design for the game was an exact replica of Kyo Academy, with Ria's base being the orc while Riser was stationed inside the student council office. What nobody expected to happen though was for Matsuda and Madohoma to move out first towards the gym. While the two had gotten a lot stronger from all the training they had gone through, most of the adults figured they were just a distraction at best. But they were more surprised when Akino popped out of the orc and started sending bolts of lightning off towards Matsuda, who then used his sacred gear to send the power in through the door to the gym to Madohoma, who had left the gym door open when he went inside, who then used the power up from the lightning to be able to fight on par with the pawns that were sent to secure the gym. After sending 5 blasts of lightning towards the two, Matsuda fell back while Akino moved to fly over the gym to watch for anyone else moving into position at the gym. Right as she got into position, Madohoma was able to take down the 4 pawns he was facing after 5 minutes, with Grafia announcing. Not long after, before Kiba rushed out to help make sure his teammate gets back to base safely, and after dropping him off at the orc, moved onto the forest as Akino blew up the gym, taking it away from anyone being able to use it again. Meanwhile, VIP room. Watching the game in the VIP room, Sona was slowly beginning to understand what the plan had to be for the game, since she was in the room when it was first brought up. She figured that they were trying to push for time for Issei to gain enough boosts and put his plan into motion. Something that he hadn't explained to anyone as far as she knew, as he wanted to make it a surprise to everyone, though he did make sure to warn there was a chance that Riser would be able to get out of it. As Kiba moved onto the forest, she looked over to the adults and could tell most were wondering what was going on and didn't know what she knew, so she decided to see what would happen next as Kiba came across the next batch of enemies. Back to the game. As Kiba started fighting the next group of pieces, 2 knights, and the rest of the pawns, Serzech started to notice something in the movements of Riser's pieces. It was subtle, but he could tell that most of the hits that should have been hitting Kiba weren't, so started to realize that Gasper had to be helping him out by slowing down the reaction times of Riser's pieces. Knowing that Gasper could turn into bats, he started looking around the area they were fighting in and happened to come across a bat just off to the side of the fight, but close enough he could use his gear to help his team out. And Serzech had to give his son credit, figuring he was the one that came up with the idea. He could also tell though that Gasper couldn't control his powers all the way, as some of the attacks that the pawns were throwing still did some damage or didn't slow down as much, or Kiba's attacks weren't as strong sometimes. Though he was able to beat the group after 12 minutes passed. By this point, Riser was starting to get understandably furious at how little his peerage had been able to do, so sent out the rest of his peerage. Right after he gave the order, his sister Ravel requested permission to go and watch the fight, which after a few seconds of consideration he agreed, but ordered her not to enter conflict while he ordered his queen to protect Ravel, with the group reaching Kiba before he could fall back any. Kiba for his part signaled to Gasper to not help anymore and preserve his strength, both because Kiba was tired and knew he couldn't deal with this group easily, even with help, as well as he wanted to keep Gasper as help for the rest of the time before Issei could move, as he did his best to fend off the 2 rooks and bishop who were attacking him, though right as he was about to go down, Matsuda and Madohoma showed up to give the group some more time as they weren't quite to where Issei could move. "Didn't think we'd let you have all the fun, did you?" Matsuda said as he helped push the group back while making Ravel get annoyed at what was happening. "Hurry up, girls, or Riser's gonna be pissed at how long this is taking," she said, not happy how long things have been taking before getting a yes Ravel from the girls, who upped the ante, but it still took them 5 minutes to finish off the 3. Rafia said, starting to get a little worried for her sister-in-law's chances in winning, right as Lord Phoenix had a comment for Sirzech that had him smiling to the confusion of the Phoenix head. Well, it looks like this fight might be over if your sister and older son don't come out and fight soon. Her peerage has done well so far, but I don't think it will be enough. Normally I would agree with you, but believe me when I say this fight hasn't truly started, he said, getting a confused look from Lord Phoenix. It took me a bit, but I finally figured out what my son is doing. Let's just say that he has a way to gain power over time, and the peerage is giving him that to prepare for the final fight. Well, let's just hope it's an interesting one, Lord Phoenix said as he turned back to the battle, wondering what Issei had in store for the fight, right as Aquino entered the fray to continue the battle and was able to go toe-to-toe with Yubaluna, who was Riser's second strongest behind him. Ravel was stunned at how far Aquino was able to go in the fight, as well as even able to dodge Yubaluna's powerful blasts of magic while also whittling down the rooks and bishops she was facing and seemingly taunting them before taking those three down, before going after Yubaluna herself, always trying to keep her on her toes without taking her out. It wasn't until Ravel realized that she had just been standing there and was preparing to step in and help with the fight that Aquino paused the fight to ask a question. Do either of you know how long this game has been going on for? She asked, getting a stunned look from the two. What? It's an important question. Ravel could only huff at the lull. An idiotic question. I have to admit your team has put up a valiant effort since it's taken us 30 minutes just to get this far, but it will all end soon, she said before she noticed the smirk coming from Aquino. 30 minutes, you say? Then there is no point in finishing this battle. Good job, Gasper, your job's done for now. Surprising the other two as they didn't know who she was talking to as Aquino stood down from the fight, knowing that the main fight was about to start. Who's Gasper? Yubaluna said as Gasper flew off right in front of the group, headed back to the Orc building, while Aquino smiled as she could feel Issei and Rias finally making their move. Aquino, for her part, flew off towards the student council room to watch the next scene unfold. When Issei and Rias made it to where Riser's base was, they could see him lounging in one of the chairs in the room, not even caring that they were near him, as Issei nodded to Rias and stepped back as she built up her power of destruction to destroy the building around him, which finally made him move. Well, guess it's time to finish this battle, Riser said as he finally moved, pushing the rubble off of him as Issei moved forwards, taking Rias's place. You're right, and I have just the move to do it too, he said as he let his ice magic flow out of him in a wide circle, with a magic circle popping up underneath him. Right after the circle popped up, everyone nearby could feel the temperature immediately drop around Issei and Riser, while Riser tried to light his flames to keep himself warm, but even he could tell they weren't doing much to help. He couldn't also lose the feeling of wondering how the boy had gotten this strong enough for chills to travel down his spine. You should feel honored. I've had this attack in the back of my head for a while, but this is the first time it will be used. Absolute Zero, Frozen Wasteland. While his magical powers weren't enough yet to be considered where he could reach absolute zero temperatures, he knew it was a good chance in the future he could with both his ancestry and the powers he got through D-Drag. Sona could only smile as she caught on to his plans for the first time and knew that this was the move he'd been saving. Issei's about to win this game. Surely you are joking. There's no way he could get around Riser's instant regeneration. Normally you would be right, though knowing Issei he would figure out a way somehow, but that isn't the only way to force someone to retire. Look around the two. Issei's generating cold enough temperatures in that area for ice to start forming. If he can keep it up long enough, he should be able to freeze even Riser, she said, getting stunned looks from everyone in the room as they realized what she was saying. Knocking him out by freezing him? If he can do that, I'll have massively underestimated your son Sirzech, especially since he only recently has gotten his devil's heritage back. You're right, but I knew he would find some way to win this match, and I'm sure this was his plan all along. Now just to see if he has enough power built up to freeze Riser altogether, or if he'll be able to wiggle out of it, Sirzech replied, amazed at what his son was doing but happy all the same as the group continued to watch and see what happened.